Deku carried past the life of Anos, meeting him in a blue, lit throne hall where the Demon King coaches him to be himself, not a copy. Hunted by a cult that urges him to take the throne, Izuku burns their notes and chooses a different path. Welcome to my channel. This is What If Izuku was the reincarnation of Anos. This is written by me, so please give me feedback on this story so I can improve and leave suggestions for the next video. And I have a Patreon where I upload uncensored and spicy content, so make sure to check out. Let's jump right into the video.
The first time the heir remembered his name, it was on the edge of the school's roof, where rust ate the railing and the wind made a keening sound along the screws. Izuku Midoriya pressed his palms to metal gone powdery and watched the city like a constellation of choices he'd already failed to make. Down there, other people's futures pulsate quirks like small suns underneath jackets and smiles. His own future felt like a moth pinned under glass. Bright, still, admired only for what it never learned to do. You can't be a hero without a quirk, Kaken had said, same as always, but today the words stuck. Not because they were new. Because they weren't. Izuku's fingers curled. The railing groaned, a sound like a throat trying to swallow. He blinked and looked down. The spot under his hands had caved inward, metal warping around his grip as if it were wax in firelight. He went very still. He'd studied enough to know what was impossible. The wind shifted. Somewhere far off, a siren wrote the city's heartbeat across the rooftops. He felt a twinciness on his skin, and once deeper, like the sound was brushing a string that ran through his chest and off into a tunnel no one could see. Something opened. He didn't see a door. It was more like the suggestion of one. A dark axis lifted in his clean, cold, vertical. He tasted iron on his tongue, a flavor with a word inside it. Not a definition. A memory of a definition, like his mouth had practiced it in a life measured in stone and shadow and moonlit thrones. Voldigoad. It wasn't Spakenthy or wasn't a voice, but the name had a weight that settled on his shoulders like a cape he'd never worn and yet remembered the pattern of. The syllables weren't Japanese. They weren't any language he'd studied. They were older than streets. When he blinked, the world came back into its ordinary edges, but the weight stayed. His knuckles whitened. The railing bent further with a tired bending shriek. Izuku exhaled a small terrified laugh and stepped back, fingers shaking. No. His nerves felt like they were too crowded with electricity, but not the nervous organized kind, as if someone had braided lines through his bones while he slept. He looked down at his hands. Nothing had changed. No smoke. No glow. Just skin he knew. Calluses from pencils. A small half-moon scar from spilling kettle water. The pigeon landed 2 feet away and stared, the slanted gold of its eye annoyingly calm. Okay, Izuku whispered to the bird, and to no one, either I'm developing a late quirk concept which is statistically negligible. Or I'm. The word waited. Voldigoad. When it arrived in his throat, it brought another with it not a proper noun but a principle, a posture. Authority. Not the humankind painted on badges. The other one, the kind gravity used when it asked oceans to rise. Izuku staggered until his back touched a concrete vent. He pressed his palms flat to the cool surface and breathed. On the exhale, something inside him answered back, not in words but in geometry. A circle, 6 segments, a silent space at the center where a name would anchor. He didn't scream. He added that to the tiny list of things he was proud of today. Did not scream in front of a pigeon while possibly hallucinating ancestral metaphysics. The door to the roof clanked open behind him. I thought I'd find you up here, young man. All Might didn't step out at once. He leaned in the doorway, shoulders too big for the frame, his smile the same one that had lived on Izuku's bedroom wall since he was 4. In person the smile had details posters forgot. The little crease that meant he'd had to practice it on bad days. The way his eyes softened, not when he saw fear, but when he saw someone who hadn't let fear win yet. Izuku did what he always did around All Might. He tried to stand straighter and immediately got awkward about his limbs. Why, you're All Might, he said, because the obvious sometimes deserved respect. So they tell me, All Might said, stepping forward. His presence filled the roof without shrinking anything else. I saw you earlier with that sludge villain mess. Quick thinking, grabbing that man's briefcase to distract the creature. And quick feet. Small, he hesitated. Small hero moves. It wasn't a lie, exactly, but there was something in All Might's tone like he'd lost a step on a staircase he thought he knew. I didn't help, Izuku blurted, throat tight. Not really. Bakugo, he got caught because he always walks behind the vending machines so the teachers don't see him ditch. I knew that, and too froze. If I was a hero already, if I had something, anything. The weight in his chest shifted, as if it were listening. The name watched the conversation from the shade of the stairwell. Voldigoad. The word felt like a knife laid flat on a blissful, amoral, waiting for a hand to choose a task for it. All Might's smile gentled. You ran toward danger while others ran away. That's not nothing. Yeah, but it's not enough. Izuku swallowed. The wind licked his eyes raw. What if I could be enough? What if I could be dangerous? I mean, he coughed on the clumsy knot of it. What if I could handle dangerous things? All Might tilted his head, not in confusion but in permission. Izuku looked at his hands. The memory of bent metal sat in them like a confession. Something changed. I haven't told anyone because it sounds crazy even in my own notebook and I write down anything. Everything. But when I touched the railing he gestured. The dent in the metal held the shape of his fingers like a fossil. I didn't pull. I just decided and the metal agreed. All Might didn't rush the silence. The city sounded busy and far away. That's a strong word, he said at last. Decided. Most quirks are loud. Yours sounds like a sentence. Izuku blinked. A sentence. A statement that reality is willing to momentarily accept, All Might said, eyes narrowing a little in thought, as if he were peering at Izuku's outline and checking the stitching. There are dangerous quirks that work like that. Dangerous heroes too. And villains. Izuku tensed. The word villain flipped a switch in the weight under his ribs. A distant door shut. A throne room emptied. The pigeon ruffled its feathers and flew, as if it didn't like what the roof felt like anymore. I'm not, Izuku started. I didn't say you were. All Might's voice softened. I said that kind of power asks a question of its holder. Izuku breathed carefully because too much breath made the world a little thinner, like paper wet with ink. What if I can't answer it right? Then you practice answering until you can, All Might said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. With help. Help sounded like a hand and like a warning. The weight in Izuku's chest turned its face toward him. He could not see it exactly. He felt it the way you feel a storm from inside a house, the barometer dropping, the pressure paying attention to your windows. And with it came something else. Not a stranger. A mirror that remembered more years than Izuku had lived. Authority is a tool. The thought wasn't words, and yet it was. People make thrones. Not the other way around. And then, as if the mirror were trying out a joke he'd once loved. Try not to die. It complicates the math. Izuku blinked hard. The wind paused. The railing, already bent, groaned a little further as if it politely wanted to be included. Tell me, Midori, All Might said, stepping close enough that Izuku could see the tiny white lines of old scars at the corner of his jaw. If you had power, real, dangerous power, what's the first promise you'd make to yourself? Izuku didn't have to think. The promise had already been putting its shoes on since the moment the name found him. He could feel it as an emptiness shaped like a choice. I won't kill, he said. The words were small but perfect, like the tip of a needle. All Might nodded slowly, not surprised. And the second. I won't take choices away. Not even from villains. Not even if it would be easier. Izuku's throat burned. He remembered Bakugo's face when the sludge clung to his eyes, the wild anger that was really terror. I won't dominate. And the third. All Might's gaze had shifted in that way it did during interviews when a question mattered most. The smile had moved aside to make room for a teacher's seriousness. Izuku didn't know he was going to say it until he did, but when it came, it was as if someone else had already carved a groove for it inside his bones. If I can bring one person back, ever, I will. But only once. And I'll carry the cost forever. All Might's pupils tightened. For a heartbeat something arrived on his face that wasn't sadness or pride, but the intersection of both, a place where hope had to carry grief in its pocket to buy anything real. Those are heavy promises. I know. Izuku didn't, not fully. But he knew enough to say he did. The weight in his chest apprehended like a king, but like a craftsman setting down a tool after testing its edge. Then you need a way to hold them, All Might said gently. Words are strong. But words break. The geometry in Izuku's min circle, 6 segments, the silent center brightened. Namecraft didn't feel like a quirk. It felt like a way of remembering the world's shape long enough to talk to it without raising your voice. I can write it, Izuku said, and his hands, treacherous, shook with relief at having something to do. Not on paper. On me. All Might nodded once, decisive. Good. Do it somewhere you'll see every morning. Here, Izuku said, laying 4 fingers flat against the left side of his ribs, where his heart knocked like a kid too excited to knock politely. Left. Name first, then the promises. All Might's smile returned, smaller and truer. I'll walk you home. I'm okay, Izuku said, then corrected himself because if All Might wanted to walk you home, you didn't argue with fate when it finally acted like a gentleman. I'd like that. They didn't speak much on the stairs. The city's skin was thinner, now that Izuku knew the wind had a name for him. Every sound felt annotated. Every shadow had a version of him in it that had learned different lessons earlier in its life. None of those versions knew his mother's hands, though, the way they kept making movements after the cooking was done, like she was still stirring air to make sure nothing stuck to the bottom. He smelled miso halfway down the block. Inko Midoriya opened the door with the chain still on. She unhooked it when she saw All Might and closed the door, then opened it again, now properly, as if she needed a second draft of her reaction. Izuku. It's okay, Mom. Izuku stepped in and took his shoes off. The apartment had that soft mess that only families achieve lists taped to the fridge, a plant that refused to die out of stubbornness, a couch with an indentation that remembered their backs. All Might bowed slightly to her, formal and kind. I apologize for intruding. Your son had an encounter with a villain today. He carried himself with courage. He left out the rooftop, the bending metal. Izuku noticed and loved him for it a little, instantly and permanently, the way kids sometimes love adults who understand the size of a secret. Inko pressed a hand to her mouth. Her fingers trembled before she forced them to stillness. He always does, she said, and shot her son a look that was three things at once. I'm proud. I'm scared. I saw the dent in the railing when I hung laundry last week and pretended I didn't. Dinner was small bowls because big bowls make you tell big truths too fast. They ate with the television on low, a soft blur of weather and bright anchors with teeth like promises. All Might sat on the floor because the couch looked like it might try to turn him into a folded letter. When the dishes were done, All Might stood. I should go, he said, which in a different life might have been a lie because a symbol belongs to people who need it. Tonight it wasn't. He had given Izuku and Inko a quiet. That was enough. Thank you. For Inko's fingers fluttered helplessly, then closed on each other like hands clasped in prayer. For walking him home. All Might inclined his head. The world can be heavy, he said to her, not to Izuku. But he's learning where to put his hands. The door closed. Izuku and his mother stood in the small clean silence left behind by an impossible person being briefly ordinary near your shoes. Inko turned to him. Your hands. She lifted them, her touch as careful as you handle a postcard someone wrote you 10 years ago that still smells like the room it was written in. They're shaking. I think I'm Izuku searched for a word that was not becoming and not waking. Remembering. Is it good? The question was a mother's. Not the world's, not history's. She wanted to know if the body she'd made was hurting. It can be. Izuku swallowed. If I do it right. Inko nodded once, then twice more, a rhythm she used when she needed to fold a feeling into a smaller drawer to deal with it properly later. Do you need tea? Or paper? Or, she hesitated. Paint. Izuku stared. Paint. What else do you write a promise with that won't crumple? Her mouth tilted up. Come on. They found an old brush from a class project in the drawer with takeout menus. Inko boiled water anyway, because hands do things even when hearts are busy. Izuku took his shirt off and shivered not from cold, but because the air felt like it was thinking about him again. The geometry in his mind spread its arms. Circle. 6 segments. Silent center. He dipped the brush and pressed the first stroke into his skin. The name wanted to be written in a script that remembered mountains. The brush couldn't do that, not really, but intent could. He drew characters that were not characters, lines that were not lines. They were agreements. I will answer to this. I will be this when the choice is loud. He wrote Voldigoad where his heart could hear it. The apartment dimmed, not because the lights changed, but because the ink drank attention. The world leaned in for a second, like a friend listening at a cafe. His skin hummed, not pain. Calibration. The paint sank, not staining so much as settling under the top layer like a signature beneath glass. Inko watched with her hands pressed together like she was warming them at a small fire. She didn't ask what the name meant, not because she didn't want to know, but because she trusted that sometimes meaning came best if you let it sit first. The promises, she said softly. Izuku breathed out. The brush shook for the first stroke, then steadied. He painted 3 short seals around the circle's inner rim, each with a single idea nestled inside. No killing. The seal smelled like rain hitting dust. No domination. The seal felt like loosening a knot you could tighten and choosing not to. One life returned. This one was cold. Not cruel. Just honest. It settled into his skin with the finality of a door quietly latching. When he finished, the circle pulsed once. The room sighed. Inko reached out and pressed her fingers just outside the paint. It's warm. It will cool, Izuku said, surprised he knew that. He rewrapped the brush. The television murmured about sports scores that mattered intensely to people in small rooms like this one all over the city. He wanted to ask 100 questions and at the same time wanted to go stand outside where the air could read his new name and decide if it wanted to keep saying it. In the morning, Inko said, reading him like grocery lists and fever charts and the face he made when he wanted to be brave for her. In the morning, we can check the seals. Tonight, you sleep. Kings make worse decisions than bakers when they're hungry. Izuku laughed, startled and grateful. The laugh felt right in his chest, and for a heartbeat, he saw a silhouette laugh with him, a man with black hair and eyes like winter and summer arguing politely. The silhouette nodded as if approving of the joke. He slept. His dreams were not dreams so much as old rooms with good acoustics. He walked through halls where torches burned with a sedate blue that did not need to flicker to prove it was fire. Columns carried weight like it was an honor. In the center of a wider space, a throne waited that no one had bothered to dust because dust knew better. The young man sat on the edge of it like a student waiting for a train. He looked at Izuku without surprise. "You're not me," Izuku said. He knew he was right the way you know which shoes are yours in a pile. The young man's mouth tilted, not into kindness and not into cruelty. Into capability. "And you're not me. Is that helpful?" Izuku asked, because sometimes the only way to deal with impossible company was to be slightly rude on purpose, so you remembered you were allowed to be. "It will be," the man said. He tapped 2 fingers against the armrest. "Show me the promises." Izuku lifted his shirt in a dream where clothing obeyed a logic of relevance. The seals glowed in a way that was more adjective than light. The man leaned in, not with hunger. With approval. "Good," he said. "A crown is just a heavy circle without constraints." "Are you?" Izuku hesitated. "Are you happy?" The man smiled, small and sharp. "I am satisfied. Happiness is for people who pick it. Satisfaction is for those who build it." "Are we dangerous?" Izuku asked next, because if he was going to spend the rest of his life with a word living under his ribs, he wanted to know what kind of emergency kit to pack. "We are as dangerous as our promises," the man said. "More, when someone tries to take them." Izuku thought of Kaken, of the sludge villain, of All Might's eyes when he asked for the 3rd promise. "What do I call you? When I need advice?" The man stood. The throne behind him did not loom. It adjusted to absence like it was proud. "Call me what you wrote. It will do. But remember, I am a memory of a function. You are the function now." Izuku woke with sunlight on the seals like an unearned blessing. He lifted his hand and covered the name. The warmth had faded to a steady presence, no louder than his pulse, no quieter than his conscience. The day pried its way into the apartment with the confidence of bread smell. Inko had already left for her early shift. The sticky note on the fridge wore her handwriting. "Leftover miso plus rice. Proud of you. Don't forget your green notebook. P.S. If the paint tries to move, ask it to wait until after breakfast." Izuku made the rice into a bowl with an egg and the last of the scallions. While he ate, he opened the green notebook to a fresh page and wrote at the top in small neat letters. "Abyssal Authority Baseline Observations." Underneath, he wrote. Root sense. Feels like reading the shape of a quirk, not its name. Try not to stare. People feel stared at even when it's metaphysical. Short budget. Intuition says I have 5 things I can spend daily without getting a headache that makes numbers cry. Note. Find less silly unit than things. Null sigil. Can cancel 1 law on contact for an instant. Probably eats 3 units. Maybe call them shards. Reconstruction. Micro repairs. Not miracles. Good for stabilizing. Abyssal step. Short displacement. Nerve strain with repetition. He paused. The word shards felt right, like stepping into shoes and finding they were already broken in. He drew a circle in the margin with 5 small diamonds around it and labeled them shard pool. He colored one in experimentally and felt his skull ask a polite question about whether this was necessary before breakfast. He erased the fill guiltily, even though erasing ink was a metaphor and not a practical choice. His phone buzzed. A notification from the school group chat bleated the usual mix of homework complaints and Bakugo threatening to become an arson god if they kept misspelling his name with emojis. Izuku typed a careful good morning with an emoji that communicated both "please don't explode" and "I brought you notes." He slid his notebook into his bag next to pencil case, rolled up rain jacket and the brush he'd cleaned last night. He wanted to bring the paint too, but decided not to develop any habits that would make school security guards ask him to open more bags in the future. On the street, the air was bright with bicycles and the smell of road paint warmed by sun. He tested the edge of root sense as he walked, cautious, like testing a tooth with your tongue after the dentist says be gentle. The world answered by offering him small essays and refusing the footnotes. The bakery woman's quirk was a warm swelling thing just made muscled. Izuku smiled because of course it was. The delivery man's quirk hung around his shoulders like a belt you could unbuckle and buckle across distances. A kid with a skateboard had a quirk that itched like static and sang like a kettle about to. Power did not make people beautiful. People did that with the way they used it. At the school gate, the daily choreography had already begun. Stragglers pretending to hurry, clusters forming by habit, teachers with mugs that announced what kind of morning they'd had. Bakugo stood with his foot up on the low wall, aggressive peace in his posture. His eyes found Izuku with the practiced ease of a predator who didn't need to be told where watering holes are. Deku, Bakugo said, and managed to make the nickname both a taunt and a weather report. His gaze flicked to Izuku's chest, then away, not because he'd seen the seal. Izuku had a shirt on that made sure of that, but because instinct sometimes sees before eyes do. Good morning, Izuku said, honestly, because he'd slept and because honesty was a good place to start when you were about to lie to a lot of people about a thing under your skin. Don't act like yesterday didn't happen, Bakugo snapped, and then, more quietly, as if a small person deep inside him had borrowed the steering wheel while the big person wasn't looking, you ran toward me. You were stuck, Izuku said. That's not a good place to be. Bakugo clicked his tongue. Whatever. Don't get soft. I'm still going to beat you to UA. You always beat me at running, Izuku said, which was true in at least 3 senses. You've got a head start. Bakugo squinted at him, as if deciding whether to be offended or pleased. His quirk crackled at his palms like impatient applause. Izuku felt the shape of it in his root sense and, for the first time, did not flinch from the rawness. He respected it the way you respect a thunderstorm. By not holding up umbrellas made of forks. Classes were unkind to time. Hours pooled and then vanished, leaving chalk on fingers and an ache in the neck. Izuku took notes that looked like other kids' notes and, in the margins, drew small circles with diamonds when no one was looking. When the bell finally rang, his body had accepted the seal as part of its furniture. He cut down the side alley to avoid a crowd and stopped because the alley had decided to host a narrative event without asking him. 3 boys with the bored cruelty of unpracticed villains had an older man pinned against a dumpster. The man's quirk fluttered along his wrists like strings trying to find an instrument to belong to. The boys were wearing the kind of confidence you buy in groups when you don't know your size yet. Izuku's heart thudded. The seals under his ribs warmed in recognition. No killing. No domination. 1 life returned. None of those applied yet. That was good. That meant this was still a small problem. Small problems were where you learned how to hold big tools. Hey, Izuku said, which was not tactically clever but ethically accurate. Leave him alone. The biggest boy turned, his face already arranged into the sneer they practiced in bathroom mirrors. You a hero, string bean? Izuku let the question float past. He did 2 things at once. He stepped forward with the kind of stance Aizawa-sensei would later, in a better future, call not terrible, and he touched root sense to the boy's quirk. It felt like chewing tin foil. The boy's quirk wanted to make his saliva caustic. Nice. Izuku suppressed a smile and decided not to let him know he knew. I'm a witness, Izuku said, and lifted his phone just enough. Which is worse. The smallest boy cursed and took a step toward him, overcorrecting for fear with volume. Izuku marked the distance in his head. Abyssal step would close it in a blink. He didn't use it. He would use his feet like a person until the fight made not using it the worse violence. The big boy lunged. Izuku moved his head and shoulder just enough for the punch to spend itself on air. He tapped the inside of the boy's elbow with 2 fingers, where any limb becomes a question if you ask it right. The arm buckled obligingly. The boy swore more sincerely and stumbled back. The smallest boy spat because he thought that was his brand, and Izuku pivoted. The spit sizzled on the pavement where his shoe had been. Izuku's stomach did a small backflip. A caustic saliva quirk. He'd guessed wrong. Not the big one. This one. Notes, Midoriya. Better calibration next time. Okay, Izuku said aloud, partly to himself. Time to practice. He drew a quick namecraft sigil with his finger in the eye. Nothing showy, just a little hook of intent that tied the next 3 seconds to his earlier promise to his mother to be home for dinner. The air caught the hook because promises like mothers are undefeatable in magic and life. The smallest boy reared back for a bigger spit. Izuku, who had drawn pictures of heroes for 10 years and knew all the panels where they misjudged range, stepped forward through his own fear and tapped the boy's jaw up with a knuckle. Not violent. Just decisive. The spit hit the inside of the boy's mouth and he gagged, eyes watering, more betrayed by biology than by Izuku. The big boy lunged again. Izuku slid. The second boy, who had decided the alley wasn't fun anymore, grabbed his friend's sleeve and pulled. For half a second the 3 of them composed a sculpture of bad choices. The older man took the moment to run exactly as fast as someone who had spent a life not asking for help would run. Izuku let him go. People didn't owe you gratitude for your ethics. Izuku planted his feet and looked at the 3 boys, as if he had a badge he didn't need to show. This is the part, he said softly, where you decide what kind of people you're going to be when no one writes about you. The big boy sneered again because sneering is an addiction. But his eyes flicked to the phone in Izuku's hand and then to the place where the spit had burned the pavement and his posture lost a centimeter of height. They left together in that half-run half-walk people use when they want to look like they aren't fleeing. The alley exhaled. Izuku did too. His hands shook afterward, the way hands should when they've correctly catalogued a risk. He counted his shard pool. None spent. Good. His ribs warmed. The seals were pleased. He turned to see if the older man had dropped anything and found instead a piece of paper that had not been there before, folded into a precise triangle like an invitation that wanted to look like litter. He crouched. The hair on his arms rose. The paper smelled faintly of stone that had never seen rain. Inside, written in a script his eyes pretended not to understand and his bones did, was a line. "Take back your throne, Anno's Voldigoad." Izuku stood slowly. The world didn't tilt. It did, however, add a new axis that all the old axes would now have to rotate around. He folded the paper smaller, then smaller again, until it was nothing, and pushed it into the deep pocket outside his heart. No, he said aloud, not to the boys, not to the man who had run, not to the city that kept inventing tests for people and calling it traffic. I'm busy. The air listened. The name under his ribs listened too. It laughed, delighted, as if someone had just put a crown on a kitchen table and started eating breakfast next to it, like that was the correct place for such things to be. When he got home, Inko was already there, earlier than she should have been, a plastic bag with discount oranges on the counter. She looked at his face and saw the alley's edges on it. He lifted his shirt. The seals were holding. The name was quiet. Was it a good first day? She asked. It was a day, he said, honest and human. That's how you get to the good one, she said, and kissed his hair with the exact amount of pressure required to convince a boy who was also a memory of a king that he was mostly, and importantly, her son. That night, Izuku took the paper out and burned it over the sink. The flame moved politely around the script as if it were afraid to be rude. He watched until ash became a different way of being paper and then flushed it, not like erasing, but like sending a message downriver to the sea. No thank you. The seals hummed when he slept. The city dreamed back. And somewhere under a warehouse no one rented anymore, 3 people said a name in a circle and waited for a door to open that would be polite enough to knock first. The smoke detector in the kitchen had an attitude about ritual flames. Izuku waved a dish towel at it until it agreed to find another hobby. The ash curled down the sink like the tail of a comet. Somewhere in that curl, the word no continued to exist at room temperature. He washed his hands, dried them on the loud towel with cartoon vegetables, and checked the seal. The ink lay quiet under skin, not faded, not proud. When he touched the inner rim where the 3 short vows nested, the room's corners felt more honest, as if edges had decided to line up for roll call. He slept well enough to believe in morning again. The text that woke him wasn't from school. It was from a number his phone insisted it didn't know and his bones insisted it did. Meet me where the sea holds its breath. A.M. Izuku snorted into his pillow. All Might texted like a proverb that wanted a cape. Dagaba Municipal Beach was where old appliances went to die and hopeful joggers went to promise themselves they'd jog tomorrow. He left a note for his mom because Inko had trained him to understand that secrets shouldn't include logistics. Then he grabbed his green notebook, a granola bar that tasted like virtue biting your tongue, and took the train that always smelled faintly of yesterday's umbrellas. Dagaba Beach wore the morning like a shrug. Piles of trash made silhouettes where seagulls practiced arrogance. The water did a tired impression of wanting to be blue. And there, in the thin shadow of a refrigerator that had given up on food and now specialized in rust, stood a man who looked like All Might after a successful diet and a questionable haircut. Toshinori Yagi didn't wave. He lifted 2 fingers in an embarrassed salute and then immediately coughed blood into a handkerchief like it was an afterthought and not a thesis. Are you okay? Izuku asked, because even kings have to start sentences somewhere. The fine okay, Toshinori said, grimacing fondly. His voice, filtered through his non-symbol body, sounded more like a person and less like a billboard. I wish I could say this was a new development, but alas, I've been arguing with my lungs for years. Come walk. Trash listens better if you move around it. They walked. The sand grabbed at their shoes with polite insistence. I wanted to apologize, Toshinori said finally, as the gulls debated politics. On the roof, I had the shape of a conversation ready from thousands of hopeful kids. I tried to fit you into it. It did not fit. Izuku stared at the horizon where the water almost but not quite forgave the sky. Most conversations try to put me somewhere. And you usually try to be gracious about it. Toshinori's eyes creased. I am asking you to be rude with me if I do it again. Izuku huffed a laugh. Okay. I'll schedule a rudeness lot. Excellent. Toshinori stopped near a pile that had been a sofa once and now was an idea of sitting. I need to tell you something that isn't public. You will know eventually. Better you know with the correct music. He unbuttoned his shirt as if it were an apology and revealed scars that looked like a map where someone had tried to erase a country and the country had said no. Izuku's stomach colded. The scars weren't grotesque. They were loyal to an injury, to a choice, to time. This Toshinori said, touching the long indentation like it was an old friend. You keep answering texts from even when they insist on sending you chain messages, is why All Might is part-time now. My time is borrowed. A student will inherit my mantle. The air made a small sound inside Izuku. Not the big word the rooftop had given him. A smaller one that still understood leverage. Ofa, Izuku said, and the acronym tasted like hot metal in his mouth. One for all, the candle that makes itself into a torch and keeps going because the world loves stories where fire learns to share. Toshinori blinked once, then laughed softly. You are either very informed or very good at naming things. Ofa, Izuku said, embarrassed, then not. He swallowed. Are you? Is this the part where you ask me if I wanted? Toshinori's thin shoulders attempted a shrug made of honesty. It was the part on the roof. Before I knew that if I handed you a sword, you would melt it down and make a bridge with the metal. Izuku looked down at his hands. The seal warmed under his palm as if to say thank you for remembering the project plans. I can't take it, he said quietly, and expected to feel a small grief tremor because 10-year-old Izuku with his All Might posters would have tried to swallow the sun just to hold the light for someone else. The tremor arrived, nodded politely, and sat down in the second row, pleased to witness, but not to perform. I know, Toshinori said, and he sounded relieved instead of hurt. I would have loved to mentor you into that mantle. But I love more that you won't let me. Sometimes the strongest promise is not I will, but I want. They stood while the ocean wrote its name down and erased it and wrote it again. I still want your mentorship, Izuku said finally, words careful, like putting a teacup down at the exact center of a saucer. Not because I want a shortcut. Because I need a human measure for my choices. Books can tell you what right is. People can't tell you how much it weighs. Toshinori smiled with the kind of pleasure that chooses dignity over theatrics. Then here is the ask I can make. Let me teach you how to be strong without muscle. And strong with it, when you must be. Izuku nodded so that the yes would be written in his body as well as his voice. What do we start with? Toshinori gestured wide. Calories and trash. Izuku followed the hand. You want me to clean the beach. I want you to move a thing from where it can't help anyone to where it can, Toshinori said serenely. You think you are coming here to train strength. You are coming here to practice choices. Every time you pick up a piece of trash, you will want to use your fancy steps. He wiggled his thin fingers as if performing a puppet show called Metaphysical Temptations. But you will use your hands. You will make your back sore. You will leave at least one thing exactly where it is because today is not for winning everything. And while you do that, we will talk about ethics and how to breathe when you'd rather break. Izuku felt a laugh come up from someplace that had recently been dusted by tears. This is extremely unglamorous. Yes, Toshinori said with deep satisfaction. Heroism is unglamorous. We only cosplay it as shiny so people will keep funding the costumes. Izuku took a breath that recorded the place in his lungs where air learned to cooperate with courage. Okay. I accept the curriculum. Excellent. Toshinori fished a cheap whistle from his pocket and blew it to the visible disgust of 3 gulls. We begin with a rule. You will not use your authority tricks unless a life is in immediate danger. You will name that rule aloud now so it hears you. Izuku straightened. Naming a rule aloud was not namecraft, not quite, but it helped the world file the paperwork. I will not use abyssal step, null sigil, or reconstruction to move or fix trash, Izuku said, and the beach seemed to flick an eyebrow at him, doubtful and impressed. I will use my legs and my hands, and a dolly we will borrow from the uncle who runs the hardware store. Toshinori blinked. Do you have an uncle who runs a hardware store? No, Izuku admitted. But I'm manifesting one. It worked. The morning fidgeted into afternoon and then invited early evening to come watch 2 people move things on purpose. Toshinori didn't lift much. He directed, clapped twice at good form, told 2 terrible jokes, then 3 good ones. Izuku learned how to deadlift refrigerators with a back that would still like him in 30 years. Sweat wrote polite essays down his spine. His hands tried to blister and then decided against it, hypnotized by small victories. He broke the rule once. The sand under the north pile looked like an uncommitted Aquintancelis, but pretending to be supportive. When Izuku heaved at a toppled wardrobe, the bottom slid. The old TV stacked behind it lurched forward with the patience of gravity. A kid 12 maybe had been scrounging along the edge of piles for scrap to sell and had the particular bad timing of choosing that exact 5 seconds to bend and retie his shoe. Izuku did not think. He step-edged on everything inside him, translating intention into position. From 2 meters away to between the TV and the kid, shoulder braced, hand out. The impact rode through his bones with a polite thunderclap and taught his nerves a quick lesson about friction. He didn't try to catch the weight outright. He diverted. The TV struck the sand, cracked a little throat of glass, hissed its discontent, and finished dying where it couldn't crush anyone. The boy scrambled back, eyes cherry wide. Dude, that was how did. Careful, Izuku said, when what he meant was I broke my rule because rules are about people, not furniture. He forced his breath to slow and catalogued the sensation buzzing through his fingers. One shard nibbled by instinct. His limit felt fine, not wobbly, not proud. Good. A small human catch on a day built for human work. Toshinori jogged up as much as a person whose ribs argued could jog. He took one look at the trajectory lines still vibrating in the sand and didn't scold. He nodded once. Good break, he said. You used your body first. You moved the danger away from a person, not toward yourself for points. The kid stood, dusted his knees, and tried to glue his dignity back on with a shrug. I wasn't scared. You can be, later Izuku said, and the kid had the grace to grin a little, surprised. When the sun went orange enough to convince even stubborn gulls to go live somewhere less editorial, they stopped. Toshinori handed him a bottle of water and the good kind of silence. They stood in it, drinking. That step, Toshinori said finally, took something out of you? A sliver. Izuku rolled his fingers, counting the shard pool by feel. A pay attention tax. Nothing dramatic. Good. Toshinori tossed his empty bottle into a bag with the kind of accuracy that makes PE teachers sigh happily in their sleep. You'll keep tally each day. You'll stop before you hit the dramatic. The body is a neighbor. You want it to keep lending you sugar. They met like that for a week, then two. Toshinori brought a whiteboard on wheels he'd stolen from someone's shed with permission. Izuku brought charts he'd drawn in the margins of math exercises. They argued kindly about proportionality. How much force is too much when the law is slower than the harm? Whether mercy done badly turns into indulgence. How to apologize to a person whose fear reminded you of yourself. Izuku learned there was math in virtue and chaos in algorithms. Toshinori learned that when Izuku logged it nervously, but from the place the rooftop had given him sound, made even the trash piles look briefly like sculpture. The seals under his skin developed a habit of humming when he made a decision that matched them. He tried not to depend on the hum to know right from wrong. He wanted to be a person, not a weather vane for metaphysics. On the sixth day, a storm tried to happen and then decided on drizzle. Toshinori couldn't make it. Texted him a picture of a doctor's waiting room with an overachieving plant with a note. Talk to the rain. It likes you. T. Izuku grinned and put his hood up and went to the beach anyway, because you don't skip class when your teacher is a coughing legend and your subject is becoming the kind of person your mother's hands were hoping for. He practiced namecraft at the edge of the water where the foam played undecided. Not big things. He wrote his name in the air and watched the damp wind curve around the letters. He wrote stay over a teetering tower and watched the lowest board reconsider betrayal. He wrote enough over his own impatience and felt his shoulders drop like overdue luggage. He tried reconstruction on a busted cooler, not to return it to life as a cooler that would be show-offy and pointless, but to stabilize a cracked corner so he could drag it without making more plastic knives out of it. The sigil parted like cloth for his fingers and allowed the molecules to remember the version of themselves that had not yet decided to give up. It worked. Barely. He felt the tug. One shard, clean, honest. The world said, sure, kid. This once. On his way home, he cut through the underpass where small vendors sold snacks with names that sounded like running jokes and tasted like home. He bought a skewer of something crisp that had agreed to become sweet at the last second. While he chewed, he touched root scents lightly to the river of people moving through the city. Quirks hummed back like a choir with too many altos. A woman with cloud-white hair had a quirk that made rooms quieter. A courier's calves sang about propulsion. A sleeping man's shoulders thrummed with a quirk that wanted to wake crowds like a trumpet. And one man's quirk felt like a hand slowly closing. Izuku froze without looking like he'd frozen. The man stood by the vending machines with a can of coffee and the posture of someone who had taught himself to slouch like camouflage. His quirk wasn't big. It was tidy, a constriction and release mechanism, precise, like knots designed by a surgeon. Izuku let the sense brush it once, then lifted away. Snooping could turn into theft if you forgot the line. The man raised his coffee to his mouth, then lowered it. He looked directly at Izuku and smiled with half his mouth, like a bow that wanted to be a knife later. Then he turned and walked, unremarkable, into the weather. Izuku let out a breath slowly, as if he were teaching his lungs to count in a new language. Maybe he was paranoid. Maybe he'd just met an orthopedic surgeon with good posture. The seal under his ribs ticked once, then went still. Watch, not chase, it suggested, like a post-it note slid under a door. At home, Inko held up a jar with a label that said hand cream in a font that looked like it came from a nice person. This is for heroes, she said solemnly, daubing his raw knuckles. Heroes who move refrigerators with their feelings. I didn't, Izuku started, then realized she was teasing him and lost the argument, as usual, by smiling. They did bills together at the table. It was one of their rituals. Numbers, pens, tea with too much honey on bad weeks. Money was a tyrant who pretended to be a math problem. Izuku hated it and learned it anyway. When they were done, Inko ran 2 fingers over the seal again like a pianist checking middle C. Still warm when you use it? Warm when I choose right, Izuku said, then added, because honesty wanted good habits, or when I want to have chosen right. Inko's mouth curved. That's the trick, isn't it? We give ourselves credit for intent and punish ourselves for results. Izuku made his face do that half squint he'd learned from watching Toshinori consider hard problems. So. We need a scoreboard that includes both. Exactly. Inko kissed his hair. Dinner in 20. Wash. You smell like democracy. In the bath, Steam tried to sell him on relaxing. He complied enough to let the day unpack itself. He traced the circle on his chest and whispered the names of the edicts, not as spells, not as passwords, but like saying someone's name in an empty house, so the house learns where to send the echoes. No killing. He remembered the TV and the boy and the way he'd moved his body first. No domination. He remembered the smallest alley boy and how easy it would have been to write shut up in the air and make a mouth forget how to spit. He henned. He tapped a jaw, not a mind. One life returned. He thought of nothing because this one asked to be thought about when you didn't need it, not when you did. It was a promise made to a future he hadn't met yet. He wanted to meet that future having already decided who he would be when it asked. Sleep came wearing beach sounds. The hall with blue torches welcomed him again, as if it had been waiting politely in the corner while he did his chores. The throne looked different only because Izuku had. The man, not a ghost, not leaned against a pillar like Patience dressed in black. You broke a rule, Ano said, amused and proud in equal measure. Izuku crossed his arms, surprised that dream posture mattered. I kept a person. That's the correct math. Ano's mouth did that tilt again, the one that made compliments feel like they had teeth so they could bite down on real things. You also wrote stay with your finger and made a board reconsider mutiny. You are going to get addicted to small power if you're not careful. Small power tastes like cleanliness. It can keep you from learning to sit with mess. I like mess, Izuku lied. Ano snorted. No, you like the idea that you will like mess when it comes. You will practice. It will hurt. It will hurt in the correct places. Izuku dared. Did you like mess? I bowed to it when it won, Ano said. And then I built rooms where it could not enter without checking its coat. The cult, Izuku said, because the word wanted air. They left a note. They want me to. He hesitated. He wasn't afraid to say take the throne. He was annoyed that the phrase turned his mouth into a tourist. Of course they do, Ano said cheerfully, as if someone had asked if it might rain in April. It is easier to worship a chair than to become a person. I burned the note. Perfect. Ano's clapped once without sound. Burn the next 20. On the 21st, write no on the ash. On the 22nd, don't read it at all. Izuku studied him. You sound like you're trying to make me you and not you at the same time. I am trying to make you, Ano said, soft for the first time, which in his mouth turned softness into a plant structure that could hold weight. And I am keeping you from being a copy. Copies blur the first time you sweat on them. Izuku swallowed the lump that wanted to be awe and made it into resolve. I applied to UA, he said, because the practical thing needed saying out loud here too. Entrance exam is in 2 months. I need to be able to show them I belong without lying. I need to look like a person who can fit into their rules and also keep mine. Ano's nodded, eyes glinting with a kind of comedy that enjoyed problems. You will study. You will train your body. You will learn the rules so you can follow them out loud and break them quietly, only when law forgets why it was written. That sounds like cheating. That sounds like adulthood. Ano's pushed off the pillar. You will also make friends with a girl who builds things out of thinking. She will help you write your promises in machines. Izuku blinked. That is extremely specific. Ano's gently did not answer. The hall folded itself into morning like a napkin. Izuku woke to rain being small and decisive. He texted Toshinori studied. Beach later. Weather is behaving. Toshinori responded with a blurry photo of a stethoscope and a caption. They say I have lungs. School said the same thing schools say, but Izuku said in it differently, no, as if every word could be taken apart and put back together into a tool. He ate lunch on the stairwell where the light came down like a well-mannered waterfall and wrote his UA personal statement in pencil first so he could write it again in pen once he found the correct honesty. I want to be the sort of hero people can use like a bridge. I want to learn how to be softer than a fist and harder than a lie. I believe strength without restraint is easy and therefore not interesting. I will not kill. I will not dominate. I will return a life once. And I will spend the rest of my lives paying for the gift of trying. If you're looking for someone to break everything, that isn't me. If you're looking for someone who will learn how not to, that is. When he finished, he stared at it long enough for the page to blush and then tucked it away because there are some truths you don't show to halls. You take them to rooms with good chairs and mothers who know how to keep their faces still when their hearts swing wide. On the way home, he passed the alley where he'd met the not villains. It was empty of boys and full of a smell that could have been bleach but wasn't. Someone had painted over the graffiti. A different kind of paint had written something thinner underneath. It wasn't a symbol. It was a set of coordinates. Izuku didn't stop walking. He let root scents float like a balloon on a string behind him. The undercurrent he felt was small and precise and malevolent the way needles are. About their business, not interested in drama. He did not pick up the string. He wrote no on the inside of his teeth with his tongue and smiled at a dog so hard the dog wagged because joy is also a tracking method and he did not intend to be equipment. That night, he and Inko cooked silently together and were noisy with gratitude about it. When the news mentioned All Might, they both turned the volume up and watched the kind of courage that makes you forget how complicated you are. Afterward, they turned the volume down and remembered together on the couch, one of his feet pressing against the underside of her calf like it had when he was 5. He practiced namecraft once before bed, drawing a sigil on the ceiling's air that whispered tomorrow only to his own ears. The sigil sank into the plaster's willingness to remember and would call him awake the way good bread calls you to breakfast. He dreamed again, but not of halls. He dreamed of Dagaba Beach clean, of gulls forced to find work in legitimate management positions. He dreamed of a girl with dark hair and a drafting compass laughing at a joke he hadn't told yet. He dreamed of a blade that wasn't a blade wearing a polite suit. He dreamed of writing consent on the air and watching a crowd sign their names with breath. He woke and the city held still for one respectful second, as if not to interrupt the end of a sentence. The morning he received the UA exam schedule, the doorbell rang at the same time. Toshinori stood there in a hoodie that tried and failed to disguise how his shoulders had learned to be architecture. Field trip, Toshinori said, holding up 2 paper wrapped onigiri like a magician who chosen rice instead of doves. Police training range. Friend of mine owes me 3 favors and some wisdom. You'll meet the version of law that makes more sense than TV. Inko peered over Izuku's shoulder, saw Toshinori's hoodie, recognized his smile anyway, and did not ask questions that would put answers in danger. Bring him back hungry, she ordered. Hungry people tell the truth about their day. They took a bus that made inconvenient stops and talked about exhaustion as a strategic resource. The range was a polite rectangle of gravel with a shed that had decided to be useful and a woman in a uniform that fit like honesty. Namura, Toshinori said with real affection. This is Midoriya. He has the brain of a lawyer and the heart of a firefighter. He needs to learn what use of force truly means when the camera is off. Namura's handshake felt like a question and an answer. Does he also need to learn to stop apologizing with his eyebrows? Yes, Izuku said at the same time, Toshinori said, desperately. They spent the morning with mats and mock scenarios. Namura didn't care about Izuku's quirk. She cared about where his foot went when a frightened person's hands became a map with no legend. She cared about how to talk with your palms open. She cared about how to make a person angry at you on purpose so they would forget to be angry at a different person who could not hold that kind of heat safely. Izuku learned the ask, tell, make progression version that doesn't become make, then explain the bruises to a boss. He practiced self-binding with words. If I touch you, it will be to move you out of danger, not into it. He practiced witness stance. I am here. I am recording. I will call the medic. Put the knife down. Namura corrected his tone until his voice learned to be the kind of table people set things on without fear of spills. At lunch, Namura ate her bento like a person who had time because she had learned to make time by finding minutes between chaos and teaching them to be hours. 2 truths for free, she said between bites. 1. Mercy is harder paperwork. 2. People who want to be kings are often trying to keep from learning how to be citizens. Izuku nodded and did not ask how she'd found the exact center of his problem without a map. Toshinori smiled into his tea the way men do when they recognize talent adjacent to their own. On the way home, a sudden squall shoved rain into the air like someone had kicked a bucket. They ducked into a shop whose owner had never sold an umbrella and was thrilled to try. Toshinori picked a ridiculous one with frogs that had existential dread in their pupils. Izuku picked clear plastic because he liked watching rain choose its paths. Under the shared cover, Toshinori said, do you know why I wanted to mentor you even before the rooftop bent? Because I ran toward danger. Izuku tried. Because you didn't yell while you ran, Toshinori said. Some people perform their courage for witnesses. You perform it for outcomes. It's a kind of quiet that villains hate. Izuku absorbed that as carefully as you pour soup into a thermos without scalding your hand. I'll try to keep it. Don't keep it, Toshinori said. Practice it. Kept things get dusty. They parted at the corner where Toshinori could pretend his bones were bored and not aching. Izuku went upstairs 2 at a time because sometimes you need to inform gravity of your intentions. Inko was on the couch, knitting something that didn't know yet if it wanted to be a scarf for hope. He showed her the UA email. They did a small silly dance in the kitchen that made the fridge feel like it was younger. He explained Namura's drills with the kind of animation mothers file in their secret drawer labeled keep for when he forgets he's brave. The evening was uneventful in the way good evenings advertised themselves. Dinner, dishes, a call from an aunt who believed that forwarding messages prevented tragedy, homework, quiet. Izuku wrote in his green notebook until the edges of the page felt thinner. Observations, shard budget, still 5 baseline. Never spent more than 2 in a day. Null sigil tests on string and cardboard, do not use on living tissue. He didn't, but wrote it anyway big and underlined so future Izuku too tired to think would see the rule first. When he put the notebook away, he felt a strange and ordinary sensation of being exactly where he should be and also at the start of absolutely everything. He turned off his light and lay in the kind of dark that belongs to apartments where loneliness doesn't win, but still tries. The seal warmed, not like a command, like a cat deciding your ribs are a good place to be. He thought of thrones and bridges and budgets and breakfast. Somewhere under the city, 3 people lit 3 candles that refused to drip. They said the name Voldigoad like it was a key and flinched when the lock in the wall laughed at them. On the beach, a refrigerator dreamed of cold. In a hospital bed, a man with scars coughed and did not apologize to the nurse for existing. In an office lit by a single lamp, a man with a tidy knot of a quirk rolled a coin across his fingers and practiced smiling without moving his eyes. In an alley that now smelled faintly of clean, a set of coordinates dried on a wall and learned what humidity does to ambition. Izuku slept and, in the first minute of daylight, woke smiling because the tomorrow sigil had kept its promise. He stretched, checked the seals, and wrote at the top of a clean page. Uatwa months. Under it. Be a bridge. Don't forget the frog's umbrella. He underlined bridge twice. The underlines were straight. He felt ready to be crooked when reality asked. He was not a king. He was a boy who remembered a word, who had painted it on his skin and decided to teach it to say please. And that, he thought, grinning at himself in the bathroom mirror with toothpaste on his lip like a careless clown, might be better. The UA email looked official enough to make the fridge stand up straighter. Izuku printed it anyway and stuck it to the door with a magnet shaped like a sleepy cat because important things deserved company. Inko packed his lunch like she was equipping a knight. 2 onigiri, a thermos of miso, don't drink it during the exam. That's a weird headline, and a folded hand towel that had frogs with realistic eyes. She pressed the towel into his palm as if giving him a talisman. Promise me 2 things, she said at the door. 1. Remember to breathe. 2. If you forget, breathe anyway. He smiled. I promise. He touched the seal under his shirt. It warmed as if nodding. Before he left, he painted a small exam edict around the inner rim of his circle 3 tiny marks, almost shy. 5 shards max. Null sigil once. Abyssal step only to prevent harm. They sank into his skin and agreed to be inconvenient on purpose. The city wore winter sun like a polite scarf. He arrived at the UA gates early enough to have time to be nervous and then bored of being nervous. Students clustered like schools of fish waiting to discover if they were sharks. A boy with engine calves marched with a posture that believed in rules. A girl with pink cheeks and hopeful eyes tripped on absolutely nothing and caught herself with a palm and a grin like greeting a friend. Are you okay? Izuku asked because some questions were good habits. Yep. She flashed a thumbs up, which should have looked cheesy and somehow didn't. I'm gonna pretend the ground attacked first. He laughed. Self-defense against sidewalks. Bold. I'm a Chaco, she said. Good luck. You too, he said, and meant it. Someone in a too-neat suit leaned against the fence pretending to be part of the scenery. Izuku's root sense brushed his quirk and found the same tidy constriction feel he noticed by the vending machines days ago. The man lifted his coffee cup in a small salute without looking away from nobody. Izuku put the side in his mental drawer labeled watch later, don't feed. Inside, President Mick greeted them like a breakfast radio show that had won an arm wrestling contest with caffeine. The auditorium buzzed with 1,000 small fears pretending to be excitement. The written portion went for stereoethics, civic law, applied physics, and math that expected you to like it. Izuku's pen moved like a person who had practiced answering questions and then practiced not apologizing for knowing the answers. On a prompt about escalation of force, he wrote in tidy lines. Ask, tell, make is not a ladder you climb. It's a loop you check. Ask with clarity. Tell with boundaries. Make only when time and harm argue for it and then be gentle enough that the law can stand beside you later without lying. He imagined Namura reading it and nodding once if it passed, twice if it made her consider changing a slide. When they funneled into the changing rooms for the practical, the engine calf boy intercepted him with the seriousness of a well-meaning traffic cone. You? He said. Green-haired fellow. It is irresponsible to chat during an exam and distract fellow candidates. You should. Izuku finished with him, already stepping to clear a path for a girl trying to squeeze past. Agreed. Sorry. Good luck. The boy blinked, recalibrated, and bowed with gratifying precision. I appreciate your compliance. Tenya Ida. Izuku Midoriya. He smiled. Let's try not to collide again. Training Ground Beta was a mock city that smelled like dust and possibility. Cementus stood near a cluster of proctors. When President Mick yelled go, the ground didn't move as students did, an explosion of plans and confident noises. Izuku did not sprint. He trotted, counting beats in his head, sensing breath, eyes moving without jerking. He slid into an alley and whispered a tiny namecraft sigil on his tongue county to his edicts. It wasn't magic so much as good manners. The world didn't change, but his thoughts lined up to be checked off. Brute sense reached. The robots read like clean problems in a textbook. Power cores visible if you knew how to look, joints behaving like hungry angles, control logic hurrying along rails. Not quirks, exact laws simplified. The two-pointer clanked into view. Its footfalls tripped a rhythm his body wanted to dance around. He ducked under one sweeping arm, jabbed two fingers into the soft seam at its knee joint, and shoved a chunk of brick into the gear. The robot stuttered, paused, reconsidered life choices, and keeled over politely, letting gravity finish the argument. 0 shards. He grinned despite himself. He moved over, through, around not graceful yet, but direct. He took another two-pointer using the same trick, then a three-pointer, by luring it over a manhole cover and tilting the cover with the leverage of his entire embarrassing body until the bot's ankle buckled. People were shouting and leaping and, in one case, playing a trumpet because that's what their quirk did to attention. He kept a tally in the side of his mind. Shard pool. 5/5. Good. Behind you. Someone yelled. Izuku ducked without checking. A saw arm kissed the air where his hair had just been. He slid forward and sideways and tagged the bot's optic with his hand like a basketball player with integrity problems making a point. The optic dimmed. The bot whined and decided to admire the pavement at close range. Thanks. Izuku called to the voice. No problem. Achako popped her head up from behind a low wall and grinned like a son you could talk to. You move weird. Practicing not dying, he said. New hobby. The cluster of three-pointers marched in formation, their footsteps in sync like a drumline that hated you. Other examinees scattered. Izuku pulled behind a dented sedan and breathed. He could take one fast, maybe two. 3 would cost more than it was worth. Null sigil once. He felt the weight of the rule like a coin in his mouth. He traced a small, deliberate sigil along his palmed baby Venizdonoa, not even a knife. Alinathan smoothed his hand over the air, as if calming an excited dog. The line condensed into something polite, not sharp, but pure intent. He stepped wide into the bot's path and touched the air just in front of their lead feet. The null kissed a law that said electromagnetic clutches should hold until a voltage threshold. For a second, that law took a smoke break. The lead bot's ankle clutch forgot its job. Its foot slid. The two behind tried to correct and overcorrected into a fragile tangle. Metal screamed and then made decisions about where to lie down. Shards trembled in Izuku's chest, gone cleanly. He swallowed the hollow feeling without fear. Shard pool. 2/5. He didn't gloat. He moved, hauling a trapped examinee's leg free from a fallen arm with leverage and a quiet reconstruction in the hinge of a support strut, just enough to let the metal remember how not to be in the way. The pull cost a sliver shard and wrote warmth across his ribs. Shard pool. 1/5. Thank you, said the examinee, a boy with moss green hair and the prickly look of someone who distinguished gratitude from debt on principle. Keep running, Izuku said. He did. He avoided fights he didn't need. He took opportunities the way a careful person takes stairs, looking down, not up, so he didn't lie to himself about where his feet were. He knocked 2 more one-pointers into walls with pushes timed to their joint cycles. He ignored a group trying to farm points by double-teaming easy targets. He did not write shame in the air with namecraft. That kind of spell only makes you feel special. The klaxon blared. President Mick's voice stretched across the zone like glee on a trampoline. Oh. Careful, listeners. Surprise obstacle. The 0-pointer arrived like a budget request made by a villainous architect. Its shadow damaged property values. Everyone with common sense fled. Achako didn't. The slab of concrete caught her ankle. The robot made a noise like a train arriving inside a cathedral. Izuku's body tried to go in 3 directions. Away, toward, and sideways to invent a third option. He breathed once and chose toward. The Bissell step thrummed, hungry to oblige. He stepped once and the world folded politely and put him where he asked. By her side. Shard pool. 0/5. Hey, he said, already wedging his shoulder against the slab. We're going to move this. Achako's face had gone thin with pain and effort. I can make it lighter. Great, he panted. On 3. Anetwo. She touched her fingers together and the slab pretended it had always wanted to be a balloon. It shifted. Izuku didn't waste the physics. He shoved and felt something in his back. Sing that song muscles sing when they're writing history they'll complain about tomorrow. Oh. He yelled. Now. She rolled free, pushed to her feet, and realized he was still holding the slab up because he thought he was a bridge in a past life. She grabbed his sleeve, and together they stumbled out of the crush radius as the zero-pointer planted a foot where their conversation had just been. Thank you, she gasped. Yao, you are not running. I am, he said. I am running a plan. He looked up at the zero-pointer and did fast math. The null was spent. His shards were 0. A second step was out that would bounce him into a headache and bad decisions. Reconstruction could stabilize, not save. People were still in the zone. Points were irrelevant. Listen. He shouted, voice hailing the air like a taxi. He lifted his hand and wrote here in Namecraft and threw it up, not at the rub but at the people. It wasn't magic. It was an invitation that felt like a rally point. Anyone who can spare 10 seconds, he yelled, I need bodies on that manhole cover. We're tripping the balance gyro. If you can't lift, you count in my count. 10 people is all a city needs to remember it's a community. They came. Iida with the precise sprint of a person who didn't waste motion, 2 kids with long arms and good hearts, a girl with sugar candy hair and explosion cheeks. Izuku pointed to the panel under the robot's left heel. There. He didn't tell them how he knew sometimes confidence is more accurate than explanations under a clock. On my count. He slid a length of rebar under the edge of the cover. Iida mirrored him on the other side because intelligent people are contagious like that. The others braced. Count. Izuku shouted. The sugar-haired girl clapped her hands. On it with 3. They pried. The cover lifted half an inch, then more, then suddenly the gyroscopic platform read a lie about the robot center of mass, because the manhole lip introduced a slope where there wasn't one. A 20-ton liar is still a liar. The zero-pointer's foot slid. Its massive torso swung and like a building, remembering it was made of parts, tilted, hesitated, and chose the ground in the other direction. Back. Izuku waved them away and ran with them. The zero-pointer fell with a roar that reintroduced the zone to silence. The timer horn blew. President Mick whooped and called time. Izuku bent over his knees and breathed like a person who had decided to keep being one. His whole body buzzed with exhaustion and with the other thing, that clean feeling you get when you use the exact amount of power you meant to, and not a drop more. Recovery girl ambled over to where Chako sat on a chunk of rebar, frowning at her ankle like it had betrayed a treaty. The old hero smacked gum, assessed injuries with the disinterest of a god who knows he's going to fix it anyway, and kissed the boo-boo with a gentle glare. Achako's ankle cooled and eased. You kids and your showy moves, recovery girl muttered fondly. Nice manhole trick, freckle boy. Izuku blushed. Physics is flashy if you're paying attention. Iida approached with the bearing of a man delivering thanks to a foreign dignitary. Midoriya. Your quick thinking prevented a panic stampede. I misjudged you earlier. You misjudged what Volume 1 use, Izuku said, smiling. I accept your apology with gratitude and a reminder to help me when I'm being loud at the wrong time. Iida nodded, the exact amount his neck joint allowed. I will. Achako hopped over, testing her weight with a grin. You're weird, she announced warmly. I thought you were going to do something cool and you did something useful. That was better. Cool is for posters, Izuku said. Useful is for people. She laughed out loud. I'm stealing that. You can visit it on weekends. He found a quiet corner and opened his green notebook, scribbling exam post-op. Shard pool spent. Null, 3, reconstruction, 1, step, 1 equals 5/5. Note. Never start with null unless needs of it for systems, not parts. Root sense read on robot clutches equals, confirms clutch cancel viability. Explore sound as interference later. Namecraft. Here worked as consent beacon. Good. No mind tricks. People chose. Keep that rule. When he closed the notebook, Toshinori was a small silhouette at the far edge of the stands, in a hoodie, pretending to be wind. He raised a hand just enough for only Izuku to notice. Izuku didn't wave back. He nodded as if accepting a glass of water from someone who knows how to hand one over without spilling. On the walk home, he took the long way on purpose to let the adrenaline leak out of his fingers quietly. The tidy knotwork man had vanished. Good. He let that drawer stay shut. At home, Inko met him at the door with an expression that said she had been doing chores with a level of intensity that made Dust fear for its future. Well? She demanded, half a laugh already under her question. I didn't die, he said, as solemnly as he could hold a straight face. Then, grinning, we tripped a 20-ton liar with a manhole cover. Inko listened to his story like a sanctified ritual. When he finished, she tapped his chest over the seal. Warm? Warm, he said. She nodded. Eat. Then you can stare at the email inbox like a gargoyle. He did. He ate. He gargled. The email didn't arrive. That was fine. He slept, and the hall with the blue torches felt bigger not because he had claimed more of it, but because he had used less of it, and the room respected that. Ano sat on the step of the throne, elbows on knees, looking pleased in that surgical way he had. You made gravity help you, he said, which in his mouth sounded like you did not confuse clever with necessary. I had 5 shards, Izuku reported, not asking for praise, just testing the shape of the facts aloud. You had 5 choices, Ano's corrected. You spent them well. You could have broken that robot with your step and a punch. You chose to break a system instead. Izuku sat beside him. The stone was warmer tonight, as if rooms, too, have opinions about restraint. You told me to be a person. And you believed me. Anos tilted his head, studying him with the clinical affection of someone who loves architecture and is proud of a well-made bridge. They will send you a letter that pretends to be a surprise. Pretend to be surprised. It's good for them. I might have gotten fewer points than average, Izuku admitted. You collected a different currency, Ano said. Some examiners counted. Some pretend they don't and regret it later. Either way, sleep. He did. 2 days passed like books you read on the train and keep thinking about while walking. He helped Toshinori at the beach and didn't use power on purpose until his nerves itched from not showing off. He wrote "Stay Ordinary" in the air above the refrigerator and let it sink into the cheap paint for both of them. On the evening of the second day, the intercom crackled and announced itself with the diffidence of an elderly cat. Package for Midoriya, the landlord's voice intoned like a prophecy of noodles. Inko handed him the slim UA envelope like it might be full of water. He broke the seal and read it twice because joy is a thing worth proofreading. Dear applicant Midoriya Izuku, he read aloud, then skipped to, we are pleased to inform you. Inko made a noise he had only heard when his baby pictures first tried to hold up their own heads. They jumped in the kitchen again, badly and together. The envelope held a small hollow disc. He set it on the table, and it flickered. Principal Nezu appeared like a mouse who had negotiated legal representation for his charisma. He congratulated Izuku with a kind of thoroughness that suggests he enjoyed word problems. Then another figure stepped into frame, All Might, in symbol form, smile present and correct. Young Midoriya. The hologram beamed. Well, your villain points were modest, your rescue points were exemplary, and your coordination of other candidates demonstrated a leadership profile we prize. Welcome to UA High School's hero course. Izuku went very still. Toshinori hadn't mentioned he'd be on the holo. That meant this was either coincidence, kindness, or theater. Izuku didn't care which. He bowed slightly to the projection because it felt right to bow to people who kept their promises, even to cameras. When the holo faded, the apartment remembered how to be small again. Inko put both hands on his face. Bridge, she said, and laughed and cried and dried her eyes with a frog towel, because irony is a non-renewable resource and you should use it when it appears. That night, Izuku wrote in his notebook. I was chosen for the thing I tried to be. He underlined tried twice because victory was an adverb, not a noun. The tidy knotwork man dreamed in a room with no windows and smiled without moving his eyes. In the warehouse, 3 candles burned lower and the cultists argued about which syllable of Voldigoad mattered most, as if names were safes you could crack by guessing vowels. On the beach, a ghoul committed to legitimate management positions yelled at 2 other ghouls for slacking. Izuku decided to name them later and then decided not to because naming ghouls is how you end up writing a story about ghouls. He slept with the seals warm and the city quiet. In the morning, he put on his best shirt, tied his shoes in a knot that trusted itself to come untied when asked, and walked to Dagaba Beach to tell Toshinori that the bridge had been accepted into engineering school. Dagaba Beach had the look of a place someone loved on purpose. Refrigerators were thinning out. Ghouls had started practicing honest work. Toshinori stood with his hands in his hoodie pocket and pride tucked into the corners of his mouth. You got in, he said, as if reading the line off Izuku's shoulders instead of the acceptance email. I got in, Izuku echoed, and they let the words stand between them like a small table where you said important things. A1, Toshinori went on. You will be tempted to perform. Don't. Map the room. Learn your teacher's morality before you offer them yours. Izuku nodded, feeling the seal warm under his shirt. Bridge first. Crown never. Toshinori's eyes softened. And if a man in a sleeping bag tells you to run, don't ask why. Just run. Okay, that's specific. Toshinori's grin went sideways. You'll see. UA High's doors were designed to make you feel like a small idea that had decided to go to college. Inside, the halls did not try to impress. They did their job. Izuku found one and paused at the threshold, not to hesitate, but to notice. The boy with glasses stood near the board like a substitute teacher who had not been given a class. Ida, precise, already organizing. Achako waved so vigorously she nearly dislocated optimism. Bakugo had cornered some silence in the back and was interrogating it. A girl with her hair tied in a neat waterfall, Yaoyorozu, was reading a thick book and occasionally correcting the book with a pencil. Izuku stepped in, bowed a little out of reflex, and let the room smell him. Not literally, although Zero sniffed the air once like tape can somehow smell bravery. Midoriya. Iida snapped to attention. Congratulations. It is an honor to share a classroom. Equally Izuku said, meaning it. I plan to copy your posture. Michako popped up beside him. We're classmates. I already asked 3 plants to be our friends. Bakugo didn't look up, but Izuku felt his gaze flick like a thrown knife. Don't think I care, Deku. I would never commit that error, Izuku said mildly, and the calm stole a millimeter from Bakugo's scowl. The door slid open with the dramatic lack of drama of an exhausted parent. A long yellow caterpillar entered. No, not a caterpillar. A man in a sleeping bag who had reconciled with the idea of not caring what you thought of him. UA is no place for small talk, he said from inside the bag. I'm Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead, if you must be tacky. He unzipped, produced a bottle of eye drops with the intimacy of ritual, and blinked himself into tolerating light. Put on your PE uniforms. We're doing the quirk apprehension test. Izuku felt the class's collective grin at quirk. Aizawa must have felt it too because he added, flatly, whoever comes in last is expelled. A tiny gasp went around like a pin passed hand to hand. Achako raised her hand. Isn't that, harsh? What about orientation and? Heroes don't get orientations when a building falls on a school bus, Aizawa said. Go change. Iida saluted. Bakugo cracked his knuckles like someone was going to regret something and he was taking applications. In the locker room, chatter pinged off metal like polite hail. Izuku changed quietly, wrote test edict in his HEAD 5 shards max, keep null holstered, step only for Safetian, pressed his palm to the seal until it hummed its agreement. The sun had the decency to be bright but not smug. The dirt field waited with chalk circles and cones and a sense of humor. Aizawa scanned them like a man trying to decide if a pile of stray cats could form a choir. Bakugo, he said, monotone. Softball throw. In middle school your record was 67 meters. Now that you're in UA, show me something worthy of the campus. Bakugo smirked, wound up, and launched. A grenade noise like fun exploded at the end of his arm. The ball arsed high and landed somewhere near. Are you kidding me? 705.2 meters flashed on Aizawa's phone. See? Aizawa said, as if he had just proven gravity existed. This is fun. With quirks. So you're going to do it too. Midoriya. Izuku stepped into the circle. Use your quirk, Aizawa said. If you have one. He could feel eyes on his back. Bakugo's openly hostile. Iida's honestly curious. Achako's cheerleader concerned. Yaoyorozu's measuring without malice. The tidy knot quirk man wasn't here. Still, Izuku felt watched by principal. He rolled his shoulder, breathed like Namura had taught him. Tell, make even with your own, muscless and committed. Instead of razzle-dazzle, he wrote steady inside his chest with namecraft, self-binding for the next 6 seconds. No wasted micro-corrections. Full kinetic chain. Release on count 3. Not a spell at the world, a contract with his body. 1, he whispered. 2. He stepped forward at the exact moment a pitcher steps into his throw. The short abyssal step added honest momentum, no fireworks, just a new footing already under him. 3. The ball left his fingers with a small ripping noise like the sky being polite. It sailed. It did not break physics. It greeted it and asked if it could borrow a cup of air. 112.4 meters. The couple kids whistled. Not awe. Respect. Aizawa looked unimpressed in a way that felt like a compliment. You didn't flash. You executed. His scarf rustled. Then his eyes reddened faintly, the air around his face snaked with power. Again. Izuku's skin prickled. Erasure. Aizawa had looked through him and tugged the cord. Abyssal step went quiet. Reconstruction went to sleep. The seal still hummed. Namecraft still lived inside his bones. Root sense dialed down like a volume knob turned respectfully. But out, Aizawa said, and Izuku understood the real test. What part of you is you when the light switch flips? He smiled a little cold. Help it. Yes sir. No step. No tiny cheat. He breathed. He wrote steady again but deeper, almost smiling at the audacity of writing a contract with his muscles while the man who erases quirks was staring. He coiled, uncoiled, released. 82.9 meters. Aizawa blinked. His eyes went normal. He didn't nod. The corner of his mouth forgot to be stern for one frame. HN. Next. Bakugo's attention dragged itself over like a bruised dog deciding whether to bite. Since when can you do that, Deku? Since yesterday, Izuku said cheerfully. And the past 10 years. Bakugo made a noise like a storm filing paperwork. The class laughed, nodded him. At the friction. He hated it less than usual. The 50-meter dash was next. Iida tore the track a new dimension of time. Izuku lined up, set, and legally cheated. One shard a micro step at the start to turn stutter into stride. He finished mid-pack, lungs behaving, posture a testimonial for Toshinori's beach. Grip strength. He didn't squeeze like a man trying to impress steel. He squeezed like a man trying not to lie. 104 kilograms flashed. Good. Training had built something that wasn't fragile. Standing long jump. He used technique with arm swing, the hip hinge, the not landing like a sack of apologies. He resisted the temptation to step for air and accepted the distance his legs could ride honestly. Side steps, sit-ups, ball toss collected data, not glory. Each time an urge to spend a shard scratched at his ribs, he asked it why. To feel special. To make a point. To cheat fear. If the answer wasn't to keep someone safe, he saved it. Aizawa watched him with the bored intensity of a cat pretending not to care if you open the tuna. Halfway through, the 1500-meter run turned from exercise to conversation. People's quirks make cardio silly until they don't. Even speedsters have mitochondria. Kirishima's grin got grittier. Asui's hair got damp. Kaminari wondered if electricity could remove lactic acid and was disappointed. Izuku found Ichako falling behind because optimism isn't Vomax. He drifted to her shoulder. Cadence, he said like a spell. And 3 out with 3. She matched him. They settled into a rhythm. He didn't pull her. He paced, the way bridges do when rivers run high. At the finish, Bakugo clocked him with that narrow-eyed calculation that used to make Izuku's stomach trying to crawl out of his shirt. Today it just felt like wind. You're hiding something. I'm practicing something, Izuku said. Hiding is for people with closets. I have. Shelves. Shut up, Bakugo said, and it came out almost affectionate in a language that had been raised by wolves. When the last test wrapped, Aizawa herded them like a man pushing a polite shopping cart. He stared at his phone as if it were a jury. Results, he said. Displayed in order. A list blinked into existence on a temporary board Cementus conjured. Names in ruthless diplomacy. Aoi Rozu at the top, no surprise. Genius that obeys momentum is cheating morally. Iida near the top. Bakugo, Todoroki, Asui clustered in the neighborhood of prodigies, pretending not to be. Izuku scrolled with his eyes and found himself near the middle, slightly right of average. But along the column labeled Adaptability Rescue Index, which was not on middle school tests, he sat high, one notch under Iida. Aizawa let their eyes eat the data. No one is expelled, he said, deadpan. It was a rational deception to coax performance. If you don't like it, complain to admin. They will send me a worksheet. Ichako exhaled a laugh that sounded like someone had snuck a party favor into her lungs. Iida looked scandalized and also secretly thrilled. Bakugo snorted and hid that he had unclenched. Aizawa's gaze found Izuku and stayed. Midoriya. Izuku straightened. Yes, sir. You have something in your toolkit that does not care about erasure. He flicked his scarf. You stayed effective when I turned the lights off. That's unusual. It's practice, Izuku said carefully. I have. Rules. I can bind myself to them. It helps. Aizawa's mouth didn't move. His eyes did. For a heartbeat, Izuku felt seen, not as a quirk, but as a choice. Keep binding yourself, Aizawa said softly, which in his mouth sounded like a contract. We don't need another god. We need someone who knows where to put their hands. Yes, sir, Izuku said, and the seal under his ribs warmed like tea in winter. They were dismissed. Ichako hooked an arm through his because friendliness is a martial art. Lunch. I hear the cafeteria does a curry that makes you forgive your enemies. I have few enemies and am not opposed to forgiving them early, Izuku said. Lead on. On the way, Iida intersected them like a well-intentioned train. Midoriya, he began, then took a breath. I judged you as scatterbrained on the day of the exam. Today I witnessed a clarity of execution. I apologize. Accepted, Izuku said. Will you help me when I start overthinking out loud? That's my version of shouting in a library. Iida's smile threatened to escape its containment field. I will. At a corner where sunlight fell like good luck, Yaoi Rozu looked up from a notebook filled with diagrams of things that didn't exist yet and would later. Midoriya, she said in the tone of someone who had already read 3 footnotes on your soul. Your quirk appears. Oath-based. Izuku kept his face honest. Consent-based, he said. Mostly mine. Her eyes lit the way equations do when you've found the right variable. Fascinating. Have you considered externalizing the binding into devices? Constraints that turn into affordances. It would be cleaner. You build? He asked, delighted. Because I need a dampener rig someday that works on time, not on people. Her smile did the rare thing of being brilliant without being cruel. We'll talk. Ethics first, then metallurgy. Ichako looked between them, impressed. Did you two just flirt using policy? Yes, Izuku and Yaoi Rozu said at the same time, and then both went bright red because admitting it made it sound like a plan. They ate. Lunch tasted like relief that had gone to culinary school. Cementus's cement now cafeteria bench was weirdly comfortable as if it had learned empathy over the years from student butts. Kaminari told a story about an electric fence that made Tokoyami sigh dramatically. Sayu said ribbit once and made it sound like a mic drop. Between bites, Izuku jotted 3 fast notes in his green book. Erasure interacts with authority. It kills throughput, not discipline. Namecraft self-binding persists. Root sense dimmed but didn't die. Inference. My interface resembles quirk factor enough to be suppressed. The vows are. Meta. Aizawa's ethic. Hates spectacle. Respects constraint. Deceives for pedagogy but not for sport. Trust cautiously. He'll test until you choose. Momo, write name properly, block letters so I remember. Values constraints possible collaborator on consent devices rescue tech. When the afternoon bell argued with time, they reconvened for foundational Haruxa class title that tried to be vague and only partially succeeded. All Might did not appear, Symbol has schedules even Hope must respect. Instead, Midnight appeared, did a half lecture on implied consent and crowd management that made Minetta's eyes turn into lawsuits, and departed leaving behind a faint smell of perfume and a pile of offended Victorian novels. On the way out, Bakugo shouldered Izuku hard enough to move a less prepared person. Izuku moved away, just enough. You're making it real hard to hate you, nerd, Bakugo muttered, eyes like flint arguing with matches. I accept the challenge, Izuku said, deadpan. I've got a snort he refused to call a laugh. Outside the gate, a chill wind had carried in new chalk on old stone. At the bottom corner of the wall, small enough to ignore unless you had practiced not ignoring things, someone had drawn the outline of an old crest in thin white. A circle intersected by a vertical line, flanked by 2 triangles facing inward, kind of geometry rooms remember. Izuku paused. Root sense brushed it. No quirk. Just chalk. The shape reached under his ribs like a memory trying to tickle a name out of your mouth. Bellsgate Echo. The cult liked polite marks more than messy speeches. This was a whisper. We know where the school teaches you. We know what you are learning. We are patient. He took a picture with his phone because forensic detail is not paranoia. He didn't scrub it off. This was a public wall. Other eyes needed to see what followed them. He wrote no on the inside of his cheek with his tongue again and walked home the long way to feel the street remember him. Inko met him at the door with acceptance letters of her own bills that had agreed not to ruin their week. He told her about Aizawa and expulsion and not expulsion. She listened with the exact seriousness jokes deserve when they teach something. Your teacher erases quirks? She asked, hands pausing over Ginger. He erases light switches, Izuku said. He wants to know if you still know where your hands go in the dark. And do you? I think I'm learning. He set the table. I threw a ball 82 meters without authority footing. Inko's eyebrows climbed. You used to miss the trash can. People can change, he said gravely. They ate. After, he showered duty out of his muscles and lay on his bed with the green notebook open to a blank page. He drew a small crown in the corner and crossed it out with a smile. Then he wrote a new header. A1 hypotheses that might be wrong. My edicts are visible to people who know how to look. Evidence. Aizawa's eyes narrowed at rib level. The cult is testing boundaries, not striking. Evidence. Chalk mark. Coordinates earlier. No escalation. Momo will say yes to building a consent-based dampener. Evidence. Tone. Eyes. Pencil in hair. He stopped. He wrote another line slowly. I liked being erased. It let me see the line between me and the tool. He didn't know if that was healthy. He decided to show Toshinori the sentence and see which eyebrow the man raised. He switched off the lamp. The seal warmed. The room changed into the hall with blue torches without asking, because some rooms are both rooms if you're tired enough and honest. Ano stood with his hands behind his back like a king who had finally found a student interesting enough to be a hobby. Erasure, Ano said without preamble. Izuku nodded. It muted the interface. Not the vows. That's correct. Ano's paced, lazy and lethal like a cat that loved you. Words and promises live where erasure can't breathe. Quirks are mechanics. Promises are geometry. Is that why you? Izuku gestured at the throne, the hall, the silences. Could be defeated and still be yourself. Ano's finished. Yes. If you build yourself from a single tool, the man who takes the tool becomes your landlord. Izuku thought of Aizawa's gaze, of Bakugo's nearly laugh, of Yayoi Rozu's mind bright as a forge, of Ichako's cadence on the run, of Iida's apology delivered like a benediction. I think I want to be a co-op. Ano's actually laughed, short and sharp, delighted. Consortium of vows. Acceptable. The cult drew near the school, Izuku said, voice lower, like he didn't want to wake Inko in a dream. No magic. Just chalk and geometry. They want you to know you are a public project, Ano said. They want to move in your head before they move their feet. Burn the notes. Photograph the chalk. Teach your peers to see. Teach my peers to see, Izuku repeated, tasting the promise. I can do that. Start small, Ano's advised, the way mountains advise climbers without looking at them. Start with a girl who builds constraints into possibilities. You mean? I mean keep your sentences short, Ano said, and for once, kindly refused to be more specific. The torches exhaled. The hall softened into the apartment. Izuku woke with tomorrow written on his ceiling again and decided to leave it there all week. Morning had tea and news and Toshinori's text. How many frogs can the scarfed man erase? Izuku replied, all of them. He asks you what you are without frogs. He added a frog emoji with existential dread and grinned when Toshinori responded with 50 hearts and a coffin. At school, Aizawa handed out syllabi like you handbreakers to people you intend to teach to surf. Foundational. Ethics, restraint, power. Advanced. Rescue coordination, legal articulation under stress, quirk counter quirk without mutual annihilation. If you're here to explode, drop now. We can craft you into a weapon. The world needs fewer weapons. Bakugo made a sound of betrayal that only he and Izuku heard. It meant I feel seen and I hated. Izuku let the sound move past him like weather. He would be there when Bakugo realized it also meant I am the sort of person who can change on purpose. At lunch, Izuku found Yaoi Rozu at a corner table with a sprawl of formulae and hope. He sat down with the gentle caution of approaching a lab bench. I have a thesis, she said by way of hello. Constraints create capability. Everyone fetishizes power. We should be designing for vows. Yes, Izuku said, too quickly. He slowed. I think my whatever it is works better when I choose less. I want to build tools that reward restraint. Consent seals, she said, as if tasting the phrase. Devices that accept your signature and then refuse to operate without it. No coercion. No use without articulated intent. He exhaled. You just described my dream in a sentence doctors can sign. She smiled. Come to the support lab after class. I'll show you a prototype that makes tasers unnecessary. The Chaco slid into the seat with a tray that smelled like curry and ambition. Are we planning a future? Include levitation. It's trendy. Always, Izuku said. The day rolled in small victories. Zero learned you can lasso a principal if you find the right corner. Tsuyu showed Mineta how not to be a lawsuit with a single look. Kaminari discovered that being a battery is not a personality and seemed relieved. On the way out, Aizawa stopped Izuku with a tilt of the head. Midoriya. Walk with me. They walked the back corridor where faculty art went to be admired by rats. Aizawa didn't talk. He let the silence at its own pace. Finally. What did you write on yourself? Izuku met his eyes. Lying to this man felt like stomping on rakes. 3 promises. No killing. No domination. 1 life returned. Aizawa's scarf shifted, his face doing its nearly smile. Good. Now write a 4th. No excuses. Izuku breathed. The seal warmed as if it had been waiting for the amendment. Yes, sir. Aizawa nodded. I lied to you about expelling for last place. I won't lie about this. Vows are not heroics. Work is. You do the work, your vows will mean something. You stop, they become jewelry. I'll keep them ugly, Izuku said. Aizawa's nearly smile upgraded. Dismissed. Outside, the chalk crest at the wall had smudged in the rain. A janitor had added a new chalk line beneath it. A simple X through the circle. Not defacement. Reply. Izuku touched the brim of an imaginary hat to the janitor, then headed for the support labs, where constraints would become machines and machines would become arguments you could carry in your hands. Behind him, the school breathed like a city inside a city. Ahead, the lab lights hummed. At home, Inko put a pot on for tea without knowing why and then nodded when the water boiled like she had been right about something. In the hall of blue torches, a throne sat empty and proud and a young manwa was and wasn't Izuku led softly at the shape of the day, pleased with bridges. The support lab sounded like ideas chewing. Motors purred. Solder sang. Someone argued with a 3D printer the way you argue with an uncle you love. Power loader waved Izuku through with an oil-smudged glove and a warning. If something explodes, you owe me the story. Momo had already colonized a corner bench with blueprints and stainless boxes that looked like they contained good intentions. She tied her hair up with a pencil that somehow hadn't broken under the pressure of being Momo's pencil. I started on the consent device, she said, skipping hello not because she wasn't polite but because the idea had her by the sleeve. Working title. Consent loop. It only activates if 2 signatures are present. Wearer and subject. No coercion channel, no backdoor, and every action is logged on an immutable ring buffer that can be subpoenaed. Izuku grinned. You say romantic things. I try. She lifted a small band off the tabli, a flexible cuff the width of 2 fingers, matte, with a subtle seam like a closed eye. My quirk can create most of the sub-assemblies, but we need someone who can fabricate anchors for your namecraft without letting them turn into, well, theology. I might know exactly one person like that, Power Loader said dryly, jerking his thumb over his shoulder. Izuku turned. She stood a little apart, reading the lab like a librarian reads in noisy room. White blonde hair in a simple braid. A quiet posture that didn't try to be invisible. Blue eyes that didn't blink until they wanted to. She wore UA's support course jacket over a shirt the color of early winter sky. Necron, Power Loader said. Exchange student. Transfer just cleared. Knack for construction matrices, temporary structures from programmable lattice. Calm hands. Dangerous brain. The air went slow for a heartbeat, like someone had set a cup down very carefully on a table. Izuku's root sense touched her without prying. Her quirk felt like architecture, humming walls that remembered sunlight, arches that knew where to put weight, thresholds that didn't ask for passports. Under that, a note he'd felt only in the hall with blue torches. The soft chord of a name that had learned to be a room on purpose. She looked up and, very slightly, smiled. Hello. Misha. Necron. Izuku managed, trying to keep his voice from doing anything embarrassing like remembering 1,000 years. Yes. She tipped her head. I am happy to meet you, Midoriya Izuku. He blinked at the way she said his name. Precise, gentle, as if setting a brick straight. Likewise. Momo, who knew how to read rooms and boys even if she pretended to be surprised by it, smiled between them with the relief of a mathematician watching 2 variables introduce themselves properly. Misha-san, this is the vow-based interface I mentioned. Misha walked closer, the calm version of curious. She took the consent loop from Momo, turned it over, then glanced idly once at Izuku's chest, where a circle slept under cloth. You write oaths into yourself, she said, not a question. Yes, he said, because lying to that voice would be like lying to a floor you hoped would hold your furniture. Good. She set the loop down gently. Tools should ask for names. Our loader clapped once, delighted. This is what I meant by dangerous brain. You kids build me something the media can't misunderstand. I'll fetch coffee I definitely paid for. They got to work. It didn't feel like the first time 3 people had collaborated. It felt like a conversation redistributed among hands. Momo charted the logic. Handshake protocol. Dual signature activation. Emergency override that could only be invoked by the subject themselves after 3 verbal confirmations. Misha traced channels inside the loop where namecraft could sit without spreading any capillaries for intention, bounded by resin that didn't pretend to be magic and wasn't offended by it. Izuku wrote words that would only light if 2 people chose the same direction. Consent. Pause. Release. He didn't cast them. He set them like floor plates on springs, dormant until Wade asked nicely. Constraints create capability, Momo murmured, tweaking a layout. Misha nodded. And make places to breathe. Izuku smiled at that something and it rung like a childhood you remember, even if it happened in someone else's palace. Our loader returned to find 3 teenagers looking undeservedly serene next to a cuff that hummed the way a new bridge hums when it's alone at night. He said. That looks like something I won't have to testify about. Field test? Momo asked. Non-emergency scenario, with a volunteer. I'll rope a hall monitor, Power Loader said. If I don't come back, assume the unionized. He left. Silence stretched, not awkward. Izuku glanced at Misha. Quirk. Lattice, she said. I draw a blueprint. The world borrows it for a while. Small things for a long time. Big things until they remember they are heavy. Cost. Attention. She tilted her head. And compassion. If I build without caring, the shape doesn't hold. That sounded exactly like the kind of power he wanted near his. Welcome to UA, he said softly. Thank you. She looked at him a moment longer than politeness required. You feel like a house that knows how to laugh. He choked on a laugh. I'm doing renovations. Good. A corner of her mouth almost smiled. I like houses with windows. Our loader came back with a tired senior who loved being helpful and hated paperwork. They signed the form, they signed the loop, literal taps, verbal confirmation, a shared yes, and in pause mode, the cuff became a quiet solid presence on the volunteer's forearm. No constriction. No heat. Just agreement. Now try to move without telling it, Momo said. The volunteer tried. The loop politely refused. It didn't squeeze. It suggested stopping so gently that stopping felt like his idea. Whoa, the kid said, impressed enough to write a testimonial later. This is comforting. Is that weird? Not at all, Misha said. Stop is a kind place when you choose it. They ended the session with a relisetwo taps, 1 word, a moment shared focus in the cuff side into neutral like a responsible machine. Power Loader made a sound fathers make when they glimpse a future that might not break their kids. Prototype clears lab, he said. Now go home before I start liking you. It sets a bad precedent. They didn't make it 3 blocks. The first bang wasn't villainy. It was panic with a quirk attached. A small hardware store's awning sagged, then dropped a sudden heaviness like the air had decided to learn gravity faster. People scattered. A worker inside yelled that he couldn't move it, everything was heaved, that his density ramp wouldn't shut off. Izuku's body went calm the way rivers do before a dam. Rolls, he said, already moving. Momocrit control. Build a line, ask for 3 volunteers who can count. Miss Harches. 2 braces for the awning so it pauses. Aran. Momo's voice laced the air like a friendly fence. Folks. Form a line, hands here and here, eyes on me, count on 3. She marked the sidewalk with chalk like a surgeon. People obeyed because authority that sounds like you is easier to follow. Misha sketched 2 quick rectangles with a penlight. Lattice bloomed, pale and respectful, bracing the awning's corners. The collapse paused, confused by kindness. Izuku ducked inside. The worker, a man in his 30s with shoulders like Sylvester, knelt near the counter, fingers wide on a bag of nails that now weighed like a debt. His quirk pulsed around him in a field. Density up, density up, density up, like a metronome that had lost shame. I can't stop it. The man gasped. I'm making everything I can't. Izuku hunkered down where the man could see his hands. You can borrow mine, he said, calm like Namura's training. He held up the consent loop. This only works if you want it to. It will refuse if you don't. Say yes if you want me to help. The man's eyes were drowning. Yes. 2 taps, Izuku said, tapping his forearm with 2 fingers, and then waited. The man mirrored him. The loop woke with a soft hum. Izuku breathed in, wrote consent with a thumb along the cuff seam, and Namecraft folded into the device's channels with a relief that felt like a book finding its shelf. Now say pause if you want to pause the feeling, he said. Pause, the man croaked. The loop listened. It didn't erase the quirk. It interposed Izuku's vow like a folded towel under a leaking pipe. Gentle, absorbing, containment before repair. The density plateaued, then held. The man sobbed, shaky, the kind that empties and doesn't humiliate. It's not climbing. Good. Izuku put a steady hand on the man's shoulder. We'll walk it down. Slowly. Outside, the awning creaked. Misha's braces bowed, then found new angles. She cast a second set closer to the center, shorter and stronger, just smarter. 3. Momo called, and the line lifted together as if they'd rehearsed this in a kinder world. The street had collected a familiar explosion. Bakugo, hair like lightning, learning posture. He took one look, cussed affectionately at the laws of physics, and stomped over. What did you do, Deku? He snapped, watching the way nails on the floor quivered like unhappy stars. Stuck a finger in a dam, Izuku said. We need to vent pressure out, not fight it. Bakugo's eyes went sharp. Point me. The back door, Izuku said, nodding. There's a storage closet. If you put microcharges along the lower brace and vent down, the air shift can give us a gift. Bakugo blinked, then grinned feralfinally, a problem he could chew elegantly. Get clear. Misha touched his elbow before he moved. I'll draw you a guide, she said. A soft lattice sketched itself along the brassifive coin-sized circles. Please aim here. The building will forgive you. Bakugo looked like someone had handed him the world's best toy. Copy. Inside, Izuku guided the worker through de-escalation. Say release if you want to stop. Say pause if you want to keep pausing. You get to choose. The man's breath steadied, a little. Outside, Bakugo fired 5 precise pops in a pattern that made pressure reconsider its social circle. Air wimped down. The awning, temporarily lighter in its heart, stopped sulking. 3. Momo called, and the line lowered the brace onto Misha's second set with the kind of care that makes towns. Release, the worker whispered. The loop let go like a respectful hand. The density field settled. Gravity remembered her manners. Sirens announced the professionals taking over. Namura slid out of a squad car, eyes already doing arithmetic. She took in the braces, the line, the loop, the lack of bruises. Report, she said. Izuku did, crisp, concise. Momo added 2 legal adjectives. Misha stood quietly with her hands folded in front of her like a bar of music between verses. Bakugo didn't add anything. He didn't need to. The precision of his charges had already told the truth. Namura nodded once, then again, the double tap of approval. You did the ask, tell, make dance so clean I want to frame it. What's that cuff? Momo answered like an engineer presenting at a friendly inquiry. Dual consent, restraint and stabilization. No coercion. Immutable log. Namura smiled a very small smile at the word immutable. Send me the spec. Bakugo swaggered nothingly. You're welcome, he told the building. It didn't collapse, which in building language is flirting. When the scene belonged to medics and paperwork again, they drifted to the curb. Adrenaline buzzed between their ribs like a trapped bee, deciding whether to calm down. Bakugo bumped Izuku's shoulder in it softly, not hard. You keeping tally on those shards? Izuku said. Pause and a step to get inside without becoming part of the floor. Don't die being noble, Bakugo said, like telling a rival not to do steroids because he wanted a clean win. I'm trying, Izuku said. On both counts. Bakugo's scowl accepted that as the only correct answer. He stalked off, muttering that anyone who used the word immutable in public owed him a soda. Momo exhaled, letting the beast of competence curl up at her feet. Well, she said. That device works. Misha's calm gaze found Izuku's again, a question without urgency. You asked him to choose, she said. I have a rule, Izuku said. No domination. Good. She nodded, as if checking a cornerstone. Then we can build. He realized only then that she still held one of her lattice pens in both hands, thumb pressing the clip like a worry stone. The blue of her eyes had warmed. The city ran around them pretending nothing had happened because that's how cities say thank you sometimes. They walked Momo to the train, then drifted toward the long way home. The winter sky had been polished by the near disaster. It glowed as if embarrassed by earlier decisions. Necron is an unusual surname here, Izuku said when the quiet felt ready. It is old, Misha said. Most names are if you turn them over and look at their roots. He swallowed. Does it feel old? She went thoughtful. It feels like a room someone built to last and then forgot to lock. He didn't ask if she remembered anything she shouldn't. That would be a kind of theft. He did say, thank you for the arches. You're welcome. She shifted the pen to one hand. Thank you for asking the loop to listen before it held. They reached a small park that pretended to be a forest when you sat on the far bench and squinted. A chalk mark grinned from the base of a lamppost circle, vertical line, inward triangles. Below it, smaller than small. We see the house you are building. Izuku exhaled through his nose. Cult. Misha tilted her head, not unnerved, measuring. They want to step inside your blueprint before you finish. They can leave a card in the mailbox, he said, and snapped a photo before he rubbed the chalk out with the heel of his hand. The janitor can't do everything. Misha watched his fingers. Do you burn their paper notes? Yes. He didn't ask how she knew about the paper. I'm on 20. Ano says on 21 I should write no on the ash. The smallest smile. Ano's has good manners. The name sat between them without fireworks. He waited. She didn't look away. She didn't look through him either. Sometimes, she said, very softly, when I draw a door, I remember a different house. He nodded, like you nod to weather reports you don't intend to let ruin your plans. If you ever want. Anchor, he said, touching the circle under his shirt as shorthand for I have vows and a kitchen table, I have windows. I like windows, she said, and it was not a metaphor and was. We will build something with them. They walked to the station. She boarded first, pausing in the door. Izuku-san. Misha-san. Your house laughs, she said again, please now, as if verifying a hypothesis. Then the door closed and she went where trains take people who plan things quietly. At night, the hall with blue torches greeted Izuku like a place that had smelled him on the wind before he arrived. Ano sat on the throne arm like a cat that had agreed to furniture. You met the room, Ano said, not really asking. I met Misha, Izuku said, sitting at the base of the dais, as if some parts of respect are old and don't get tired. Ano's mouth did its particular tilt. She remembers differently. That is enough. Izuku hesitated. Do you want me to be a king with her? They're already writing to us like an address. I want you to be a person with her, Ano said. Kings build rooms that make subjects behave. People build rooms that make neighbors. Misha is a neighbor. Izuku let the sentence rearrange the furniture in his head. The cult will come. They will ask you to take off your windows, Ano said. They will hand you a crown that looks like a lock. You will be tempted when someone you love is in the room and afraid. Your vows are not enough if you don't practice them when no one is looking. I practiced today, Izuku said. We built a loop that refuses to obey without a yes. Ano's eyes warmed, not in temperature, it didn't do temperature but in serif. That is how you become more dangerous and less cruel at the same time. Bakugo helped, Izuku added, because fairness matters in history. Ano's laughed. Fire that learns to draw circles instead of lines is the most beautiful invention. The hall dimmed like a satisfied theater. Izuku woke to morning and the smell of miso. Inko looked at his face while chopping green onions and decided not to tease him about it yet. You look like a boy with a project, she said. I am, he said. 3, actually. Eat, she said. Projects require rice. He ate. He wrote in the green notebook. Consent loop, V1. Field pass. Add glove variants. Colorways that don't look like cuffs. Immutable log handshake with municipal servers. Ask Namor. Misha Necron. Lattice quirk. Compassion powered. Remembers houses. Feels like the right kind of silence. Talk boundaries here lie no crowns, only windows. Cult. Chalk near lab and lamp. Photographed. Erased. Burned note count. 20. On 21, write no on ash. Teach others to see. Dot. At school, Aizawa gave them a worksheet titled What Would You Bind? And refused to explain why he was making heroes write incomplete sentences. Momo doodled a schematic for a loop V2 that made restraints look like bracelets you might want to wear, even if you weren't panicking. Achako brainstormed rescue lines she could make weightless if people agreed. Iida asked if signage could be consent. Sai riveted in a tone that meant only if you don't lie with it. After classes, Izuku found Misha on the third-floor balcony, sketching scaffolds for a portable triage tent that didn't feel like a cage. Windows, he said by way of hello. Windows, she echoed, showing him where the seams would sit so medics could open the panels without crossing wires or stepping on dignity. They worked a while. The sun drew new sidewalks in the sky. When they finished, he didn't say thank you because thank you would have been too small. He said, do you want to test this with me on Saturday? There's a beach that's learning to like itself. Yes, she said simply. I like beaches that practice. They parted in the stairwell, the place in a day where echoes either become loneliness or company. These ones felt like company. At the base of the stairs, a maintenance cart waited with a triangular paper scrap tucked under the squeegee handle, too neat to be random. He didn't pick it up. He looked at the camera mounted above the exit, adjusted the angle 2 degrees with a polite tap, and walked on. Behind him, a janitor with a clipboard in patience picked up the scrap with tongs, slid it into a bag, and wrote one note. Delivered to Namura. Sometimes the city sees. That night, Izuku fell asleep before his head hit his pillow, because practice is the kind of fatigue that counts as joy. The seal on his ribs stayed warm. The house under his skin laughed once, softly, as if happy to be under construction. And in a warehouse with candles that refused to drip, a woman in a hood whispered, Necron like a man writes an address he intends to move into without paying rent. The man with a tidy knotwork clicked his pen, smiling without moving his eyes. Another chalk circle appeared at dawn, smaller than yesterday's, at the base of a traffic sign. Under it. Windows can break. Izuku took a picture, then drew a rectangle around the circle and added a little triangular roof with his finger. Under their message he wrote. They can also be rebuilt. Then he wiped it both away because public is not the same as forever. He checked his shard pool, wrote don't spend to prove at the top of the day, and walked to meet Misha and Momo in a lab where a loop V2 waited to become a story the media couldn't weaponize. The city ran. The house laughed. The bridge learned new angles. And the boy who refused a throne kept practicing how not to break. The bus hummed like nervous laughter. Zero made a window joke. Sayu said ribbit with perfect comedic timing. Kaminari tried to turn it into a bit and failed in a way that made everyone like him more. Izuku sat mid-row where he could see everyone without making it weird. He had written a fresh rim inside his chest seal that Morningus dict in small, stubborn strokes. Dot. Shard budget. 5. Dot. Dot. Save 3 for null. Dot. Dot. Step only for life. Dot. Dot. No excuses. Aizawa's amendment inked for good. Dot. Momo sat across the aisle with a discreet case labeled CLV2. Inside. Their consent loop upward Esmolar, softer, disguised as a wrist wrap with 2 tiny haptics like polite thoughts. The immutable OG paired with a local buffer and, if Namura signed off, a municipal server. It didn't restrain first. It asked first and refused to go further without a second voice. Behind Momo, Misha watched the city slip by with that careful patience she wore like clean lines. She tucked 3 pencil-thin lattice wands into a sleeve pocket. Arches, she'd said when he glanced. And doors. Windows, he'd answered, and her mouth had tilted like a person who had just found the joke inside an equation. 13 met them at Ustion for a scene simulation joint with a sweep of the arm, as if inviting them into disaster politely. Today is about rescue, she said through the visor, voice bright and absolute. How to prioritize, how to protect yourself, and how to keep civilians alive while the universe stages a tantrum. Aizawa hung back like a storm cloud that had decided to audit the sky. No improvisational heroics, he added. You will not like the consequences. The class fanned out into the vast dome. Zones rose like dioramas. Landslide. Fire. Flood. Ruins. Shipwreck. The air smelled manufactured, but the hazards felt honest. Weight and heat are difficult to fake. Izuku leaned toward Momo and Misha. If a panic cascade starts, CLV2 on volunteers omniask twice. He tapped his chest. No domination. Momo nodded. We tuned the haptics to ask gently. Misha rested a hand on the rail. If something falls, I'll make it remember balance. They were saying everything right when the room made a wrong sound. It was like someone had peeled the corner of the world back. Black fog pooled in midair, not fog, a throat, and then hands came out of it holding knives and boredom. Students flinched. 13 stepped forward, posture small and enormous at once. Kurogiri's voice rolled out of the fog like a butler apologizing for murder. Welcome, UA students. League of Villains. Izuku's root sense touched the mist and felt the Anchora collar-like core where space decided to agree with itself. The fog wasn't a quirk. It was a bridge arguing with math and winning. Aizawa Izuku began. Run, Aizawa said, scarf already slithering, eyes stippled with red. Then he jumped, erasing mid-leap, turning villains into men with opinions who were suddenly missing their toys. He hit the ground like a ribbon that had decided to be a blade. Kurogiri's warp bloomed, a garden of bad doors. It swept toward the class in a wide embrace. I can anchor some, Misha said, eyes narrowing. Izuku didn't spend a step. He traced here in Namecraft with a single fear stroke and threw it up, not against the warp, against people. A point in space that felt like home if you said yes. Say yes if you want to stay. He shouted. Aoi Rozu. Yes. Iida. Yes. Achako. Yes. Sayu. Yes. Siro. Yes. Names stacking. The warp took those without, but a core held around the yes, a stubborn circle right where he'd thrown it. Not magic. A consent beacon. Half the class still vanished into zones like spilled ice. Midoriya. Iida barked, already sprinting toward 13 to relay, already doing everything right, because structure is faster than fear when you've trained it. Kurogiri's fog recurled, offended. Its anchor flickered as if someone had squinted at it. Interesting, it said. Your signature is inconvenient. Thank you, Izuku said, because good manners sometimes confuse evil. Shadows moved on the lower stairs. Shigaraki emerged like a shrug that had learned to walk. His hand drifted along a rail. Rust woke Nate. His eyes were unwell and the way rooms are unwell when the windows have been painted shut. Which one is the fake hero who saves people to feel important? He asked, gaze sweeping like the tip of a knife on a countertop. Aizawa moved to intercept, scarf singing. Villains tried to flank. He erased and struck and paid for every blow with exhaustion. Erasure taxes pay their dead in pain. Physicians, Izuku said, low. MOMOCLV2 only with yes. Miss Habers those stairs. She flicked a wind lattice screw and polite ribs under the rail, thinning around Aizawa's dance, thickening where a step had decided to slouch. 13 targeted Kurogiri's core with a gravity cone. The fog warped, redirecting. Students. 13 shouted. Evacuate. The trio of villains vaulted the rail toward the cluster of kids who had said yes. Bakugo exploded them off course with surgical temper, grinning like anger had found a hobby. Don't die being noble, he threw at Izuku. Crying, Izuku said. His ribs hummed. Shard pool. 5, save 3. He held. Screams knifed across from the flood zone. Siro's tape snapped. Sayu called back a brisk I'm okay. In fire, Todoroki's calm slid a sheet of frost and turned blaze into theater. In ruins, Kirishima's laugh proved stone has friends. At the base, Shigaraki closed on Aizawa with a speed that belonged to emptiness. Aizawa dodged 2 fingers, 3, the way a man who knows his limits refuses to die of pride. The 4th grazed his elbow, skin blossomed into brittle wrongness. Aizawa's jaw clenched. The scarf snapped for leverage. Nomu, Shigaraki said, bored. The roof answered. It fell as a person-stitched horrid, obedient. Nomu hit concrete hard enough to make math apologize. Its regen felt to root sense like a chorus that didn't wait its turn to sing. Aizawa raced and the Nomu stuttered, then punched him anyway, because brute force is rude. Bones learned new letters. Now would be a time for courage, 13 said, voice wobbling and then snapping straight again as he hauled Kurogiri's fog away from Iida's evacuation sprint. Izuku's seal heated. No excuses. Save 3 for null. Save 3 for systems. He ran. Back Midoriya. Momo cried, instincts catching at his sleeve. I'll use it once, he said. 3 seconds. Time your everything to that. Her eyes widened. Then they focus it way engineers say yes without verbs. I'll build the bands. Misha, Izuku said, can your lattice hug a monster for 3 seconds? She didn't blink. Yes. Bakugo appeared, feral grin soft around the edges, as if he had made a decision about where to point his thunder. I'll make sure it looks at me when you do your dumb thing. Thank you, Izuku said, and meant everything in it. He hit the floor near Aizawa's skid. Sensei, he said, kneeling, a hand hovering just off broken edges. Permission to interfere. Aizawa's eye flicked to him. Work, not worship. 3 seconds, he gritted. If you miss. I won't, Izuku said, and then didn't look away as he straightened, because sometimes respect is speed. Shigaraki's head tilted. Oh, he said, voice like dry skin. It's you. The boy who refuses to use the fun parts of power. Izuku drew the null sigil in his palm, slowly enough not to botch, fast enough to leave no room for nerves to invent opinions. It formed a small quiet line that ate assumptions. Shard pool. 5, 2. His ribs burned politely. He breathed like Namura taught him. Ask your lungs for air. Tell your legs to move. Make the moment listen. Hey. Bakugo screamed at Nomu with violent charm. Over here, pigeon chest. He blew a string of microblasts across Nomu's face, hurting its gaze, stealing its attention like a stage prank that deserved a day job. Nomu's regen bloomed, cells rewriting physics because a madman had screamed at them long enough. Izuku stepped in at a Steph ran like a person, feet in fear and promise. He laid his palm on Nomu's forearm where muscle was writing a sermon to itself. No. He touched the law. Regen. The null kissed it and said smoke break. 3 seconds. Misha's lattice sprang like a lover around Nomu's torsearches that didn't try to break. They held angles in memory. Now she said through her teeth. Momo crouched, hands flying bands blooming from skin into carbon fiber, locking at lattice joints with little non-magnetic whispers. Zero's tape shot and cinched like a very eager seatbelt. Hiroshima leaped in, bracing and hardening his whole kindness into a wedge. Cementus threw up Walsnut to cage, to norm the angle of force. All of it on the 3 seconds Izuku had bought with a line. Shigaraki twitched and whined not at pain but at refusal. His hands started to rise toward Izuku's face like a child reaching for a bug with a stick. Aizawa's scarf jerked in last array swipabuying a breath. Izuku counted softly and let go. The null dimmed. Regen scrambled back to its post and found the office rearranged. The lattice and bands and cement had written constraints into the diagram. All Might arrived the way daylight does when you pull the curtain. I am here. Nomu lunged and met structure. All Might's eyes flicked. Lattice, bands, tape, cement, boy with a handful of philosophy. He changed his strike in midair, turned killing force into direction, and slammed Nomu down where physics wanted to help. Concrete boomed. The lattice sang like glass that doesn't break. Bands bit. Tape whined. Nomu fought Regen pounding against agreements it hadn't signed. It didn't escape it in 3 seconds. Not in the next 3 after Aizawa raced again. Not after. Shigaraki scratched his neck, furious like dust. Unfair, he hissed. You're supposed to fight, not organize. I'm a bridge, Izuku said, chest heaving, vision a little snowy at the edges. He checked his pool with the honesty of a ledger. Shard pool. 2. He had spent 3 on null. He had not used step. He had not used reconstruction. No excuses. Shigaraki's fingers twitched hungry. If I touch you. You won't, said 13 from behind, gravity cone turning his fog partner's attempt to flank into a polite collapse. Because your sociopathy does not earn you access. Shigaraki hissed and jumped. Kurigiri's fog snatched him retriad, a bad door closing. All Might held Nomu with hands that knew how to be gentle while being inevitable. Restraints. He bellowed. Momo was already producing a Kalarnata choke, a wide brace with 4 lock points and a nameplate for paperwork. Consent. Not applicable, she said grimly to Izuku as they fastened. But lawful restraint under active violent felony. Izuku nodded, because ethics isn't one wand you wave at every mess. It's a drawer of tools with labels. Namura slid in with a squat and a smile that could audit a god. Whoever bought me 3 seconds, I owe you tea, she said. Then to Momo. Send me that spec today. Present Mick's voice in the rafters shook dust loose in applause. Recovery girl hustled to Aizawa, clucking like a small dangerous hen. You reckless ribbon, she scolded, knitting tissue with kisses. The class reassembled, scraped and bright, every face recalibrated by proximity to a story that would be told badly on TV and correctly in kitchens. Iida reported in sentences that would have pleased law professors. Yaoyorozu backed him with clear nouns. Todoroki said 2words fire contained like he was making a weather report less arrogant. Ichako beelined to Izuku and hugged him with the ferocity of a gravity well. You used your one big thing once and then made everyone else shine, she mumbled into his shoulder. That was I'm stealing that. Again. He wheezed a laugh. Steal what's yours already. Misha stepped into his space not quite touching, eyes going over him like a checklist. Posture, breath, edges. Shard pool. Do left, he admitted. My head's fine. My legs are writing letters of complaint. No excuses. Good. She nodded. You counted. I'll build you a chair. He blinked. A what? A chair, she said, already plucking a wand. Because you are going to sit before you fall down. She drew 3 strokes in the air and lattice spun into a simple perfect stool that knew exactly how much weight he would put on it and where. He sat. It felt like respect. All Might loomed, then knelt, and the kneel turned him back into Toshinori behind the eyes. Young Midoriya, he said softly, for Midoriya and not for cameras. You did not defeat the Nomu. You dismantled its advantage so others could. That is heroism. Izuku swallowed. We had a team. All Might, Aizawa rasped from recovery girl's side, voice shredded, will intact, stop making speeches that make me keep you. It's bad for my reputation. Toshinori grinned, quick and real, then stood and became the symbol again, because sometimes people need a flag that can also write memos. Cleanup turned hours into arguments. Statements were taken. The Loop V2's internal log quietly wrote a timeline no one could falsify. Namura copied it to her secure drive and patted the case like you pat a dog who knows how to sit. This, she said to Momo, and therefore to Izuku and Misha, is how you keep mercy from becoming a fight you lose in court. They rode back to school smelling like adrenaline trying to become stories. The bus was quieter. Mineta actually shut up. Bakugo slept with his mouth open, which would have been a war crime to photograph. At UA, the courtyard felt too normal. The janitor had already scrubbed a chalk mark by the gate. He left a different message in neat block letters on the notice board. Windows clean. Police contacted. Kid safe. In homeroom, Aizawa lay like a man who had won his argument with death through pettiness. His eyes cracked open. No one expelled, he croaked. Bothersome. The class laughed, relief shivering out of them like sparrows. Aizawa's gaze found Izuku. You didn't overspend, he said, hearing the count in Izuku's breath. No excuses, Izuku said. Aizawa's mouth did his smallest smile. Keep them ugly. When the building finally let them go, Izuku crossed the lawn until the world's noise thinned to wind. Misha came with him. Neither said anything for a minute. The skin under his seal warmed and cooled. The house and him checked its windows, counted its chairs. You refused a crown again, Misha said at last, not praising, labeling. You made a room. I almost didn't, he admitted. I wanted to step 3 times and make it a story about me. Stories are better when they have neighbors, she said. Then, quiet. May I? She reached, hesitant, toward his chest, stopping her palm an inch from the seal, asking without words. He nodded once. Her hand hovered there, feeling warmth without taking it, as if measuring permission as a physical thing. Your house laughs, she said, 3rd time makes a truth. I will help you keep it. Be startled at the wear leaf can. Will you? Come to the beach tomorrow. The gulls are in management now. They're insufferable. Yes, she said, smiling with her mouth this time. I will bring arches. And lunch. Windows, he said. Windows, she agreed. At night, the blue torch hall waited with the patience of stone. Anos regarded him like a craftsman inspecting a joint that had taken weight without creaking. You refused to be impressive, Ano said, which in his mouth meant you learned. I was terrified, Izuku confessed. Of missing. Of spending too much. Of liking the feeling of being the one who saved everyone. You should be, Ano said. Terror is a rope. It keeps you on the bridge until you know where to step. He paused. You placed your 3 seconds in the only place they would matter. On a law, not on a person. Izuku let out a breath he hadn't realized he was saving. Shigaraki hates me in a particular way. He hates refusal, Ano said. He wants a world where hands decide for other hands. Your no domination is an insult his bones can't forgive. They'll come again. Of course, Ano said, amused. So will you. The hall dimmed. Morning returned with the smell of miso and the texture of unremarkable joy. Inko clipped a coupon while the kettle boiled and studied his face without prying. Good day? She asked. It will be, he said, and kissed her cheek. Windows inspection. On the way to the beach, he passed a lamppost with a new chalk mark. Circle, line, triangles. Under it, for the first time, a sentence that wasn't a threat. The king who refuses a throne is still a king. He stared at it for a heartbeat. Then he drew a little bridge under the circle and added, a neighbor is better. He took the picture. He wiped them both off because the sidewalk is not a scripture. At the beach, the gulls yelled about scheduling. Momo arrived with a Loop V3 sketch. Misha with a bento and a blueprint for a portable window, a collapsible lattice shade you could deploy in seconds to make any space feel like a room that belongs to people, not panic. They sat on a driftwood log that had decided retirement was honorable. The sea breathed like a student practicing cadence. Izuku's ribs hummed with the quiet you get after choosing correctly enough times in a row to trust that you might do it again. He wasn't a king. He didn't want one. He was a boy with a house under his skin, a bridge in his hands, and a partner who built arches. That would have to be more than enough. It felt like exactly enough. The week before the sports festival felt like a city inhaling. Posters bloomed on kiosks. First years measured each other in stairwells without admitting it. Aizawa distributed a handout that said, in thrilling 12-point font, don't embarrass me, then under it in smaller type. No lethal force. No property damage you can't justify to a judge. No speeches unless they matter. Izuku underlined the last line. Speeches that matter, right? He had one, and it wasn't for crowds. It was for him. In media basics, Midnight set a stool in front of a camera and waved a cat paw microphone. You all think this is about flirting with a lens. It isn't, she purred. It's about telling the truth you can live with. One by one, students sat and tried on personas. Kaminari grinned like a brand deal. Iida delivered sincerity as if to parliament. Bakugo told the microphone to explode. Then Izuku took the stool and thought about the rooftop, the loop's quiet hum on a terrified forearm, Aizawa's ragged no excuses and a house under his ribs that laughed. Name, Midoriya Izuku, he said. Vows. I won't kill. I won't dominate. I'll return one life. And I won't make excuses. Midnight went very still. And your quirk? She asked, soft. Consent, he said. Mostly mine. The camera light blinked, satisfied, as if it had caught something rare. They spent their evenings in the support lab tightening kindness into hardware. Consent Loop V3 no longer looked like a cuff. It looked like a sports wrap with two faint luminous freckles. Momo tuned the haptics to ask, not insist. Misha etched microchannels that held namecraft like a wick does flame. Izuku wrote the 3 smallest spells he knew into the device and left them asleep. Festival rules, Momo reminded, snapping the case closed. The loop is safety equipment, not a cheat. We'll be on standby with the medics. Windows, Misha said, sliding 2 slender lattice wands into his sleeve. Shade, stairs, and nowhere to panic. Windows, Izuku echoed. He added a fresh inner rim to his Seal Festival edict. Short budget. 5 per event. Null. Systems only, not people. Once per event max. Step for safety, not show. No excuses. The ink warmed. The vows nodded. Stadium day. Cementus had paved the stage with something proud. Present Mick rode the air like a parade float while Aizawa stood in the shade of a camera rig and pretended not to care. Hound dog prowled. Namura wore plain clothes and cop eyes near the tunnels. Inko Midoriya found her seat and gripped a frog hand towel with dignified terror. The world tuned in. Somewhere, 3 candles that refused to drip burned lower. Students lined the track. Midnight announced the first event with a smile sharp enough to cut rope. Obstacle race. The starting buzzer went off like a rumor. Izuku didn't sprint, blind read the field. Root sense brushed the ground and felt minefields of simple mechanics. Trap hatches, magnetic clamps, a suspension bridge with a personality disorder, and, at the far third, a field of robot wrecks that would try to be alive again if you were careless. He moved. Not flash a percent. At the first pit, he didn't step. He stepped head heel to toe on narrow beams, using namecraft. Steady on himself, binding his muscles to a 6-second contract of no wasted micro-corrections. Zero tried to swing, missed a rhythm, and grinned upside down at him. You're weird. Thank you. Izuku called, breath easy. Shard pool. 5. At the suspension bridge, a crosswind lied about momentum. Iida tried to pull through and had to brake. Izuku waited 1 beat, then abyssal steep a clean half pace at the instant of sway reversal, landing like a note on a metronome click. Shard pool. 4. He didn't touch the rail. The bridge liked him for it and behaved. The robot boneyard woke on a timer. A 1-pointer lurched. Izuku touched the seam in its knee with 2 fingers and fed it a pebble. It decided to nap. A 3-pointer tried to play goalie. He lured it over a slumped chassis and neged nothing magical. Just leverage. It tripped like pride. He saved the null. Systems only, when it would matter. Midway through, a general studies kid with a knee brace faltered. He looked at Izuku with that particular novice fear of being in the wrong story. Go, the kid said, embarrassed. Will you let me help? Izuku asked. Yes. The consent dropped into place like a clean bolt. Izuku traced reconstruction at the brace's worn hinge and shard, micro-repair, stabilizing plastic, not bones. The kid tested, startled at smooth motion. Thanks. Run, Izuku said, and they did. He finished 5th, just behind Iida and Todoroki, just ahead of a delighted Sai. Present Mick shouted his name with applause that sounded like people recognizing a shape they wanted to see more of. Aizawa checked a box on a clipboard with the tiniest flick of approval. Cavalry battle. 20 minutes to form teams of 4 and hoard headbands like taxes. Izuku walked straight to Yaoi Rozu and Sayu because competence and calm are currency. Misha joined without fanfare. The support corps students had a volunteer lane into the event this year to stress test rescue gear under controlled chaos. Goal? Momo asked, already sketching. Don't hurt anyone, Sayu said. Make room, Misha said. Win ethically, Izuku finished. Rules say no outside support gear that manipulates opponents. So we build for us. They designed in 12 minutes. Platform. Misha drew a quick low lattice led under their feet, flexes but doesn't grab. Legal because it's self-support. Defense. Momo created soft fins that shunted impacts while keeping hands away from throats. Mobility. Sayu managed spring and sticking as tether, legs as pistons. Signal. Izuku marked a tiny here above thema beacon that called the team together if the crowd or chaos tried to separate their attention. No compulsion. Just a named point. The buzzer. Teams crashed, leaped, argued politely with gravity. Bakugo's squad, Kirishima, Shiro, Kaminari, hunted with joyous violence restrained by strategy. Todoroki's team, Iida, a support kid with magnets, and a general studies telepath who looked comfortable being spooky, glided like winter across the field. Izuku's team didn't chase the 10 million headband. They collected medium points by making others miss. Misha's lattice flexed at impacts just enough to turn grabs into claps. Momo's fins made greedy hands re-evaluate life choices. Saya bounded them out of traps and, twice, saved other teams from face-planting because decency is not disqualifying. Halfway in, Todoroki's gaze found Izuku. Not anger. Focus. He pivoted. His team arrowed for them. Iida revved. Magnet sang. Angle, Izuku said, and their platform tilted on Misha's cue. Iida's charge overshot by design. The telepath probed Izuku met the touch with no domination, not a pushback, a door closed politely. Todoroki threw a sheet of ice. Saya launched them over, tongue anchoring, legs coiling, and for one breath, Izuku saw a boy who had learned to fight his father's shadow by becoming thin under it. They didn't steal Todoroki's headband. They did graze it and chose not to. Saya landed them into open air. Momo made a decoy headband out of legal materials that distracted Bakugo for 3 outraged seconds. Izuku laughed, and the buzzer saved everyone from regret. A play stirred no spectacle, high sportsmanship. President Mick made a gleeful noise about Team Midoriya's weirdly polite geometry. The crowd responded to a thing they didn't have to feel guilty for clapping at. Somewhere, Namura checked a mental box labeled "They'll be easy to defend in the news." The bracket pairings slapped onto the screen. Izuku frowned, then grinned helplessly because someone in the dean's office had a sense of narrative. Round 1. Midoriya vs Kaminari. Round 2 would send the winner against Todoroki. Aizawa gave a talk backstage that sounded like a threat but functioned as care. Don't concuss each other. If you must concuss each other, do it with witnesses. Midoriya. Yes sir. Don't do the thing where you decide to lose for a metaphor. Izuku made a face. I was. Considering a tastefully educational loss. Win honestly or lose honestly, Aizawa said, eyes like eraser nibs. No sermons. Copy. Kaminari swaggered to the ring like a man whose playlist had only one song, and it was Electric Love. He cracked his neck, winked to 3 different cameras, and when the buzzer sounded, zapped. Izuku moved before the bolt. Root sensed C's intention. He let the charge ground into a patch of sand Momo had helpfully wetted earlier, legally. For dust control. Kaminari blinked, recalibrated, raised the amps. Izuku closed distance Eno step and used Namecraft. Pause on himself, tightening his own jitter into a jewel. He slid inside the arc and tagged Kaminari's wrist with 2 fingers, where you can remind a body to choose open instead of closed. Kaminari flared a blast on instinct. Izuku let it ride his shoulder and dumped it into ground with a soft grunt. Shard pool. 4. He didn't spend null. Electricity isn't a law, it's a choice made quickly by ions. Bang, Kaminari grinned, not offended. Okay, ninja. Izuku dipped, feinted, lifted Kaminari's center with a hip and set him out of bounds like a respect offering. Winner, Midoriya. President Mick screamed. Recovery girl cheerfully flicked Kaminari's ear. The crowd enjoyed a fight that didn't require a lecture afterward. Backstage, Todoroki leaned against a pillar like a thesis waiting for a defense. You analyze everything, he said, not quite antagonistic. You compartmentalize everything, Izuku replied, friendly. His eyes narrowed, interested. I don't intend to lose. I don't intend for you to be less free afterward, whether you win or not, Izuku said, and watched the words land like a key in a lock that had never been turned. They walked out into light. From the first step, their fight sounded quieter than others. The crowd felt it wasn't collision. This was choice. Ice came first, of course. Clean, fast, beautiful, oppressive. Izuku didn't try to dominate it with null. He angled breath, hips, rhythmicing the edge where each sheet grew from order to mess. He tapped 2 seams with knuckles, and the walls cracked where they were already going to crack. He just let them admit it sooner. Todoroki frowned. The usual script expected the other child to force him to use fire. Izuku didn't. He refused the script. They circled. Izuku counted space. Shard pool. 5. He spent 1 on abyssal step when the ice nearly learned his ankles. He spent 1 on reconstruction to keep a cracked floor tile from making him a liar about balance. Shard pool. 3. He saved null like a scalpel and promised not to use it on flesh. You're waiting, Todoroki said. I'm offering, Izuku corrected, and used Namecraft not on Shoto, never on Shoto but on the air between them. Consent, a tiny, silent room. Not compulsion. Invitation. If you fight me because you choose to. Not because a ghost told you to. Todoroki's breath changed. He moved faster, eyes throwing angles at Izuku's knees like interrogations. Izuku slid, laughed once because it was fun to be alive like this, and the laugh startled Shoto into remembering laughter existed. The stadium held its breath. On the fifth exchange, Izuku lifted his hand and traced null in the air in front of a forming Glycerin at a Todoroki, at the constant that made the sheet seamless. For one heartbeat, the law that said this water will freeze into one decision took a break. The ice spidered instead of Shatet created a path. Shard pool. 0 for null, spent 3, total 0 remaining. It burned the last on a small step to be in that path before it closed. He skidded, planted, touched Todoroki's shoulder and a strike. A reminder of proximity and leaped back out before a reflex could write regret. "It's yours," Izuku said, chest heaving, no mockery. "All of it." Shoto's jaw clenched the way it does at dinner with a parent you don't choose. He breathed. He looked at his left hand like it had a say. And then he opened it. The heat wasn't a roar. It was a permission brief, clean, enough to rewrite the air's opinion of cold. Steam lifted like forgiveness. The crowd exhaled with it. But Izuku said, grinning helplessly, pleased in a place beyond winning. Todoroki moved, truly balanced for the first time, ice cushioning, fire venting, not punishing. Izuku lost ground gracefully because this was one of those times when losing a step was how you won the day. He did not use null again. He had no shards for it and, more importantly, no need. But a match is a match. A ring is a ring. He made a decision. He beat Shoto by an chestnut with a strike, but with a turn. When Shoto committed to a right side sweep, Izuku stepped inside the arc, put his hand lightly at the back of Shoto's tricep, and let the young man throw himself a redirect, not a humiliation, over the line. Shoto caught himself in a 3-point skid and looked back up, shocked, then honestly amused. "Winner, Midoriya." President Mick howled. The crowd didn't know whether to freak out more about the ring out or the steam. They chose both. End of or somewhere in the VIP tier breathed like a problem. Aizawa rubbed his temple and didn't hide his smile this time. Izuku offered Shoto a hand up. Shoto took it and didn't flinch from contact. Up close, his eyes looked less like a verdict and more like weather. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For not trying to fix me." "You did that," Izuku said. "I just built a window so you could see it." Shoto snorted, small, involuntary kind of laugh that proves you're human. "I'm going to beat you next time." "I'll build a better window," Izuku promised. They bowed. They walked off together like colleagues who'd fought idea for idea, not body for body. Backstage, Bakugo shoved at Izuku's shoulder with the menace of a best friend who would sooner punch his own mouth than admit it. "You made him flashy," he growled, jealous and proud in one impossible temperature. "Now I have to be flashier. Or more honest," Izuku said. "Shut up," Bakugo said, already planning a murder that would be legal and sportsmanlike. Momo and Tsuyu met him with a glowy grin and Akira respectively. Misha came last, eyes doing the checklist, hand hovering a centimeter from his chest. "Shard pool. 0, he admitted. "Spent step, reconstruction, null 3 and another step in there. But I saved where it mattered." "Good," she said. "Sit." She drew a tiny lattice stool from the air. He obeyed and laughed because Recovery Girl was already coming with a cane to smack his calves for hubris. In the stands, the clip of his 4 vows from Media Basics played on the jumbotrons between matches, not because PR planned it, but because some intern with good instincts liked the way the words made the stadium feel. People listened. They clapped like they were signing their names to a thing they didn't mind keeping. In a dark room with a tidy desk, a man rolled a coin across his fingers and frowned at the screen. In a warehouse where candles never dripped, someone drew the Dell's Gate crest smaller than a thumb on newsprint and whispered neighbor like an insult they did not understand. The bracket rolled forward. Shoto dismantled his next opponent without cruelty, balanced now. Bakugo stormed through his side with explosions that somehow respected joints. Izuku's semifinal against Iida turned into a clinic on governance. Ask, tell, make. 2 men who wanted to win without making the other unfit to try again. Finals. Midoriya versus Bakugo, because some patterns are older than schools. They stood center ring. Bakugo's eyes burned like a promise he hated having to keep. The buzzer snapped. Bakugo came on like weather explosions restrained into lines, precise angles, no wasted rage. Izuku felt pride hit his ribs so hard he had to laugh or cry. He laughed. He stepped once to avoid a ring out 1 shard and used Namecraft. Steady to write a 6-breath contract with panic. He didn't use null. This fight wasn't against a system. It was against a person he loved. They collided. They rebounded. Bakugo almost caught his wrist. Izuku almost stole a shoulder. They both almost had it 10 times. At the end, Izuku lost, cleaned way a bridge loses to a well-placed blast by deciding which way the river should go. Bakugo planted a palm on his chest, checked for consent without stopping to name it, and pushed him over the line with just enough force to win, not hurt. The crowd detonated. President Mick experienced religious growth. Aizawa didn't hide that he was proud of both their restraint. Bakugo leaned over the edge, panting, and growled down, "You make it impossible to win wrong." Izuku, grinning up at him, said, "Good." Bakugo's laugh was a cough with ambition. They did podium Bakugo, then Izuku, then Shoto with medals that looked like decisions. All Might handled the ceremony with pomp dialed to tasteful. He paused at Izuku just a fraction longer. "You refused 2 crowns today," he said softly. "That's heavy work." Izuku glanced at Shoto and Bakugo and the loot case at Momo's feet and Misha's hands poised around an imaginary arch. "Feels lighter with neighbors," he murmured. All Might's smile went real at the edges. After, the stadium breathed out. Journalists tried to catch kids in nets of narrative. Namura took statements with her pen like a wand. Midnight went viral asking the crowd to applaud sportsmanship specifically. Aizawa wrote a 2-sentence email to the staff. "They didn't embarrass me. Tell admin they can keep the budget." Inko cried privately in a bathroom until her mascara recovered its integrity, then texted her son a photo of a frog towel and 5 heart emojis, which is the agreed upon currency of maternal awe. Somewhere on the edge of the grounds, a fresh chalk crest appeared near a drainage grate. Circle, line, triangles. Under it, in thin neat hand. "We see the neighbor. We prefer the king." Izuku crouched. He drew a short horizontal line from the bottom of the circlebarge and wrote, "Choice isn't up for a vote." He photographed it for Namura, then wiped them both away because sidewalks shouldn't have to carry arguments overnight. On the walk back to campus, the evening held them kindly. Momo talked upgrades. Sayu planned snacks. Iida declared an ethics club. Shoto asked Misha 3 genuine questions about structural resonance. Bakugo walked ahead alone because that's how he pretended to be wild when he was actually figuring out how to say good job without bleeding. Izuku and Misha hung back. The stadium glow made temporary stars. "You told the world your vows," she said. "I told myself," he said. The world overheard. She smiled, a quiet thing that felt like the sound of lattice cooling. Your house laughed. He looked at her and then, because some truths are worth testing out loud, he offered a hand. "Walk with me tomorrow. Dagaba's gulls want to unionize." "Yes," she said, taking it. "We'll bring them a contract. Windows. Arches. Bridges. The city. The house. The laughing." He felt ready for the next chapter and the next vow. The day after the festival, UA's inbox caught fire. Aizawa dropped a printout on the podium with all the enthusiasm of a man delivering junk mail. "Internship offers. Don't pick with your ego. Pick with your goals. If your goal is ego, at least be honest so I can bring eye drops." Papers slid across desks. Bakugo's stack thumped. Todoroki's stack glowed. Izuku's stack looked respectable. Fewer than the prodigies, more than the kids who treated the festival like a rave. A dozen small and mid-tier agencies had written versions of "We like the restraint. Come learn how to keep people alive." One envelope had a stamp that made Toshinori's name ring quietly in his bones. "Sir Night Eye Agency," Aizawa said, as if identifying a scent. "Interesting." The class hummed. Iida straightened with polite envy. Momo's eyes flicked up, pleased for him in a way that made Izuku's ribs warm. Misha, at the back with a visitor pass half tucked into her collar, tilted her chin the smallest amount. "Yes." Izuku pressed his palm to the seal and found the answer already sitting there like a folded note. "Go where your vows will be audited." He checked the rest. An agency that specialized in disaster triage, 2 neighborhood outfits with strong youth programs, a flashy brand that wanted the vow hero on posters. He slid that one back into the pile like it was warm garbage. He lifted Night Eye's offer again. On the corner, in neat thin handwriting. "Recommendation attached, if desired T." At lunch he texted. "Do you want me there? Toshinori. I want you anywhere your promises won't get lonely. Night Eye will make them do push-ups. T." Izuku smiled into his curry. "Okay. Okay?" Momo asked, nudging his shoulder. "Night Eye," he said, and the word felt like a light in filing cabinets. But Momo said. "He loves rules. You love rules. He loves paperwork. You tolerate paperwork." "Paperwork keeps mercy from rotting," Misha said, placing a small bento box beside his tray without fanfare. "I made extra." He popped the lid. Neat onigiri stared up at him like they'd practiced being symmetrical. "Windows," he said, grateful. "Windows," she echoed, and stole one of his pickles because partners don't ask for permission to make a joke. Night Eye's agency looked like efficiency had bought a building. The receptionist smiled without wasting muscles. The hall smelled faintly of toner and diligence. Posters on the wall read "Measure twice, save once and compassion is measured in outcomes," which sounded like something Namura would embroider on a pillow and then throw at you. Sir Night Eye blinked exactly once when Izuku stepped into his office. Tall, lean, hair scissored by precision. A tie that had chosen its knot as a life path. "You're not inheriting one for all," he said, as if resuming a conversation Izuku had not been present for. "Good." You are still responsible for the consequences of your power. Yes, Sir, Izuku said, liking him immediately and against his will. Your media clip made my secretary cry at her desk. Night I went on, deadpan. I am unpersuaded by sentiment. I am persuaded by systems. He tapped a file. Your consent loops in the spec to my legal team. We will try to break it. If it survives, we will help you standardize it. Izuku glanced down at his hands, at his ribsage, at the place where his promises slept. Thank you, he said, because it felt like safe water in a desert of performance. You'll shadow patrols. Night I continued. You will not pursue headlines. You will learn paperwork. You will watch Mirio Tagada spar and learn how to avoid a fight. You will write me one page after each shift. What you did, what you didn't do, and how you decided the difference. If you lie, I will know. If you apologize in adverbs, I will give you a thesaurus and send you home. Yes, Sir, Izuku said, a little in love. The door slid open. Mirio popped his head in with a smile that looked like a sunrise forgot to be embarrassed. Boss. Is this the Vow kid? Hey. I'm Mirio. I punch people with my atoms sometimes, but mostly I don't punch them because there are better ways. Delightful night, I said, which for him was like screaming. Mirio clapped Izuku's shoulder without breaking any bones. Let's show you how not to fight. Patrols with Mirio were an education in being obvious and being invisible at the same time. Mirio made friendliness into a quirk. Waves to shopkeepers, jokes that turned into safety checks, a knack for seeing who in a crowd was counting exits versus who was counting wallets. People feel safer when you notice them, he said, buying a bun he didn't need in order to ask a baker a question he did. You can't teach villainy to announce itself. You can encourage decency to be louder. Izuku took notes in the green book. Mirio Methodist for directions to the nearest kindness. He practiced his witness stance in doorways, the way Namura Leketpum's visible, voice steady, eyes on hands. He used root sense like a thermostat, not a circlite. What's rising, what's falling, what's about to boil over. On the third night, they walked into a block where the sky felt lower. 3 teens had a fourth pinned against an ATM. No knives, yet. Plenty of angles. Ask, Mirio said. Izuku stepped forward, not aggressive. Hey. Do you want a different ending to this story? The biggest of the 3 turned, sneer preloaded. Get lost, baby hero. I can, Izuku said. Or we can both not get paperwork tonight. That got a smile, unwilling. Humor is a backdoor to dignity. The smallest boy spat reflex, learned somewhere he'd mistaken for power. Izuku took a half-step no steplet the spit missed by honest air and put 2 fingers on the inside of the spitter's elbow, where joints answer questions. The boy's posture loosened. Izuku looked him in the eye long enough to communicate a rule. I won't hurt you. Don't hurt me. It landed. Mirio drifted wide, friendly as a porch light, blocking roots without looking like a wall. You're not bad kids, he said. Bored is not bad. Come on. Go somewhere lit. They hemmed and hawed and left like boys who wanted to be men later. The 4th boy slid down the ATM, shaking. Izuku didn't offer the loop. He offered a bottle of water. Do you want to report? He asked. The boy said no. Izuku said okay. Consent was not just a device. It was a day-to-day practice. Mirio bumped his shoulder. You're made for this. I'm trying, Izuku said. You're doing, Mirio corrected. At night's page tonight I was tidy. Didn't escalate. Didn't sermonize. Didn't use step. Used namecraft only on myself. Offered choices. People took them. Night I returned it with 3 red marks and a note. Offered choices is a sentence heroes use when they did what they wanted and got lucky. Be specific. Izuku rewrote it. Said. Do you want a different ending? Said it to the ones with power, not the one without. Offered that leaving is a choice. Affirmed their dignity by treating them as capable of better. Night I underlined to the ones with power and wrote. Good. Keep identifying who holds the room. At UA, the internship prompt bent everyone in new directions. Iida's jaw had started living between clenched and determined. News scrolls whispered Stain and Hosu in the corners of screens. Aizawa handed out an assignment that looked like nothing and felt like the world. Write a policy you would break. Then write the conditions under which you'd break it. In the support lab, CLV3 went from prototype to pilot program with Namura's backchannel blessing. Hospitals will try it, she texted Momo. 2 ERs, 3 ambulances. If it saves us 1 lawsuit and 10 bruises, I'll testify for it wearing a dress with your names on it. Misha refined the portable windowthy pop-up shade that could turn a curb into a room. She mounted it on a backpack frame. Light, she said, hoisting it onto Izuku's shoulders. You carry one. I carry one. We make a clinic in a minute. They tested Indigaba's resurrected sand. 2 shades bloomed into a triangle of shade and boundary, the kind of hairnest that tells a crowd where not to crush. Momo laid down tape with here written in tiny glyphs that caught the eye without catching consent. They moved through scenarios, timed deployment. The numbers got better. The gulls pretended not to be impressed. Lunch, Misha said, pulling 2 onigiri from a neat metal box. Windows, Izuku said. She looked at him a long second. You keep saying that like a vow. It is, he said. A house is made of choices. She nodded. So is a person. He reached and, with 2 fingers, pushed his stray hair back behind her ear. He kept the touch light as a check mark. Boundaries, he said, half joke, whole truth. Boundaries, she agreed, then stole his pickle again, because some boundaries are a game you play to prove you're safe. On the Thursday, night I stapled a flyer to the task board, block letters, underlined twice. Hosu. Extra patrols. Hero killer activity. You will not engage. You will observe, report, and preserve yourselves for fights where you matter. Izuku felt his stomach go narrow. The news had been all edges. 3 pros dead, another in critical, Stain's manifesto cannibalized into clickbait. Iida's smile had become an object with sharp corners. In class, Achako squeezed his hand under the table in the kind of quick ruthless comfort only friends achieve. That night I handed Izuku a folded map of Hosu and a pen. Mark places with angles that favor ambush. Then mark places with lines of sight. Then choose which kind of place you should stand in. Izuku circled corners and alleys and choke points. He drew rectangles around second-story walkways and neon signs and the tops of stairs. He tapped the pen against the map's edge. Lines of sight, he said. Where the light tells the truth. Night-Eye's mouth moved half a millimeter. Yes. When you are outmatched, your best friend is a clear angle and a witness. Izuku tucked the map into his jacket. His hand shook for a moment. He let it shake, then wrote steady with his breath the way Namura had taught him. Steady. We'll be steady. Osu smelled like heat applied to old stone. Mirio walked wide, posture casual, voice easy. Izuku held his shoulders square, not rigid. The CLV-3 wrapped his forearm like a quiet habit. Misha's window pack sat between his shoulder blades like a planned good decision. At the mouth of an alley, a man leaned on a wall, groaning, blood tugging at his shirt. A small crowd hovered, wanting to help and wanting someone else to. Izuku moved forward, hands up. Nurse skills, he said, not bragging. May I? Please, the man breathed. Consent. The loop hummed ready, not presumptive. Izuku didn't need it. He used reconstruction for Ancien Chargist enough to close a superficial cut, to stop it crying, not to play God. He shouted over his shoulder, Mirio, window. Misha wasn't there. Mirio wasn't there. Izuku's body recognized the absence faster than his mind. The alley hummed wrong. He looked up. A shape detached from a shadow. A sword made of somebody's certainty. Stain smelled like metal that had opinions. Not you, Stain said, voice a scrape. He pointed past Izuku to the already stabilized man. Him. Izuku stepped. Not a step. Feet. Breath. He put himself between sword and person. I hate fake, Stain said conversationally, the way a man might talk about weather. But I hate excuses more. Izuku did not look at the blade. He looked at Stain's eyes and saw the terrible kindness of someone who had married an idea and divorced consequences. Then watch. No excuses. Stain tilted his head, as if this were suddenly a conversation he might not mind. You're the boy with a religion. Bows, Izuku said. He kept his voice flat, not Calvinist. I won't kill you. I won't dominate you. And I will stop you. Stain laughed softly. Without blood. I'm not here to make you bleed, Izuku said. I'm here to make you choose where you point the knife. He didn't grab for null. He didn't have a system to break. He had a person to place. Stain Mavita learn it faster than thought, for thought is fast when your fear has a job. Izuku pivoted around the swing, letting the blade ride air. Stain's heel scraped. He was good. Izuku had practiced being less bad. Are you licensed? Stain asked mid-swing, almost amused. Does the law love you yet? No, Izuku said, and slid a crate between them with a kick. I love the law enough to obey it where it makes sense and argue with it where it doesn't. Stain smiled without teeth. You'll be interesting when you're older. Be interesting now, Izuku said. He threw his hand out, not at Stain. Here blazed for half a second, a beacon that said, if you want to help, look here. Lights turned heads. Phones lifted. Witnesses became plural. Stain's eyes flicked. Irritation. He didn't like shared reality. He stepped in and cut small intentional Izuku's forearm. Blood bit air. Stain's tongue darted. Bloodcurdle tried to write a law into Izuku's spine. The seal heated. No domination flared like a stern teacher. Izuku felt the quirk knock. He refused to answer the door. Namecraft didn't block the quirk. It made his consent the threshold. I do not allow this. The paralysis Twitchethin failed. He felt how close that had been. He filed it under do not test twice in a day. Stain's eyebrows lifted a centimeter. Interesting. Thanks, Izuku said, white-faced. No, thanks. He moved while the move mattered. Abyssal step 1 sharp as the blade. He didn't strike. He touched pressure points like questions. Here at the wrist, here at the bicep, note to ask the arm to consider being open. The sword clanged concrete. Unlicensed, Stain said, amused again. Unreasonable. Unwilling to be efficient. I'm unwilling to be you, Izuku said, and felt a tremor under his feet where a building's duct decided to shiver. He used reconstruction shards left for it. He used his hands to shove the stunned victim toward the mouth of the alley, where Mirio had finally found a gap through whatever labyrinth of chaos had occupied him. Mirio caught, nodded, turned, movid wall, window, light, people. Stain exhaled, annoyed at losing the room, and stepped back. You won't always have a crowd. I won't always need one, Izuku said, panting. But tonight, you don't get to decide who dies. Stain weighed him, then shockingly bowed a fraction. Don't waste your life being polite. Izuku bowed the same fraction. Don't waste yours being right. Stain vanished like someone who had taught Alice how to chew. Izuku stood very still and counted his heartbeat back down from stupid. Mirio reappeared with a man now in competent hands and Misha in his wake, eyes like winter sunlight. Shard pool? She asked, low, already scanning his cut. Dugon step, namecraft heat no null, he said, a little shaky with the adrenaline tax. Blood curdle. Knocked. No admission. Misha looked at the smear on his forearm. He didn't notice he'd reached for her hand until their fingers closed. She squeezed once. Windows, she said, as if they were both on a roof looking down at their own lives. Windows, he said. Mirio blew out a breath that whistled. He likes you. He likes hating me, Izuku said. That's how some people love, Mirio said, wry. Sirens drew near. Namura stepped out of a car like Patience wearing a badge. She took in the blood, the phones, the way the bystanders had shifted from audience to chorus. Report, she said. Izuku gave it. Short, complete, careful. He did not skip the cut. He did not inflate the almost. He did not claim victory. He reported a refusal. Namura's eyes tightened at blood curdle. Don't make a hobby out of resisting that, she said. Also. Good beacon. The crowd kept us honest too. Thank you, Izuku said. He meant it 3 ways and made sure his mouth only showed one. Back at the agency, Night Eye made him write the report twice, once as a story and once as a timeline. You will need both, he said. The story is for humans. The timeline is for courts. Izuku rode until the room's edges stopped flickering. When he finished, Night Eye slid a glass of water across the desk and, after a moment, a single wrapped candy. For not embarrassing me, he said, deadpan. And for not being a martyr. Thank you, Izuku said, feeling 10 and 18 at once. On the train, Misha rested the back of her hand against the back of his, a boundary, a touch, an agreement. You didn't draw your blade, she said. I don't own a blade, he said. You do, she said softly. You call it no. You did not use it on a person. You used it on a moment. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to sleep. He wanted to cook something for his mother that smelled like relief. Windows tomorrow? He asked. Yes, she said. I will bring arches. And lemon cake. Marry me, he said automatically, then choked and turned purple. Boundaries, she said, amused, kind. Boundaries, he said. Later. She tipped her head. Later. The chalk marks multiplied that week, small as postage, neat as a clerk. We prefer the king, one said. You refuse a throne, said another, as if the sidewalk were trying to flirt with philosophy. Izuku answered Twisience with a bridge, once with choice isn't up for Avot and stopped. Namura's advice. Don't turn a vandal into a conversation partner. He listened. He stopped writing back. He took pictures. He scrubbed the marks out with the heel of his hand and taught 2 first-years how to see them. At home, Inko read his face while stirring soup. You look like a person who turned a page, she said. I bled on one, he said. I didn't die of it. Good soup. She kissed his forehead the way you kiss a pledge. Brief, absolute. Don't make me use the loop on you to get you to nap. You would never coerce without consent, he said, mock affronted. She leveled a spoon. Don't test me. My consent is you sleeping 8 hours. He slept 6 and apologized to the ceiling. The hall with blue torches did not appear that night. Or, it appeared as his apartment, as his school stairwell, as the beach and Twilightory room he'd helped build, humming, laughing, waiting. In the morning, Aizawa handed back the policy I would break assignment. Izuku had written no killing and had written beneath it an edge case that would tempt him. One life for many, when the math begs. Aizawa had written 2 words at the bottom. Hold longer. He would. He would hold. He would duel without blood. He would save his shards. He would spend them on laws, not people. And when the time came to spend more, he would count out loud so his neighbors could keep him honest. The house under his ribs laughed once, softly. Windows. Arches. Bridges. The boy who refused a throne kept learning how to make a room big enough for a city. By Monday, UA smelled like bleach and headlines. Aizawa didn't bother with a preamble. Osu, he said, chalk ticking once. Increased patrols. Leak chatter. One more time for the kids who think consequences are a rumor. Your students. He let that hang. Iida's jaw hung with it. The class noticed. They were kind enough not to stare, unkind enough to keep glancing. Aizawa saw all of it. Assignment, he added. Write me a paragraph on the difference between justice and revenge, without using the words justice or revenge. If you manage it, you'll pass this course eventually. At lunch, Izuku found Iida on the breezeway staring at a spot of sky like it owed him a fight. Walk? Izuku asked. Iida's smile did that brave brittle thing. I have plans, Midoriya. Thank you. He left in efficient strides. Izuku watched the shape of plans on his back and felt his ribs warm like a warning light. In the lab after classes, Momo snapped the consent loop V3 case shut. Hosuer assigned the pilot, she said. Namura wants deployment metrics by Friday. Windows, Misha said, patting the portable shade pack she trimmed to a featherweight. We can turn a curb into a room in 60 seconds. Izuku nodded, wrote hold longer at the top of his green notebook, and underlined it. We're going tonight, he said. Night Eye's roots. Lines of sight. Momo didn't ask if it was wise. She checked batteries and ethics. No coercion. No backdoor. No excuses, Izuku said, because saying it out loud filed the paperwork with his bones. Osu, dusk looked like a bruise learning to heal. Mirio walked with his practiced sunshine. Sir Night Eye had split the map into a grid and assigned them to corners with ears crossings, stoops, rooftops with sight lines. Momo and Misha stayed in the volunteer lane with the medics, CLV3s wrapped on their own wrists like promises. Izuku ran with Mirio, then alone for a minute to feel the city's angles. That's when the phone screamed. Smash cut. An alley 2 blocks over. The air had the wrong density. The way fear smells when it's been folded up so long it creases. Izuku sprinted. No stiffed needed later. Round the corner. Iida faced a man who looked like a sermon filed under weapons. Stain stood easy, sword tipped down, eyes bright with the kind of sincerity that ruins towns. An injured pro slumped behind him, out of everything shallow, eyes clearer than his body. Kid, he managed, don't. Stain didn't even look back. He wants to. Izuku's mouth said hey before his heart caught up. He took in the geometrical walls, a dumpster, a fire escape ladder, 5 watchers pressed against shadow, phones out, courage on silent. Iida, he said, voice level. I'm here. Iida snapped without turning. This is my business. Izuku walked forward until his shoulder touched Iida's. He didn't crowd. He co-signed. Then let me be your witness. Stain's head cocked. That boy knows the shape of words. Ask, tell, make Izuku say it to Iida, not Stain. Ask yourself if you like the person you are 5 minutes after this. Tell me what help you want. Make a choice. Iida's breath stuttered. His right hand shook around, intent rather than a weapon. The helmeted dignity he wore at school felt like borrowed clothes here. Pause, Izuku said, holding out the loop like a pen to sign with. Only if you say yes. Iida stared at the wrap as if it were a mirror. His eyes flicked to Stain, to Native, to Izuku's open palm. The steel in him shifted. Something younger spoke up inside his bones. Yes, he whispered, hoarse. 2 taps. The cuff hummed. Consent braided with namecraft, and the tremor in Iida's hands had leaden its silence, order. Stain watched with the weirdest thing on his face. Respect? He asked. You agreed. Better than most pros do. You like rules, Izuku said. So do I. He touched the portable window pack's trigger. Misha's lattice ribs bloomed and shades had lead a triangle that told the alley where to be a room. People in the mouth of the alley exhaled. Phone steadied. Space became specific. Stain's grin thinned. You keep making it hard to be dramatic. Izuku's seal warmed. Shard budget. 5. Save 3 for null. Step only for life. No excuses. He counted the math. Stain's blood curdle wants a tongue on a wound. In close, your no domination will hold once, maybe twice. The 3rd time you get clever or dead. Native, Izuku called, concise. Can you crawl if I give you a path? I can, Native breathed, lying correctly. Good. Izuku drew here in the air, not for the crowd, for Mirio, who would feel that kind of breadcrumb like a command disguising itself as a request. Stain moved. The sword skimmed Iida's cheek. A red comma wrote itself. Stain's tongue started the sentence. And Izuku spent. Null, a small ein, not at the man, at the law, his quirk uses. Blood carries orders. For 3 seconds, that principal took a coffee break. Now, Izuku said, and the alley listened. Iida didn't lunge. He stepped aside room mat and dragged Native 2 scoots into windowed shade. Momo, already sprinting, slid in on her knees with gauze and legality. I am applying pressure, she declared to the phones, to Namura's future, to the law. You may film. Stain blinked, nodded pain, a process. He stepped through the failed quirk like a man changing dance partners and came for Izuku with that narrow kindness. Izuku had 2 shards left. He didn't spend them. He spent his body. Pivot, elbow, wrist, questions asked at joints. Stain's blade kissed his sleeve and found only fabric. Hold longer, Izuku said out loud to himself, to his seal, to Aizawa's note. Stain slashed, low. Izuku folded his knee out of the way and felt the old beach training grin up his spine. Your body is a neighbor. You treat it kindly. It lends you sugar. He kept Stain busy. Busy isn't glorious. It's how people live. Mirio arrived like a punchline. He didn't punch. He phased through the sword just long enough to unnerve its confidence, popped up behind Stain, and bumped his balance a degree. Stain compensated on reflex with a backcut that would have opened an unlicensed hero from navel to autobiography. It opened Mirio's jacket. He laughed. Close. Stop cheating, Stain snapped, furious only at the dumb physics of friends. Make me, Mirio chirped and danced out of range with a politician's smile. Misha's second window blossomed a mirrored panel angled to spill more eyes into the alley. Crowd murmur changed key. Quiet, intent, ready. Consent beacons work on witnesses, too. Stain feinted at Izuku, then spun toward Momo and Native because cruelty hates triage. He raised the blade. No. Izuku's voice came out not louder, closer. Not at Stain. At the angle of the arm. He touched a pressure point on the tricep with 2 fingers, a reminder, not pain in Stain's swing dipped an inch, enough for Momo's soft fin to slide between steel and skin. The man hissed. You degrade the art of combat with padding. I upgrade citizens to survivors, Momo said crisply, and applied an immutable bandage while making eye contact with 3 separate phones. Siren hum approached with intent. Namura's voice arrived first, threaded through the alley like a familiar road. Hosu PD. Hands where they belong in your head if you want to leave with all of them. Stain's eyes flickered with the peculiar ache of someone realizing their favorite punishment won't land here. He measured Izuku again. You are going to be dangerous. I am, Izuku said, steady. On purpose. With help. For the first time, Stain smiled like a teacher grading a paper he didn't expect to pass. Then he put 2 fingers to his temple in a soldier's parody and left it in smoke. In stairs and shadow, the old-fashioned way. After him. Iida started and then felt the cuff against his wrist and stopped. Pause, he said to the loop, to himself, to the moment. His whole body obeyed an agreement he had signed. He breathed, then turned to Native. I'm here, he said, and in that benediction put down a weapon he could have carried for years. Namura's team flooded the alley. Witnesses became statements. The loop's log wrote its quiet timeline. Momo narrated consent for the camera with surgical clarity. Misha collapsed a window, folded it into a backpack, then opened it again 2 feet over because the angle of sightlines would be better for 5 seconds while EMTs turned a stretcher. It was boring and beautiful. When the sirens left with their human cargo, the alley returned to being a place where bread gets delivered. Izuku leaned against a wall. Now that it was over, his legs remembered to be legs. His ribs ached with the pleasant clarity of a paid bill. Iida faced him directly. Thank you, he said, voice raw. For not letting me become a version of myself I would arrest. I didn't stop you, Izuku said. You did. I agreed with the right person, Iida replied and touched the loop with the tenderness of a man shaking his own hand. Momo squeezed Iida's shoulder with officious affection. You will please attend a very boring debrief where we define 5 words so the papers don't do it for us. Gladly, Iida said and meant it. Mirio high-fived air and somehow hit it. We did not fight a battle, he announced. We managed a room. Windows, Misha said softly to Izuku. He tipped his head against a brick and smiled at her like a kitchen table. Windows, he said back. Paperwork isn't a punishment when the right people ask for it. Night I made Izuku write 3 versions. Story, timeline, and principles applied. He circled a line used null to interrupt a quirk's axiom, not a person's will. Good, he'd annotated. Then. Hold longer in the margin, underlined. Namura came by the agency after midnight with 2 coffees and a look that meant I am going to be kind to you, and it will sound like law. Public clips clean, she said. Kid consented on camera. Crowd saw what we wanted them to see. Stain got away tonight. He didn't get to write his favorite ending. And Iida? Izuku asked. Will be fine because he got to be useful instead of right, Namura said. Those are different. Teach that in your club. Ethics club, Momo said, appearing like the spirit of well-formatted agendas. We already chartered it. Namura blinked once like night-eye. Of course you did. She sipped coffee, then added, rueful, also. Tell your janitor friend to keep sending my office those chalk photos. You already get them? Izuku asked, happy in a very specific civic way. Did, Namura said, smiling with her teeth for the first time today, this city has windows. Back on campus, Aizawa handed Iida a stack of forms and a sentence. You were stupid. Then smart. He glanced at Izuku. You didn't overspend. Shards. 3 Izuku reported in the old fashion of kids telling the truth to a stern adult. Null 3, step 0, reconstruction, 1 earlier, not in fight. Heads fine. Legs are staging a union. Tell your legs to talk to Hound Dog, Aizawa deadpanned. Then he surprised them. Good work. Bakugo scowled in their periphery, which is to say he cared. You fought Stain and didn't punch him. This is an insult to explosions. I use tactics, Izuku said innocently. Bakugo's laugh sounded like a short-circuit learning manners. If you ever make me say pause, I'll kill you. You won't, Izuku said, and Bakugo hated how much he agreed. That evening, the consent bench, formerly known as a lab couch, hosted 4 teenagers, a blueprint, and 3 different kinds of relief. Momo fussed with a loops logging menu to make sure the Ask Yes timestamps displayed in a font juries like. Misha rewove a microchannel where Izuku's null had left polite scorch. Iida sat with his hands the way penitent saints are painted, except he was just a boy who had made a choice. Boundaries, he said at last, quietly and more to himself than anyone else. I will write my own. Misha offered him a slim ceramic marker. On your sleeve, she suggested, because some vows you keep outside your skin on purpose. He wrote in neat strokes. No excuses. Izuku touched his own rib. The seal hummed, pleased to have a friend in the room. The cult escalated stupidly and cleverly, flyers under doors for a neighbor festival at a downtown square. Momo unfolded one, frowned at the layout. This stage geometry is wrong. Triangles pointed in, Misha said, eyes narrowing. And a circle too small to hold a band, big enough to hold a word. They were not going to ignore that. They flagged Namura. Sir Knight, I obtained the permit copy and highlighted 3 lines that said no, dressed up as bureaucracy. The square would host a farmer's market instead. The festival found a different alley to die in. A chalk crest bloomed at UA's gate at dawn, small, cramped, as if the hand that drew it had started to doubt its alphabet. Under it. A king who refuses is a heretic. Izuku stooped, drew a small door inside the circle, and wrote, neighbor. He took the photo. He wiped them both away. He did not feed the vandal with poetry. At night the hall with blue torches took the shape of Dagaba Beach under stars. Ano stood by the water, hands in pockets like a man who had invented calm and given it away. You held, Ano said. I wanted to cut his quirk off, Izuku confessed. Longer than 3 seconds. You wanted to win, Ano's corrected. You chose to teach the alley how to be a room. That's harder and less addictive. Stain said I'd be dangerous. Everyone is dangerous, Ano's murmured. The trick is choosing the axis. You've chosen one that makes neighbors. Izuku looked embarrassed and proud. It feels slow. It is, Ano said. So is masonry. People live under it for centuries. Izuku tipped his head. One life returned, he said, uninvited by the night and exactly the right guest. I haven't. You've begun, Ano said. You returned a boy to himself before he got lost. It counts. The other kind will come. Practice this kind first. Izuku put his hand over his seal and felt the house laugh, soft as soup simmering. Windows tomorrow? Ano's asked, amused. Windows tomorrow, Izuku said, and woke to Mizo and the mother who had already laid out his shoes like Faith. On Saturday, they took the portable shades to a crowded corner and made a triangle of calm so a grandmother could sit while the city forgot to be gentle with her. Momo filed a form that would one day be standard. Mirio told 3 jokes and bought sesame buns he didn't need. Iida taught 2 kids how to count cadence for running. Shoto came and stood in the window without saying why, and no one asked him to. Misha set an extra stool beside Izuku, then didn't sit, just stood near, hands folded, alive like a blueprint you choose to build. He offered his hand. She took it. Boundary. Bridge. Window. Holding longer. The gulls, finally resigned to management, argued about schedules in the background like Providence practicing comedy. And the boy who refused a throne kept learning the craft of a neighbor who could carry a city one small, lawful, consented miracle at a time. UA's hallways wore the kind of silent schools get after they've been too loud on TV. In Media Basics, Midnight cued a clip with a nail polish smile. The Chiron screamed. Hero Kid asks permission during violent crime and a man in a tie audition for pundit playing God. This Midoriya boy will get someone killed asking consent in a crisis. Heroes act. Heroes don't wait. Midnight paused the frame on his pointing finger. Homework, she purred, eyes flat. 30 seconds, one camera, answer that without losing your soul. They went around. Kaminari overdid the joke. Iida overdid the parliament. Achako nearly cried and then didn't, which worked. Izuku sat on the stool and let the camera be a person. Acting without consent is violence by another name, he said. When seconds matter, asking makes seconds count. If you think consent is slow, you don't know how to ask. Midnight tapped the stop button like it owed her money. Good. Keep your verbs. In homeroom, Aizawa slid a sheet onto Izuku's desk. It wasn't an assignment. It was a photocopy of a letter on hospital letterhead. The UA. The Midoriya Rozu consent loop decreased sedation in last night's from 6 patients to 1. No staff injuries. Please advise on scaling. Dr. Sato, her chief. Aizawa yawned as if hiding a smile. Media's loud. Outcomes are louder. He tucked eye drops away and added, don't read comments. I don't, Izuku said. You will, Aizawa said. Practice not. Night Eye's agency hums changed when the pilot went live. Legal had swallowed the spec and not gagged. A unit's worth of medics came for briefings on a Tuesday night that smelled like coffee, bargaining with exhaustion. Sir Night Eye led the audit like a surgeon with a spreadsheet. Metrics, he said. Time to calm. Incidents avoided. Formal complaints. Lawsuits avoided. Noted. Momo presented the loop like it was an essay you could wear. She never called it a restraint. She called it a boundary you agree to. Dr. Sato signed the loners out 2 at a time with the gravity of a person who had run out of patience with preventable bruises. Misha hung the portable windows in a triage bay, white lattice blooming into kind shade so quickly a nurse said, oh, like a prayer that didn't want to make a fuss. Shade slows panic, Misha said. Edges make places. People behave in places. People behave when the place behaves, Dr. Sato said, instantly a co-conspirator. The audit began at 9 p.m. At 9:18, the universe threw a test. Warehouse flash fire on the industrial strip. EMS flooded the bay with noise and burned plastic and men pretending they weren't scared. Izuku's seal warmed. Shard budget 5. Save 3 for null. Step for life. No excuses. The man with soot-smeared forearms fought 2 nurses with the blank terror of someone whose body had decided to run without his permission. Momo's eyes flicked. She lifted the loop, didn't reach. Sir, Izuku said, palms open, witness stance textbook. I'm Midoriya. Will you let me help you stop? The man's eyes skittered across faces and landed on the quiet of the shade. Yes, he said, exhausted by motion. 2 taps. Consent woke. The cuffs hum braided with Namecraft's wick. Say pause if you want to pause, Izuku murmured. Pause, the man whispered to his own muscles. The fight bled out of him like a fever. He slumped into the bed with the nurses, not against them. Dr. Sato's eyebrows traveled up to church. Due to trauma, a charge nurse called. 1 burns, 1 smoke. Sprinklers at scene won't stop. It's flooding. Flooding. Night Eye repeated. Deluge valve tripped and stuck, the medic panted. Fire's out. Water's still preaching. Night Eye's eyes found Izuku's as if they had planned this conversation a week ago. Systems. Izuku nodded. Going. Go with him, Dr. Sato told Misha, already trusting. Take shade. They reached the warehouse edge as Engine 8 wrung out their coats. Water roared where it no longer belonged. Electrical cabinets wept. A captain gestured at the riser room with the despair of a man whose shutoff had forgotten its job. Manual valves frozen, he said. We're drowning in success. Izuku's root sense brushed the riser logic. It wasn't mystical. It was stupid. A flow switch latched true on a spring that refused to be embarrassed. 3 seconds, he told himself. Told Misha. I'll make the logic blink. Brace everything you can in that breath. Windows, Misha said, flipping the shade onto the ground where the runoff undercut footsteps. Lattice bridges hummed into place as if taking notes on gravity. Izuku traced null small, careful, in the damp air. He pressed it against the axiom. Flow above X means deluge stays open. The law took a smoke break. Now, he said. The firefighter hauled the manual lever. The stuck valve remembered it owned a hinge. Thunk. The roar softened into a grumble. Light stopped jittering. Somewhere a fuse reconsidered self-immolation. The lawyering, the captain said, dazed. You a plumber? Sometimes, Izuku said. Shard pool. 2. The seal cooled. He counted how many breaths his hands were shaking and wrote it down for later. On the way back to a side door hissed. Water had swollen the frame into rudeness. 2 nurses strained at the crash bar. Misha dragged the window into position and propped a hinged triangle to lever the frame without tearing the seal. It will close behind you, she said. Places should keep secrets when asked. They made it back in time for chaos. Izuku triaged with Mirio for in her counting, naming, witnessing. Momo's loop asked and asked and asked, and the number of pushes that turned into lawsuits dropped to none. Dr. Sato's whiteboard filled. Time to calm, sedation avoided, nurse smiles drawn like contraband. In the lull, a reporter with a smile for say elbowed into the bay. Midoriya, she chirped. Isn't consent a luxury? Our viewers want to know if you took valuable seconds to. Namura materialized between them with the supernatural ability of cops who like you. Our viewers, she echoed, want to know we don't assault patients and call it care. If you want to quote, use. Asking saved us time, bruises, and money. Or try outcomes aren't luxuries. She smiled with teeth. Or you can film the door on your way out. The reporter smiled at Izuku like a dare ridden by a grievance. He met it with the exact nod he gave a bored villain and turned back to work. Cameras prefer performance. He preferred charts. Night Eye ran the audit with the excitement of a man browsing a great library. Loop V3. Consent rate 100% when conscious. Time to settle. Median 13 seconds. Sedation avoided. 4. Staff injuries. 0. Property damage. 1 clipboard dented, cause Mirio. Mirio raised his hand, unapologetic. Enthusiastic nod. Acceptable, Night Eye said. He wrote a checkmark that sounded, somehow, like a standing ovation. They finished at 2 a.m. Dr. Sato pressed preposterously sweet coffee into hands and declared her department a convert. Momo pretended not to preen. Misha packed the windows like folding a poem. Izuku went to wash blood and glue from his fingers. The mirror showed a boy whose ribs glowed faintly like a house at night with people awake in 2 rooms and sleeping peacefully in 3. His phone buzzed. A text with no name. The king who repairs sprinklers instead of conquering enemies is still a king. He frowned. He didn't answer. He didn't show it to anyone. He took a photo of the number and sent it to Namura, who replied with a polite skull emoji and don't feed the chalk. 2 days later, the cult stopped leaving chalk and started leaving people. It was late. Misha had walked him to the station because she had picked up the noise in his shoulders and answered with a window of her presence. At the top of the steps, a girl stood in the middle of the sidewalk holding a paper lantern that didn't make sense in spring. She was 15, maybe. She wore a cardigan buttoned wrong and a smile too wide. 3 shapes waited in the shadow of a shuttered shop. 1 rolled a coin with tidy fingers. The girl stepped forward like a puppet that had only practiced walking, then stopped a meter from Izuku and recited in a bright not their voice. Command me to live. Izuku's stomach went cold in the tidy way that means you are afraid for the right reasons. Who asked you to say that? He said gently, to the girl, not the shadows. Her eyes slid like a CD with the label worn off. Command me to live, she repeated. A small cut on her wrist had been sealed with a careless bandage. The loop hummed in his pocket, listening for yes. Misha's hand hovered at his elbow, not pulling, anchoring. Window, she said softly. He nodded. Windows. He took 1 step, not a step, so the lantern's light fell less cruelly on the girl's face. He set the portable shade between them and the watchers with a practiced thumb. Lattice arsed. The world decided to be a room. He held up his hands. I'm Midoriya Izuku, he said to the girl. Would you like me to help you breathe? She blinked. Something inside her tried to tilt toward uncoiling. The voice in the shadow. Say the words, neighbor. Or watch her die without a king. It was the tidy knot mancoin rolling between fingers. Quirk coiled tight like the memory of a rope. He stepped where the light could disapprove of him and smiled with half his face. Command, he said. You've built your house. Use its locks. Misha drew a clean line in the air, not magicbandary. Leave. The girl swayed, eyes glassing. Izuku had a choice lined up like a trap. Speak domination and save a life today, or refuse and risk 1 to keep his vow tomorrow. He breathed. He wrote steady on his ribs with his ribs. He knelt so he could be shorter than a terrified person. I won't command you, he told the girl. I will ask you. Will you choose to breathe with me? Silence, so big. Then the smallest yes in the corner of her mouth. 2 taps. The loop hummed awake. The cuff warmed on his forearm and he slid it gently to hers. Say pause if you want to pause the panic, he said. Pause, she breathed. Panic obeyed because she told it to. Misha set the lantern on the ground and slid it wide with her shoe, creating a gentle line the girl wouldn't trip over. The tidy knot man's coin paused and then spun faster. You didn't save her, he said. She saved herself. I helped, Izuku said. This is what neighbors do. The man's eyes stayed friendly while his pupils did math. You needed her yes to live. That's weak. It's heavier, Izuku said. Strength that asks costs more. I pay. The coin stopped. Very well. Another question. His quirk bucket air pulsing tied around calf muscles, a constriction designed to reward stillness and punish motion. Izuku felt the ground try to own him. He didn't thrash. Thrashing teaches knots what to love. Let her go, he said calmly, and the man smiled. Command me. No, Izuku said. He drew null in his palm, small as a moth's wing, 1 shard, and touched not the man, not even the man's quirk. He touched the rule the quirk relied on. Pressure increases on opposition. For 3 seconds, that law went for a smoke. The squeeze loosened not from mercy, but from the absence of an algorithm. Misha slid a wedge of lattice between the invisible loop and Izuku's calf. The quirk reasserted and found bad geometry. It released with a temper tantrum. The tidy knot man's smile lost a millimeter. Inconvenient, he murmured. We prefer kings. Neighbors survive longer, Izuku said. The man tipped 2 fingers in a salute that felt like trespass. The two shapes behind him nodded, too casual to arrest, too careful to ignore. The girl in the shade looked at Izuku, as if waking up in the correct bed after a long, bad dream. "Would you like to sit?" he asked her. "Please," she whispered. Misha unfolded a small stool from air. The girl sat and started to cry the safe way. Izuku kept the loop on, but light, only listening to the word pause when she needed it. He didn't look at the shadows again. He looked at the person. Namor arrived 3 minutes later, the whole precinct hiding behind her shoulders. She took in the lattice, the bland lantern, the coin mark on the pavement where someone had waited too long to be human. She didn't say good job. She said, keep talking to the girl, and document later to Izuku, and window stays to Misha. The tidy knot man was gone and not gone. He'd left a mark on the back of Izuku's teeth that tasted like pennies. He swallowed and replaced the taste with no excuses. They gave statements. The girl's name was Hikari, which felt like a playwright had oversold a metaphor. It fit anyway. She went home with a social worker who used the word safety like a verb. On the station steps afterward, Misha exhaled as if she'd been holding the building's breath. They tried to make you pick between vow and life, she said. I picked both, he said, and let himself be proud. We picked both. She touched 2 fingers to the seal on his ribs through shirt and hoodie, stopped, asked, and at his nod, let her fingertips rest there like a signature. Your house laughed, she said, 4th time, which made it a line in a prayer book. Yours hums, he said, because her lattice was still vibrating in his bones. She smiled with the sort of quiet that buildings use when they know they're not going to fall down in winter. The media snarled and sulked and then did the thing that makes bureaucrats cry happy. It moved on. Their audit went to City Hall. Night Eye read his report into a microphone with the warmth of a legal brief and the effect of a hymn. The clip of Izuku saying if you think consent is slow, you don't know how to ask got subtitled in 3 languages by people who didn't ask permission and therefore understood the assignment. Aizawa didn't make a speech. He made more tests. In Ethics Club, Momo walked through a case where no domination conflicts with no killing and did not let anyone decide easy. Shoto leaned his shoulder on a doorframe and occasionally said HNH, which translates to I am having feelings. Please don't photograph them. Bakugo attended once, sat in the back, heckled definitions, and then showed up again unannounced with chips. Not calling it a club, he warned. We call it a room, Izuku said. Better, Bakugo said, and picked the salt off a chip because control is a hobby. At night, the hall with blue torches took the shape of the agency's break room, the Ur's shade, the station steps rooms he had helped build. Anos leaned on a door jamb looking pleased and resigned. They will keep testing you, he said. They'll keep failing, Izuku said, then corrected himself truthfully, like Night Eye had taught. They'll keep passing in ways they don't like. Anos laughed, that short sound that makes pride look like structure. Good masonry. I didn't command, Izuku said. I asked. She chose. The knot man hates asking. He can't afford to ask, Ano said softly. He built himself out of answers. He pushed off the frame. Add a vow. Izuku blinked. I already have. Add it to practice, Ano said. Not ink. He held up a hand, counting on fingers. No killing. No domination. 1 life returned. No excuses. And he tapped a 5th finger. No performances you don't need. Izuku winced, smiling. You were watching the talk show. I was watching you watch yourself in it, Ano said. Remember. Windows don't ask for applause. I'll keep them ugly, Izuku promised. Ano said, amused. It suits you. On Friday, Dr. Sato tacked a piece of paper to a corkboard in where everyone would see it. Then sent Luke pilot week 1. Sedations avoided. 11. Staff injuries. 0. Property saved. DOLLER 14,700. Complaints. 2. Compliments. 13. Note. It felt like stopping without being stopped. Momo took a picture and did not cry because she had to recalibrate a sensor. Misha wrote Windows in tiny block letters under compliments. 13 and did not sign it because some art belongs to rooms. Izuku sent the photo to Aizawa, who sent back a frog emoji and don't let this make you sloppy. Toshinori replied with 50 hearts and a sandwich, which is how retired legends talk. At home, Inko put a pod on at the right time because mothers listen with the part of their heart that keeps cities glued together. Izuku told her about the sprinkler and the girl and the coin and the vow he didn't add to skin on purpose. Inko listened the way you listen to a child who's building a house so large you can see the frame from your kitchen. Then she put a bowl of rice in front of him and said, eat. You can't ask nicely on low blood sugar. He laughed and did what the senior hero of the apartment told him. He slept like bridges sleep between storms, tired to the bones, uncomplicated in the ways that matter. In the morning, the chalk marks had not returned. Someone had power washed the curb. The city looked like a room that expected company. He wrote in the green notebook. Audit. Pass. Metrics talk louder than pundits. Dot. Null on deluge logic. Effective at rule level. Note coordinate with fire officials to avoid liability. Dot. Dot. In-person test. Cult escalated to human. Refused command me to live. Loop plus ask plus window succeeded. No domination holds. Dot. Dot. New practice vow. No performances you don't need. Keep windows ugly. Dot. Then he underlined neighbors and drew a little bridge below it out of habit he would deny in public. The house under his ribs laughed once, polite and pleased. And the boy who refused a throne added another quiet line to the plans. Make it harder to be cruel and easier to be kind in purpose, with paperwork. UA taped a new sheet to the homeroom door like a weather warning. Provisional licensing exam this week. No lethal force. Pre-approved gear only. You are being tested on judgment, not fireworks. If the situation becomes real, you will know. Aizawa didn't waste ceremony. You're ready, or you're not, he said, half in his sleeping bag. Either way, you learn something I can't put on a worksheet. He looked at Izuku, then at Momo, then at Iida. And you'll learn it without getting clever at the expense of the law. Under the desk, Izuku touched the ink around the seal on his ribstode's rim already written. Dot. Exam edict, rescue phase. Shard budget 5. Save 3 for null. Step for life. Reconstruction for structure only. No excuses. Dot. Dot. Exam edict, battle protection phase. Shard budget 5. Null only on systems. Ask, tell, make in that order. No performances you don't need. Dot. Momo slid a folder over, quick as a secret. CLV3 is pre-approved as medical safety, not combat, she murmured. Portable windows too, but only inside rescue zones. Misha, with a visitor's lanyard in the quiet of a blueprint, raised a hand halfway. We've tuned the shade braces to deploy in under 8 seconds, she said. Places make people behave. Bakugo slouched in the back like a sulking thunderhead. Just tell me which part I'm allowed to blow up. Aizawa didn't blink. Ignorance. Blow that up. Bakugo clicked his tongue and tried not to smirk. Tried. The exam site wore stadium makeup and the mood of a disaster pretending to do theater. In the briefing hall, an examiner in a green jacket, cheerful in the way you are when you love Rulisklick slides. 2 parts, she said. Rescue with help us company. Then protection against simulated villains while safeguarding civilians. Intent becomes outcome. If you try to do both at once, you will fail at both, and we will gossip about you kindly. President Mick handled crowd control with legal caffeine. Aizawa lurked like shade that knew your GPA. On a scaffolding above the stadium seats, Namura stood with arms folded and a radio in her ear. Sir Knight, I watched like someone auditing the sky. Izuku scanned the stands. No chalk on concrete. Still, he felt for the shape of a coin flipping too easily. Rude scents brushed the crowd's quirk noises, parks, breezes, stone hum, the thin violin of illusions, no tidy constriction, not yet. He nodded to Misha. She answered with a small tilt that meant, I'm listening too. Heroes, the examiner said. Go make rooms where panic wants chaos. The buzzer slapped the air. Rescue. Smoke curled from a manufactured ruinscape. Hawk actors crawled, shouted, sobbed professionally. A collapsed awning threatened to become a narrative. Izuku and his team split without becoming apart. Momo with the medics, CLV3 case clipped to a triage cart. Misha with a window pack. Izuku up front, voice and palms open. Folks. He called, not loud, clear. We're going to make it here. If you want to help, stand by the cone, palms up, count on 3. You never know how many citizens want homework until you give them some. 5 volunteers appeared by magic. People like being told where to be useful. Momo snapped a loop onto a panicking Tintwo taps, yes, in the fight needed out of the kid like stubborn dough. Izuku's shard pool. 5. He saved null. He spent 1 on reconstruction on a person in a buckling beam that threatened to argue with gravity. He pushed the beam's memory back 2 centimeters toward integrity. It complied with a groan. Shard pool. 4. Window, he said. Misha drew a triangle of shade that made the dust decide not to be a bully. Hawk staffers glanced up and, betraying secret joy, relaxed into competence. Station 1, Momo announced, pointing. Consent line here. If I didn't ask you, I haven't asked you. Something clattered somewhere it shouldn't. President Mick yelped, careful to your left. With the voice of a neighbor yelling about a loose step. On the broken 2nd floor, a man Aquino, a Hawk actor, good waved too wildly. Help. My leg, the floorboard under him considered lawlessness. Izuku burned 1 steeply for life onto the lip of the balcony, momentum used, not performed. I'm Midoriya, he said, breath steady. Do you want to let me help you down? He expected a yes. The actor had the script. Instead, the man's face went smooth, lantern flat. Command me to live, he said. The words dropped like a firework that refused to explode. Izuku's stomach narrowed. Misha's hand hovered somewhere his shoulder could see it. A coin clicked once in the far stands. Oz Izuku told himself. Out loud, to the man. I won't command you. Would you choose to move with me? The actor blinked, confusion flickering like a sparking bulb. His hand trembled. Ease. 2 taps. The loop's warmth braided through Izuku's fingers into the man's forearm. On my count. 3. They shifted down, not dramatic because stairs are a miracle when you treat them like one. Below, Momo's eyes cut to the stands, then to Namura. A nod passed like a baton. Izuku set the man in the window's shade. You did that, he told him. You did. The man's lips shook into something like relief. Thank you. Izuku didn't look up at the stands. He filed a phrase in the coin like evidence, not a plot. Smoked akin it too convincingly. Someone had turned the foggers up or forgotten to turn something off. Sprinklers. A hawk lead called, tense. Heads not reading heat attack answered. We'll flood the pit if we force it. Izuku felt the system with root sensi, a cheap thermal relay, lying about the room's temperature because light had tricked it into thinking fire had manners. Shard pool. 3. He could burn null to flick the lie off for a breath. 3 seconds, he told Misha, told Momo, told himself. I'll make the relay honest. When I say now, brace the boards. Cinch bands. Move tripping hazards. They nodded like pros. He traced null small and clean kissed the rule that said shiny light equals heat. Now. 3 seconds of honesty. Sprinklers hissed alive, not a flood, a curtain. Dust went down on its knees. Hawk actors brightened at ere they could believe. Momo skittered on her knees like a world-class lawyer rearranging a statute, out of the way of nobody and in the way of panic. Misha propped the balcony with 2 ribs of lattice that made the building remember posture. Shard pool. 0. Good spent on law, not spectacle. He wrote the count on his tongue so he wouldn't get greedy. Bakugo's voice flew in from another sector, loud enough to be legal. Hey civilians, if you want to be safe, shout yes. The chorus of yes obeyed him, amused. He grinned, brighter than a blast, and guided them in a line. Asking loudly is still asking. Points ticked, not because points matter but because someone needs a scoreboard. UA's batch over rescued by respectful margins. The examiner in green wrote with a fine pen, eyebrows increasingly pleased. Sir Knight, I checked a box with the satisfaction of a man who just watched a spreadsheet make a saving throw. Protection. Civilians are moving, the examiner said over the paw. Now protect them. Gates opened. The ruins sprouted mock villains actors with padded batons, drones with foam balls, a fellow with a chest light and a theatrical cape. Over the stadium speakers, a new voice oiled itself into the script. Neighbors, it said, conversational. Choose your king. It wasn't the examiner. It wasn't the paw feed. It was being injected thin, tight, far away. Izuku's molars tasted pennies. Windows, he said, already lifting a hand. Misha deployed 1 shade for a corridor, 1 for the bleachers nearest the bad voice. Namura's head snapped up, hand to radio. The examiner frowned, finger to her earpiece. Izuku didn't look for the source. That was Namura's job. He tended the room. Eyes on me, he told a cluster of civilians with the patient dignity of a crossing guard. If you want to be safe, say yes. Yes, they said in a charmed, choosing. Present Mick was mid-spiel when his mic popped with a coin-sharp squeal. He flinched, then recovered with professional joy. Someone's trying to remix our rules, listeners. How about we don't? Iida's voice carved through noise. Team Delta hold the lane. Bakugo, Kaminariusk for their movement. Guard left. Villain actors closed. A drone spat a foam ball at a teen with a baby strapped on. Izuku stepped without step, knocked the ball aside with the back of his wrist, and didn't even feel good about it. It wasn't about him. He pointed. A chakra on it. She sang, float, down. A bent section of barricade went weightless just long enough for a stroller to pass. She grinned. Useful, not cool. Useful is cool. Present Mick yelled, validating an entire generation. From the bleachers. A clack. Coin on fingernails. The tidy knot man didn't show himself. He didn't have to. His signal crawled along the cheap wiring like a rumor. Izuku sketched a null in the air, tiny, targeted and pressed it to the stadium's feedback gate, the cheap limiter that distorts outside signals into that. For 3 seconds, the gate stopped being a liar. The injected voice lost its leverage. The examiner's real instructions cut clean through. Proceed to checkpoint C and H. Do not engage outside your lanes. Shard pool, protection. 2 he'd saved 3, spent them now. Good. Stop spending. One of the mock villains tried to make it a show. He leaped onto a table and posed. Surrender your children to. Momo snapped, off the table, and the tone patients obeyed without knowing why. He blinked, looked at his shoes, and stepped down, chastened by tone, not force. She met Izuku's glance. We don't feed theater. The rest turned into a walk. Not a march, this are for uniforms. A walk you can do with groceries. Izuku and Iida set cadence. Psy Frog led small clusters. Todoroki sheeted wind, not people, to block drones. Bakugo did ask loud on corners and discovered that do you want to live? Say yes. Is category theory compatible with his soul? At checkpoint H, a Hawk evaluator in a suit checked boxes without smiling much. You didn't defeat many opponents, she said, a little dry. We made fewer, Izuku said. It's scalable. Her eyes warmed as if she knew what he meant and wasn't allowed to say so. Noted. The buzzer emptied the air. The paw cracked with the examiner's voice, firm and delighted. End of simulation. The applause had the texture of relief. Present Mick whooped himself hoarse. Aizawa yawned as if his heart weren't satisfied. Izuku looked up to the stands where the coin had clicked. Empty now. No chalk anywhere. Namura's posture said later. He nodded to nothing and sat down hard on a crate because sitting is free and masculinity is overrated. Misha appeared with a stool and a bottle of water that had decided hydration was a political project. She looked him over with the precise kindness of a room checking its windows. Shard pool. Rescue. Null 3, Step 1, Reconstruction 1. Protection. Null 3 on the gate. No steps. No reconstruction. Namecraft on myself. No domination. He blew out a breath. No performances I didn't need. But she said, approval like shade in summer. We all saw you, not grandstand. He grinned despite everything. Bakugo grandstood ethically. Don't tell him, she said, which was hilarious because he already knew and hated how much he liked it. Results. The grading took just long enough for people to learn patience. Students sat in the stands, hair damp with mist, bodies wearing relief. A Hawk rep handed Momo a printed note. Loop logs clean. Consent rate 100% for conscious performers. Thank you for saving my ankle from a lawsuit. K. Momo pretended to be all business and failed adorably. The curtain of light became a scoreboard. Names glowed in ruthless diplomacy. Izuku's Kamita restraint he'd practiced. Pass, next to his. Pass for most of 1A. Pass for Iida, a cheer he tried to swallow and choked on. Pass for Bakugo, a snarl you could hang a medal on. Pass for Todoroki, steam and a smile. Pass for Momo, of course. And an unexpectedly elegant commendation for innovative non-coercive incident architecture with a tiny icon that looked exactly like Misha's portable shade. The examiner in green stepped forward, mic in hand. Special remarks, she said. Midoriya Izuku, your tactic of consent beacons and windows demonstrated how to multiply competence in crowds. Yayoi Rozumama documentation and consent discipline exemplary. Bakugo Katsuki asking loudly is still asking. We appreciate your volume. Iida Tanyakadance is contagious. Teach it. Todoroki showed a minimal property damage. We see you. The crowd laughed. It did not feel like a roast. It felt like a city having a thought out loud. Aizawa gave the smallest, proudest nod a human can give without getting written up by HR for affection. Sir Night Eye caught Izuku in the tunnel afterward with something like warmth disguised as bureaucracy. You neutralized a system without violating theatrical intent, he said, dry as tea. You also did not respond to the provocation in the stands. Good. I felt the coin, Izuku admitted, keeping his voice for the wall. So did we, Namura said, joining like a moral of the story. Signal origin bounces through 3 intermediaries. We have a plate. Go home. Window at the station tonight. Izuku asked Misha, reflexive now. Yes, she said. I will bring arches. He offered his hand. She took it. Boundary. Bridge. Window. Afterwards. Yue's front steps were cleaner than they deserved to be. A frog towel waved somewhere in the parents section. Inko's face glowed with the relief of a woman who had learned to breathe in public without passing out. Izuku hugged her without cracking a rib. License, he said into her hair. Soup, she said into his shirt. At the dorms, classmates crashed into couches. Kaminari performed a dramatic reading of his own mistakes. Jiru put him on beat with 2 taps to his knee. Sai ribbited at the exact right moment to punctuate a zero story. Class 1 had the smell of a bench that had learned to hold weight. Bakugo slammed a palm on the table between Izuku and a bowl of chips like a lawyer objecting to happiness. Don't make a religion out of asking, he grumbled. Just keep doing it because it worked. That's the plan, Izuku said, popping a chip. Bakugo stared at him, then did the tiniest, most feral nod. Fine. Todoroki leaned on a wall like a sensible architectural feature. I like the windows, he said. They made the fire pretend to be polite. They make people pretend first, Misha said, joining with a bottle of barley tea. Then they remember it isn't pretending. Momo opened the CLV3 case and held up a printout for the 4 of them. Loop V3 exam logs. Under it. Ask timestamps, yes confirmations, pause calls. Evidence of a city taught to prefer choice. Izuku took a pen and wrote in the margin where only they would see. No performances you don't need. Add it to practice, Misha said, small smile. Not ink. Practice, he agreed. A small interruption. He was halfway to the station later, license and wallet, ribs warm, when the coin taste touched his teeth again. Not the man. A different echo. A young prawny uniform, nervous eye stood at a corner with a Mick and 3 students from another school. He was giving an interview that had started honest and slipped into performance. A leading question dangled. Wouldn't it be faster to just take control? Izuku did not step into the frame. Windows don't ask for applause. He caught the pro's eye on the periphery and tapped his own wrist with the loop's ask motion. Then he pointed at the students and rolled a hand. Ask them. The pro blinked, got it, turned the mic. Do you feel safer when we ask? Yes, one of the kids said instantly. I can move my feet better if my heart got to vote. The coin taste faded. The interview became boring and therefore perfect. At the station, Misha unfolded a stool next to his and set down a paper bag that smelled like sesame. Arches, she said, pleased. Windows, he said. They ate with companionable silence and the buzz of a city cooling. Across the street, a janitor with a clipboard wiped a chalk smudge that hadn't quite been there. He looked over, met Izuku's eyes, tapped the brim of an imaginary hat, and kept moving. Cities notice. A brief. In the hall with blue turchestonite shaped like the exam tunnel, Anno sat on the rail, as if thrones had always been a misunderstanding. You refuse 3 crowns, Anno said. Points, spectacle, and command. I wanted them, Izuku admitted. For a second each. That's enough to be dangerous, Anno said. You were dangerous, well. Izuku chewed the floor with a sneaker that his mother had saved for by clipping coupons. They keep testing with that phrase. They want your house to install a lock, Anno said. It's simpler to worship a door with a keyhole. I'll keep windows, Izuku said. Keep them ugly, Anno said, pleased. Pretty windows attract tourists. Ugly ones withstand storms. Izuku laughed. Bakugo asked loudly. But Anno said. A loud neighbor is still a neighbor. The hall faded into the apartment smell of hot soup. Inko ladled him something that did paperwork inside your bones. He ate, then opened the green notebook. License exam notes. Rescue. Consent beacons worked under clock. Null on thermal relay equals lawful hack. Coordinate with fire code. Active phrase flag. Report to Namura. Protection. Null on feedback gate for clarity. No spend on opponents. Ask loud tactic replicable. Media. Don't feed theater. Redirect to outcomes. Practice vow. No performances I don't need. Lived once today. Repeat. Cult. Voice injections. Coin echo. Treat as weather. Architect rooms anyway. Team. Windows make people remember manners. Keep giving them places to be good. He underlined neighbors and drew a little bridge. Every time he tells himself he won't. Every time he does. The house under his ribs laughed once, approving, then fell asleep. Outside, somewhere in a small room that thinks it's a church, a tidy knot man placed a coin on a table and frowned at its failure to be a lever. He would try again. He had to. The problem with neighbors is that they multiply quietly. Inside, a boy with a license in his wallet and vows in his skin planned another boring miracle for morning. Windows. Arches. Bridges. No command. No crown. Only practice. Izuku's license lived on the fridge with a grocery list and a frog towel. Inko had taped it there like a St. Cartprid, practical, no candles required. Dinner Friday, she declared, sliding gyoza onto a plate with ceremonial gravity. Invite your window person. Misha, he said, warmth sneaking into the bend of the name. I'll ask. Ask, Inko echoed, soft approval threaded with amusement. You do that part well. He texted. Misha replied with a square of characters that meant yes without wasting ink. He grinned at the fridge until the license forgave him and let him be a teenager. In the lab, the air smelled like solder and statutes. Momo had the consent loop v3.1 laid out under a magnifier. Same wrist wrap, new consent light, a faint pulsing glyph that only the wearer and the subject could see. Visual reassurance, she said. It tells you you're still the boss. Misha tuned a micro brace inside the portable window frame. Lattice flowed in her hands like a language with all the grammar left in. 8-second deploy was good. I want 7, she decided. Places should be faster than panic. Izuku wrote a tiny here in the loop's memoria breadcrumb, only the 2 signers would feel. If you drift, he said, you drift back. Neighborhoods need landmarks, Misha agreed. The Kugo crashed through the doors with the dignity of a storm that has decided to arrive on time. All right, he growled, tossing a bottle of water onto the bench. Who's teaching me to ask so loud the crowd says yes just to shut me up? Momo arched an eyebrow. We can build you a polite megaphone. I am the megaphone, he shot back, then, lower. But if you've got a trick that makes do you want to live? Sound like a question. Cadence, Izuku said. 3-beat. You're great at count-ins. Bakugo scowled in a way that meant he agreed. Fine. We'll rehearse. No cameras. Misha hid a smile. No performances you don't need. Bakugo pretended not to hear that and absolutely did. First patrol with a license felt like a secret handshake with the city. Mirio walked him through a market street where the vendors knew heroes' names and the heroes knew who sold the good sesame buns. No capes, Mirio said, power walking sincere. All smiles. Ask more than you tell. At a corner, a vendor yelled, thief more habit than crisis. A teenager sprinted with a basket of fruit in his arms and life running ahead of him with bad timing. Izuku turned, didn't step, and got in front by choosing the shortest line between 3 bodies and a crate. Hey. He called. Do you want a different ending? The kid's shoes stuttered over cobble. He skidded, eyes doing math, shoes can't pass. 2 apples, Izuku said to the vendor, already pulling money from a thin wallet. This one's on me. Mirio nodded, large and friendly. And ya help us carry the empty crates. 3 trips. Make it even. The kid's shoulders reset from guilty to useful. He nodded, cheeks furious with relief. The vendor Shrigeddlesses paid by story and bellowed to the street that kindness counted as currency. Mirio bumped Izuku's shoulder. Licensed. Barely used it, Izuku said. That's the point, Mirio said. He used reconstruction once on a wheel wobble, 2 fingers convincing a bolt to remember Titan shard. He saved the rest like a man counting candles in a storm. The city announced a pilot open streets day for the ward. Cars off, chalk on, food stalls, music without bass that scares dogs. Namura's name anchored the permit. Sir Night Eye's signature haunted the margins. UA got an official line item. Student heroes. Crowd architecture. Momo framed it. They rehearsed the consent net. Momo's phrase for a honeycomb of beacons and windows placed at corners and bottlenecks. Each node could ask, glow, and say here to anyone who'd agreed once already. It was not a fence. It was a map. Language on the placards, Momo said, pointing to printable PDFs on a screen. Say yes if you want help. We'll ask before we touch. Pause is available. Fonts, Misha murmured, swapping one sansera for another like a surgeon changing instruments. We do not shout in topography. Bakugo, reading a sample card, muttered the words under his breath, testing if they fit in his mouth. Yeah, he decided, grudging. I can yell this. Todoroki peered at the mesh layout, chin in hand. If a drone tries to harass from above, I can cool its rotor air. It won't crash. It will. Regret. You're learning to be mean to weather, Misha observed, approving. Thank you, he said, serious, and then realized it was a joke and almost smiled. Friday afternoon, Inko straightened placemats like she was calibrating instruments. Misha arrived at the door early on purpose and rang once like a polite idea. Izuku's stomach did that ride drop where you can name every bolt as it passes. Welcome, Inko said, and there wasn't an ounce of performance in it. She held out her hands. Misha offered hers, palms up like a person who'd read the room. Shoes off, Tion, Inko decreed. And nobody is allowed to be clever until after dumplings. They ate. Misha praised the crisp. Inko asked what kind of work you do when your job is to make places. Edges, Misha said, simple as water. People behave around edges. Izuku tried to disappear into the chair and failed because joy is an immodest garment. When Misha left, Inko watched her go with the attention you use on weather and suns. House with windows, she murmured. Good. She's. Arches, Izuku offered, face hot. Then you'll stand, Inko said, pleased, and did not tease him because good mothers don't poke at scaffolds still learning to be load-bearing. Open streets woke with shock and speakers and friendly uniforms. Present Mick hosted because there is no universe where he doesn't. Namura moved like a chess piece that knew the board. Sir Night Eye adjusted a cord cover by 2 centimeters and saved 3 sprained ankles, faded penciled in. UA students wore staff badges and comfortable shoes. Momo carried a clipboard that frightened laziness. Misha wore the window pack and a jacket the color of shade. Izuku stood at the first consent net node with a sign that said yes is an option and a pen for notes he never got to. It was working. It was boring, good boring. Dogs sniffed. Toddlers toddled. People practiced being neighbors in public. At 11:24 a.m., the coin clicked. It was a cheap sound that managed to be expensive. Izuku tasted pennies behind his molars. On the main stage, a visiting community organizer raised a mic. He'd come to talk about block grants. He hadn't come to get used. Between words, something slid into the sound. Not a voice, at first. A cadence. A rhythm that loved knees. Neighbors, the organizer said, warm. Breathe in. Then Neil said another voice that wasn't one. Heads turned, bodies wavered, knees quivered, permission confused itself with command in a space 3 syllables wide. Windows, Izuku said, already moving. Misha's hand hit the deploy. Shade sprang like law. Momo lifted her megaphone. We are asking. If you want to stand, say yes. Yes ants worried 100 throats, messy, unison by goodwill. Bakugo leaped onto a crate like a municipal preacher and roared, "If you want to stay on your feet, say yes." Yes. The rhythm and the sound looked for a lock. Izuku drew null in the air, tiny, surgical, and pressed it on the phase link that synced the rogue Q with the pause compressor. 3 seconds of broken math. Now he told the crew on comms. The sound tech, underpaid, overcompetent, yanked an XLR and punched a mute. The organizer blinked, shook his head, and, because he was decent and confused, glanced at Izuku. "You're good," Izuku called, steady. "Keep talking about grants." The man swallowed and did public service like a hero. He talked about boring money for sidewalks, while a war for knees fizzled out of spite. Namura's voice hit Izuku's earpiece like an answer key. Origins bouncing. 2 repeaters on lamp poles, 1 in a food truck generator. "Sir has the plate." Sir Night Eye replied as if rhythm itself had sinned. "Unit 3, remove the generator." "Unit 4, lamp pole 2, base panel, right screw is stripped. Left is a liar." Izuku didn't hunt gadgets. That wasn't his job. He guarded a room. He walked the front line with a smile. He meant, "If you want a break from crowds, say yes." People said yes without knowing why. It felt good. The consent net hummed soft. The beacons reminded feet how to be civil. On block 3, an older man's breath ran away from him and wouldn't come back. A granddaughter panicked the helpful way, clutching too tight. Momo knelt. "Do you want help?" 2 taps. Pause. Shoulders softened without surrender. The man remembered how to count to 4. The drone pivoted overhead like a nosy gull. Todoroki looked up at it the way you look at a faucet that won't stop. The air around its rotors got a little gentler, then a lot disciplined. The drone flailed and then discovered it could land without perishing. The pilot, somewhere hiding, swore into a shirt. At noon, the tidy knot man made his one mistake. He tried a voice. "Command me to live," the organizer said, eyes glazing, for exactly 1 syllable. Izuku was already on the stage stairs, lungs ready. He didn't step. He didn't grab the mic. He asked the room. "If you want him to choose, say yes." Yes cracked like the sky deciding to be blue. The coin man's rhythm stumbled on consent like a drunk tripping over a curb. The organizer swallowed and remembered his name. "We're raising money for shade sales on the playground. So you can choose to sit without burning," Misha added into Izuku's mic, which he had politely not stolen and had politely been handed. The crowd laughed, not at anyone, with. Namura's hand went up from the far corner like a diver surfacing with breath. 2 uniforms peeled a case from a pole base that shouldn't have had a case. A tech in a staff vest unplugged a disguised transmitter from a generator with the practiced irritation of someone who hates cheap gear that breaks laws. The tidy knot man did not appear. He did something worse. He left. The coin taste lifted. The crowd rediscovered funnel cake. Izuku checked his shard pool. Rescue room budget had been 5. He'd spent null equals 3, reconstruction equals 0, step equals 0, namecraft for self-binding. He logged it on his tongue and then on Momo's clipboard. Bakugo thumped his shoulder with a hand that pretended to be a shove. "Ask loud worked." "You were a megaphone," Izuku said solemnly. Bakugo bared his teeth in happiness, which is how some boys admit a compliment heard in the right places. Report later. Namura told them when the after-action circle formed 2 hours and 10,000 small decisions later. "Today we won by boring. You'll put that in your diary with pride." Her gaze softened for a breath at Izuku. "Good cut on the phase link." "Systems," he said. "But boy," she said, and then made a face as if she hadn't meant to let the maternal leak out. "Don't quote me." "Wouldn't dare," he said, and everybody dared to laugh. They took down the net at sunset. Chalkheart surrendered to shoes and wind. President Mick hugged every practitioner of boring within arm's reach and lost his voice to gratitude. The market returned to street. The street returned to city. The janitor with the clipboard walked by, saw a chalk crest half drawn at a drain, and wiped it with 2 efficient swipes. "Windows," Misha said again, because some words turn into ritual without anyone writing them down. "Windows," Izuku agreed. They debriefed at UA seated on mats because Aizawa refused to let them pretend couches put brains in chairs. Sir Night Eye ran the numbers like a stern poet. Movements per minute dropped 23% within the net. Time to calm halved in shaded zones. Incident rate near 0 when Ask Loud was used within 10 meters. Momo highlighted the loop logs. Todoroki quietly showed a heat map. Rotor temps of 3 drones gracefully cooling to safety. Iida drew a diagram of cadence and got embarrassed when everyone actually took notes. But Aizawa said at the end, which, from him, was indulgent. "Do not get clever. You say that like a dare," Kaminari said. "You hear that like a dare," Aizawa replied dryly. "Reflection essays due tomorrow. 1 page. How I made it easier to be kind." Bakugo groaned. "Homework about feelings." "Outcomes," Aizawa corrected. "Use nouns." Misha came to dinner again that night because Inko had made twice the correct amount by accident. They ate gyos and told important lies like I'm fine and then corrected them with I was scared and me too. Inko listened like a room with good acoustics. After dishes, Misha stood in the doorway with her shoes in one hand. Boundary, she said, reminding herself as much as anyone. Windows, Izuku said and offered a hand. She took it without looking around for witnesses. On the landing, he stopped because a thought had arrived with its luggage. Misha, he said, cheeks warm with honesty, I don't want a crown. I don't either, she said. Crowns are helmets that pretend to be jewelry. I want courts and kitchens, he blurted, which was not poetry and therefore truth. Then we will need chairs, she decided, and the joke hit him so clean he laughed until the stairs forgave them for lingering. They dreamed the hall with blue torches into something like the underside of a bridge, cool and humming. Anos leaned against a column like patience that had learned posture. They will try names next, Ano said without preface. Not faces. Names. Through names? Izuku asked, stomach tightening like a knot reminding you it exists. Through names are weapons and hospitals, Ano said. Consent names are doors with bells. The tidy man will try to write you into a shape and then argue the shape proves he's right about you. How do I refuse? Izuku asked, not ashamed to need the lesson. By introducing yourself, Ano said, pleased. Before he tries to. Names you give intentionally, repeated libicum doors you can lock from the inside. Izuku thought of vows spoken on camera and in kitchens and in alleyways. I already started, he realized. You did, Ano said, a crown of relief hiding in his smile. Keep windows. Keep ugly. Keep practicing. The first spell of an ethical mage is hello. Izuku laughed. Hello, he said to the room, and a dozen doors chose to be friendly. Saturday morning, Inko smacked his calf with a dish towel as he reached past the fridge for the loop case. Breakfast first, neighbor, she scolded. You can't ask a city to behave on an empty stomach. He obeyed breakfast because breakfast outranks metaphysics. On the way out, a text Pinjadunknan number, same static you get when a coin flips in a pocket. The day of small laws is a king's hobby, it said. Command once and end the tedium. Izuku didn't reply. He forwarded it to Namura, who responded with we'll feed it to a warrant and a shrimp emoji because inside jokes keep prosecutors happy. In his green notebook he wrote. Open streets. Consent net plus Windows worked. Null on phase link effective, temporary, polite. Ask loud. Replicated. Bakugo license to yell ethically. Namecraft. Add Sikshan consent names versus true names. Practicing hello as spell. Cult. Voice injection thwarted. Repeaters confiscated. Coinman still weather. Practice vow. No performances I don't need lived again. Home. Inko plus Misha equals chairs. The underlined neighbors and drew a small bridge because habits are scaffolding and who cares who sees. The house under his ribs laughed once, early, like it had chores and was thrilled about them. And the boy who refused a throne recruited 1,000 small laws to his side. Polite, sturdy, dull on purpose, exactly, the kind that outlived kings. The week started with a word and a bowl of rice. Hello, Izuku said to the apartment the way Anos had taught him, like a key you announce before you turn it. Inko looked up from the stove. Say hello to your vegetables too, she advised. They're doing a lot of work. He bowed to the scallions. They forgave him for everything. In the lab, Momo had converted a corner into a mailroom. Boxes look grey with orange labels stacked in neat towers. ConsentNet Field Kit V1. Each held a window frame and 3 carbon fiber panels, a loop V3.1 pair, laminated ask yes pause cards, and a one-page workflow that would make a lawyer cry happy tears. First shipment to 6 hospitals and 2 ambulances, she said, affixing barcodes with the care of someone sticking gold stars on the future. Dr. Sato promised to be boring about it publicly and evangelical about it privately. Misha soldered a contact in the window hinge with small, sure movements. We cut deploy to 7 seconds, she reported, pleased. Arches like moving fast. The Kugo elbowed through with a coil of caution tape around his neck like a fashion choice. We doing the Tech Expo? Momo tilted a brochure. City Tech Week Civic Tools Pavilion. Their slot. Consent architecture. Making places behave. Present Mick had drawn a tiny speaker with hearts on it next to their name. Namura asked us to bring a demo, Momo said. Night Eye added a footnote. Expect nonsense. Nonsense is cop for cult, Bakugo translated. I'll bring my polite voice. Ask loudly, Izuku said, and Bakugo scowled like a man proud against his will. The expo lived in a glass hall that had decided to be a greenhouse for ideas. Booths displayed drones that didn't want to be creepy, smart hydrants, city budget dashboards that almost spoke human. Somewhere, a robot arm made pancakes and ethics won a battle with joy. Their booth faced a walkway with good light. Momo set the ConsentNet node on a soft plinth. Misha clipped the window panels together with a click that sounded like a room finding its corners. Izuku checked the loop led spulsing paleth and rehearsed quietly. Hello. I'm Midoriya Izuku. May I show you how this works? Present Mick MC apostrophe D the main stage, Mick all the way happy. Aizawa prowled the perimeter with the aura of a tired dad at a science fair. Namura, not in uniform, read the room like a map that owed her money. Sir Night Eye adjusted a cable tie and saved 3 seconds of panic future you would have had to pay back. The morning was good boredom. Nurses from Ward 8 asked sharp questions and took sharper notes. A city planner asked if the window could keep drunk uncles from wandering off. We can suggest a direction, Misha said. We cannot cure uncles. A kid in a frog hoodie said pause into a loop and grinned when it didn't shock him. Then a booth 2 aisles over turned on a sign that said identity solutions. True name verification. Izuku's molars tasted pennies. The booth looked like a startup had eaten a church and tried to hide the bones. Light bars in an O shape. A voice demo with a clean female voice. Say your name into the circle and we'll show you your true identity signature. Momo's eyebrows went academic. Unregulated voice biometric, she said. This will go well for someone else. Or bad for us, Bakugo growled. Coin boy bait. The man in tidy clothes and tidy hair manned the table. He rolled a coin absent-mindedly against knuckles that knew how to hold smaller, meaner shapes. His smile stopped 2 centimeters short of his eyes. Neighbors, he called, gentle as a knife. We're helping you find yourselves. Hello, Izuku said to Momo and Misha, low. First spell. First anchor. Hello, Misha returned, subtly. She had already tuned the window to deploy with one hand. Momo slid the loop case closer with a movement that read as tidying. The demo started roping people. Say your name. Watch the screen. The waveform bloomed. Marketing words composted into mysticism. People love a mirror. A teen in a varsity jacket stepped up. Takeshi. He spoke into the ring. The screen drew a flower of his vowels and spat a sigil pleasant nonsense that tried very hard to mean something. Your true signature, said the tidy man, reverent. Now it will answer when we call. Misha's hand moved a centimeter toward the trigger on the window pack. Izuku didn't need his root sense to feel the angle sharpen. Friends, the tidy man said, as if in prayer, voice pitched to carry 1 aisle too far. Imagine a city where names work. Where you work when we say you do. A small shiver went through the air like a ripple across an overheated pot. The O-light pulsed. Speakers hummed a call and response cadence. The device wasn't a quirk. It was a contract poorly dressed as a product. Namura's chin lifted. Sir Night Eye's head turned 3 degrees. Present Mick smile dimmed a watt. Now the tidy man called with perfect afternoon warmth, let's call our neighbor. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku felt the pull knit at his muscles, at his outline. Not a graben invitation couched his claim. We say your name. You answer because that is how names work. That's what the tech was leaning on. A social law pretending to be a natural one. He didn't null it yet. He didn't step. He said his first spell. He climbed their little demo stage they'd set up with tape marks and a stool, took the mic present Mick had loaned them for the day, and smiled like a kitchen table. Hello, he said, and the room looked up. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Here is what my name means when you use it. He lifted a hand, palm open. He didn't try to imbue the paw with magic. He treated the room like a neighbor and introduced himself on purpose. My name means. You are asking me for my attention, not taking it. It means. If I answer, I am choosing. If I don't, you will not assume. Momo, voice low into her lapel mic feeding the room monitors. Consent net node linked. The soft beacons blinked. A small glyph pulsed on the screen behind him. Yes, waiting politely. Midoriya Izuku said again, speaking like he was writing in his green notebook. When you use it, you agree not to command. If you want my help, say please or say yes when I scan I will ask. 100 people chuckled because the word please is a spell everyone learned as a child and forgot to honor. He let the laugh land and kept going. I consent to being called Izuku, Midoriya, her neighbor. I do not consent to being ordered by either. I will never answer to king. The tidy man's coin stopped mid-roll. His smile held. His eyes did math. Izuku angled the mic so the sound tech hand, by extension, the palled, keep the introduction in the system. Not a hack. A policy. A durable hello. If you agree to that meaning when you use my name, he said, gentle but not soft, say yes. The room said yes. Not all of them. Enough. The consent net he ghosted through the paw blinked once, then settled into the collective here that meant this room chooses this. He looked at the tidy man. You may call me, he said, not defiant neighborly. You will not command me. The man tilted his head as if regarding an unusual painting. Then he made a show of delight. How democratic, he said. What if your neighbors need to be led? I consent, Izuku said. Or not at all. The man clicked his coin once. The O-light pulsed. The speakers tried to speak in you will. Izuku burned alone clean linen at the man, not at the device, but at the claim their algorithm made. A name obligates the named. For 3 seconds, that bad law took a walk. Now would be a time for a demo present, Mick said brightly from the stage catwalk, voice deliberately mischief. UA will show you a polite room. Misha deployed the window in 7 seconds, cover panels snapping into shade that told the crowd where to stand. Momo held the loop up. Do you want to try pause? She asked a volunteer who had been drawn by the weirdness and now looked as if he'd like to not be weird for a minute. Yes, the man said, eager for normal. 2 taps. Pause. His shoulders dropped. The room's shoulders dropped with him. The O device hummed again, trying to pull air through a lock it no longer controlled. Sir Night-Eye murmured into a radio. Namura walked over to the booth with her badge still in her pocket and the law in her eyebrows. Vendor license, she said to the tidy man. And your compliance documentation for true name verification. Oh, we're just a demo, he said pleasantly. Then it will be easier to turn off, she said. His coin clicked twice. An employee reached for a switch. Misha's window cast a narrow line of shade across his wrist like a polite boundary. He paused long enough to realize he didn't want to see what happened if he didn't. He turned it off. The ring cooled. The tidy man bowed in exact agree. You win today, he said to Izuku. But a city gets tired of asking. A city gets good at it, Izuku said. If you let it practice. He left the coin on the table. Not a quarter. A token stamped with the Dellsgate crest, smaller than a fingernail. Namura palmed it like useless evidence. Sir Night-Eye bagged it like interesting trash. Thank you, Izuku told the room into the mic, the spell anchored now where he wanted it. On hello and yes. For practicing with me. People clap the way crowds clap when they feel like they didn't get tricked. After, Momo stacked pamphlets like shields and sent gentle emails to the hospital admins who had wandered over with frowns and left with questions. Misha rolled the window panels into the case, fingers quick. You were a door, she said, satisfied. I was a doorknob, he corrected. Easy to use. Slightly ugly. She laughed quietly. Perfect. The expo ended without anyone being arrested on television, a victory in Namura's book. She met them by the freight door as staff underpaid and overnice tore down signage. You didn't give him what he came for, she said, pocketing the token. He wanted a clip of you obeying your name. He got a clip of you introducing it. Is that admissible? Izuku asked, already constructing an internal statute. In the court of public habit. Namura said. It's case law. Sir Night-Eye slid a manila folder into Momo's hands. We have a municipal pilot expanding consent net to 2 transit stations and 1 courthouse vestibule. Submit your invoice with documentation to procurement. Use the word maintenance in your itemization. It doubles your odds of being paid. Momo made a noise engineers make when budgets grow legs. We will write so much maintenance. Without lying, Night-Eye said. Without lying, she echoed, abashed and ferociously excited. Bakugo wandered over with a paper cone of caramel nuts he had absolutely paid for. That true name garbage, he said, jaw clicking. I hate it. Same, Izuku said. If anyone tries it on me, I'm gonna blow up their O, he added. Ask loudly first, Misha said, because cause and effect is a public good. His glare softened despite itself. I will. 2 days later, Bakugo learned why. A 3-car pile-up on an elevated ramp. Mirio and Izuku scrambled traffic into manners. Bakugo slid under a crumpled hood on all fours like a beast who had learned to be a brace. A woman inside wheezed, seatbelt choking her. A child in the back sang to herself because Terra needed a job. Hold still, Bakugo said, and his palm flashed microblast aimed to slice the belt away from skin. The woman flinched. The blast nicked her collarbone before Bakugo corrected by a hair. She gasped. The kid stopped singing. Bakugo froze like shame had glued his joints. In that heartbeat, the old version of impish first, think while running nearly came back. Then he did the ugliest, bravest thing. He backed up enough for his eyes to meet the woman's. He took a breath the way Izuku had taught him and made it sound like consent could trust it. I'm Bakugo Kitsuki, he said, and the name came out like a challenge he refused to make a fight. Can I cut the belt? I can do it better if you say yes. The kid whispered, say yes, mama, like fairy godmother advice. Yes, the woman said, and it was not surrender. It was agency. Bakugo nodded. He placed, aimed, asked his hands to be good. The microblast sang a small clean note. The belt fell. He didn't whoop. He didn't grin. He said, thank you, like a vow. The bystander had filmed the first nick. They filmed the ask too. Guess which clip went viral? Both. But the second ate the first in the algorithm because even the internet gets tired of blood and likes an apology that acts. In the dorm later, he tossed his phone at Izuku like a grenade. They're calling me Ask Loud. It's good, Izuku said, honest. I'm not doing it for them, Bakugo snapped, meaning it. I know, Izuku said. Do it because. Bakugo stared at the wall. That kid. Stopped singing when I heard her mom. She started again, Izuku said, softly. When you asked. Bakugo made a noise that might have been a laugh if you turned it sideways and taught it manners. Shut up, he said, with more love than profanity. Paperwork grew legs. Momo and Night Eye danced a very polite tango with procurement. Maintenance appeared on 3 invoices. Consent net kits shipped on pallet stamped city property. Dr. Sato sent a blurry photo of an nurse using a loop on a man mid-tantrum. The caption read. Said pause. We all believed him. The tidy knot man changed tactics. Not chalk. Not coins. Emails to a city listserv. A neighbor's guide to names. They were short paragraphs disguised as community advice. Always answer when your name is called. It's polite. It keeps the city running. Signed, D. Izuku forwarded one to Namura. She replied with a link to a city PSA filmed on a bench outside the courthouse. It was just him in a hoodie with a sore kind of smile. Hello, he said to the lens. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Sometimes people will ask for your attention with your name. Decide what your name means before they do. If someone uses it like a rope, you can ignore them. If someone uses it like a bell and you want to open the door, you can say yes. Both are polite. Bakugo stood 2 feet out of frame and shouted. And if they're yelling, they're probably say yes if you want to live. The camera shook with laughter. The city liked the clip because it was 2 boys and a policy and no sermon. The cult tried one more thing that month. A panel at a small tech meetup titled New Civics. Opt-in, authority. The tidy man put his coin on the podium. He said the words neighbor and king like twins. Izuku went uninvited with Misha and Momo and a loop and a window in a backpack. He sat in the front row and raised his hand like he had in middle school when teachers still thought the quiet boy would never talk. When called, he stood and introduced himself first. Hello. I'm Midoriya Izuku. He could feel Ano smiling in the part of his head that stored torches. I am not opting into being commanded when I say my name. I am opting into being asked. Here is what my name does when you use it. He walked through it again. He didn't call the man a liar. He built a room and invited people to notice how it felt to be inside it. He ended with a questiono trap, real. Will you try this for a week? He asked the room. Introduce yourself to places. Write what your name means and ask your neighbors to say yes with you. If it makes your life worse, I'll buy you coffee and we'll argue. If it makes your life better, teach someone. 3 hands went up, then 10. The tidy man watched, coin still. He did not smile. He did not frown. He left early. After, in the corridor, Namura appeared from a fire door as if spontaneously generated by policy. Nice door, she said. Ugly, Izuku said. Just how I like them, she agreed, then added, softer, you're making it hard for them to write you into a villain. Good, he said. It's boring. The more boring, she said, and vanished into a stairwell that smelled like bleach and government. Anos found him that night in the hall with blue torches that had decided to look like a bus stop shelter at 2 a.m. Plastic roof, humming light, a map scuffed by keys. You did the thing, Ano said, folding himself onto the bench with mythic indifference. You taught a room what your name means. I wanted to null the device and go home, Izuku admitted. You did that too, Ano said. And you remembered you're also a teacher. Izuku stared at his hands. They're going to escalate. He's going to try to call me when I'm tired. He will call when someone is bleeding, Ano said. He will offer you a crown with an IV drip threaded through it. He angled his head. Say hello first. Hello, Izuku said to the imagined room where a crown and a hospital and a boy might collide. My name means no before you think it means yes. Ano's mouth went wry. Good masonry. Thanks, Izuku said, and the bench forgave him for making metaphors in public. Friday dinner again. Inko had overcorrected with dumplings and declared leftovers a religion. Misha set chopsticks down with ceremony and a smile. After, they washed dishes in processional silence. On the landing, with shoes in hand, Misha looked at him full on and offered something as simple as a doorbell. Hello, she said. I'm Misha. When you use my name, you are asking for my attention. I will choose. If I don't, you will not sulk. He swallowed around the ridiculous, sacred joy of it. Hello. I'm Izuku. Same rules. She nodded, satisfied. They did not kiss. They agreed on a hallway policy. It was better. He watched her go, then turned his phone over. A text. You will get tired. He forwarded it to Namura with a yawn emoji and put the phone face down. He wrote in the green notebook. Tech Expo. True name trap countered by hello plus consent net through PA. Null on name obligates pulse. Effective, temporary. Shipments. CN kits to hospitals. Maintenance plan approved. Dr. Sato. Hard convert. Bakugo. Live ops Nick ask loud repentance in action. Better than a speech. Meme will pass. Habit will remain. Names. My names meaning publicly introduced. Invite others to do the same. Consent names true names. First spell. Hello. Dot. Dot. Cult. Emails. Panels. Coin tokens. Treat as weather. Build rooms. Dot. Dot. Practice vow. No performances. I don't need Surviv 3 microphones. Dot. He drew the bridge. He added a tiny door. He wrote hello under it in small letters and closed the book. The house under his ribs laughed once, sleepy and proud. And the boy who refused a throne taught a city to knock before entering in polite, stubborn, ugly door at a time.